Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I have decided to create a collection of fanfiction novels in audiobook format. If you would like to access the collection, you can purchase it through one of the following platforms. Patreon or Ko-Fi. You will find both links in the description. After completing your payment, you will automatically receive a link to a private Telegram channel that has a great collection of fanfiction audiobooks in audio format. This is a one-time payment that grants lifetime access to the existing collection. Please note that the collection is continuously expanding. I regularly add new audiobooks over time, so the library keeps growing. If you would like to update a novel or add a new one, you must subscribe to my Patreon. Depending on the tier you select, you will be able to request a specific number of chapters weekly, which I will then produce in audiobook format.
201. Urim intervenes. Sukuna poured all his cursed energy into his body to strengthen his physical strength. Maki, who was faster, was the first to go behind Sukuna. The soul-splitting katana in her hand was suddenly pulled out from her waist, blocking Sukuna's retreat. Yuji rushed to Sukuna's side and surrounded him tightly. Bang! Sukuna took Yuji's heavy punch without any pain. At the same time, he subconsciously lowered his head and narrowly avoided the sweeping blow. As long as Yuji's attack failed to produce a black flash, it could be basically ignored by him. Therefore, he focused more on guarding against Maki and the extremely sharp katana in her hand. Maybe it was an illusion, but Maki's speed seemed to be a bit faster than before. Could it be related to that green energy attached to her body? Jujutsu Kaisen actually has such a powerful secret technique. While thinking, Sukuna grinned fiercely and thrust his legs straight into the ground, forming a steady horse stance. He met the attacks from Maki and Yuji with both of his hands. Bang, bang, bang. The punches were so fast that they left after images. The air was filled with the sound of bodies colliding violently. Sweat and blood splattered in the center of the battle between the three. Sukuna became more and more excited as he fought, grinning wildly. You don't know, do you? The two-faced, four-armed demon is one of my titles. So, the saying that two fists can't beat four hands doesn't apply to me. Maki snorted coldly, and just as she was about to draw her sword and sweep it across, she suddenly froze, as if she had sensed something. At the same time, Sukuna and Yuji also stopped their fierce fight and turned their heads away. What came into view was a figure in a black robe, emitting a frosty aura. Every time she took a step, the ground behind her would freeze into ice before the next step landed. Icy cursed energy filled the area around her. Yuji and Maki knew that this was a formidable enemy. This person was obviously not an ally of Jujutsu Kaisen. Suddenly, a cold voice sounded. Ice formation, ice fall. In an instant, frost swept across the entire battlefield, and countless ice spikes rose up, stabbing toward Yuji and Maki. As a last resort, the two had to dodge everywhere. The figure in black pulled down the hood that was hiding their face. Urim knelt on one knee and said respectfully, "Sorry, I interrupted your fight." After saying that, Urim glanced unkindly at Kazuma, who was standing on a tall building. She saw a red light flashing in the other person's eyes. Kazuma was grinning. Humph. Urim snorted coldly and looked away. Ever since she had taken over the control of the culling game from Kenjaku, she had been paying close attention to the battle here. From the time Kazuma had appeared until now, apart from using despicable means to sneak attack Sukuna-sama, he had not taken any action. Instead, he just stood on a distant building and watched the show. He must be planning something, and it's something bad for Sukuna-sama. Therefore, she had to act quickly to help Sukuna-sama resolve this farce. Sukuna waved his hand and said casually, "It's okay, you did just right." Sukuna, whose hands were finally freed, smiled sinisterly. He suddenly bent down and squatted, pressing his hands to the ground. In an instant, dense cracks formed within 100 meters. Dismantle. As the words fell, the ground within 100 meters collapsed. The extremely hard concrete was cut into countless neat and smooth blocks. Deadly slashes continued to slash out from the ground, attacking Yuji and Maki. The extremely dense attacks made Yuji and Maki have to dodge with difficulty. But with Urim using her cursed technique in the dark and summoning ice spikes at the right time, the two soon had nowhere to hide. At the critical moment, a huge thorny net made entirely of wood fell over Sukuna and Urim's heads. A huge black shadow instantly enveloped the two of them. Sukuna suddenly looked up and said, "Are you finally willing to take action? I haven't seen you for a while. Do you still like to play tricks like this?" He sneered, slowly stretched out his arm, spread his 5 fingers, and launched a slash. The large wooden net was cut into countless pieces without any resistance. Sukuna smiled contemptuously. It can't even handle a single blow. Suddenly, a huge Rasengan fell from the sky. Its terrifying power made Sukuna frown. "Humph, you are not worthy of facing Sukuna-sama." Urim shouted angrily and used the ice formation to its full output. Snap! The temperature in the sky suddenly dropped to an extreme, and the Rasengan was instantly frozen into a huge ice ball. Kazuma in the sky was also frozen in place. Sukuna raised his hand and swung it. An invisible slash pierced through the sky, cutting vertically. It split Kazuma's body and the clouds in the sky into two. Just as Yuji and Maki were about to exclaim in surprise, a pair of slender hands pressed down on their shoulders. The two turned around and then breathed a sigh of relief. Kazuma? It turns out that was just your clone. That was scary. Urim, who was far away, looked at the 2 wooden stakes falling from the sky and said in disbelief, fake, fake. Sukuna, who had seen this trick before, sneered, it's just the same trick as always. After saying that, he raised his hand and swung it, launching another even more powerful slash at Kazuma's location. The past battles with Kazuma had made him understand one thing. When facing Kazuma, he couldn't compete with him in cursed techniques, especially cursed techniques with super large cursed energy output. The only and most effective way was to chase him relentlessly. Don't give him any chance to perform his cursed technique. Swish. The slash swept across Kazuma's body without a doubt, splitting him in 2 again. However, the next second, Kazuma turned into a wooden stake again. At this moment, everyone's eyes widened. Fake again. So where was Kazuma now? Urim gritted her teeth and looked back at the rooftop in the distance. It was empty. Kazuma had already left. This damn guy. Feeling that he was being teased, Sukuna yelled, "Get out here, you coward, you idiot." Before he could finish his words, Sukuna's pupils shrank sharply, and he felt nervous. Without any hesitation, he dodged quickly. A vortex appeared in the place he was just at, and the space distorted. Click. Blood splattered, and Sukuna's arm fell to the ground. It's this damn space ability again. If he had to name the most frightening thing about Kazuma, it would definitely be this technique of manipulating space. Sukuna used reverse curse technique to grow his arm back. After moving it for a while, he looked at Kazuma, who was walking slowly in the distance, and laughed. You are so ruthless. Aren't you afraid that I won't be able to dodge and let your friend's head be divided? Also, you should be in your true form now, right? Guess. Kazuma stepped forward and said with a smile, but you are the king of curses, how can you die so easily? Noticing a hostile gaze, he turned to Urim, who was glaring at him angrily. Mushroom head, what are you looking at? End the culling game immediately and transfer all the points to me. Otherwise, I will pin the Sukuna-sama you admire to the ground. 60 advanced chapters on patreon.com/alex1000. 202 Outrageous Rule. What did you say? Before Sukuna could speak, Urim stood up and shouted, do you really think you are a match for Sukuna-sama? Have you ever seen Sukuna-sama's peak, you ignorant bastard? Ha ha ha. Sukuna suddenly laughed like crazy, then waved his hand violently, slashing through the air. Swish. The 2 were only 100 meters apart, and the speed of the slash was very fast, slashing towards Kazuma's waist. However, what no one expected was that Kazuma would be even faster. Facing the incoming slash, he suddenly transformed into a streak of golden light and moved to the side, avoiding Sukuna's slash. Boom. The next moment, a terrifying cut was made at the spot where Kazuma was before. Seeing this scene, everyone present was stunned. What did they just see? Sukuna's slash was dodged. It is well known that Sukuna's slashes are so fast that they are almost impossible to catch with the naked eye. Even if Kazuma's eyes were superhuman enough to catch the trajectory of the slash, his body wouldn't have enough time to react. But Kazuma actually did it just now. Yuji and Maki stared at Kazuma, who was walking in the distance. How did he do that? Did he observe the subtle movement of Sukuna raising his hand in advance and dodge it? Huh. Sukuna frowned slightly and looked at Kazuma, who was slowly approaching him with a little surprise. What a fast speed. In 1,000 years, this was the first time he had seen someone dodge his attack simply by relying on speed. Could it be that because of Megami, not only had the power of his slash weakened, but even the speed had been reduced? Sukuna had some doubts in his heart. But no matter what, Kazuma's speed just now was so fast that even he could only catch a yellow glimpse. Kazuma blurted out frivolous words. What? Did you not eat, or do you have kidney deficiency? The strike was so soft and slow as a snail. With the power of the eternal Mangekyo, he could barely catch Sukuna's slash. But the most important thing is that he has already spread seeds all over this battlefield. Ahem, flying thunder god marks. How dare you insult Sukuna-sama like this? The ultimate simp in JJK, Urim, clenched her fists, and her whole body radiated an icy aura. He just luckily dodged a casual attack from you, Sukuna-sama. Sukuna patted her shoulder and took a step forward. He looked at Kazuma with interest and said, I wonder, how many times can you dodge? Cleave. Sukuna waved his hands, and 2 3-meter-long slashes formed an X shape and approached Kazuma through the air. Kazuma's body was as fast as lightning. He dodged the oncoming attack twice in a row. Then he walked slowly towards Sukuna, still calm and composed. This scene once again shocked everyone. Dodged again? It might have been luck once, but this time it was definitely not a simple matter of luck. Sukuna-sama. Kazuma's actions were equivalent to slapping her hard in the face. Sukuna, who was very experienced, didn't care about other people's eyes but was secretly thinking in his heart. Even though Megami was messing around inside him, Kazuma's speed was incredible. What's more, he also has a strange ability to become untouchable. Even if he hits him, the attack will probably pass right through his body. TSK. This damn scoundrel is so hard to kill. There is only one way to hurt or kill Kazuma, and that is to open a domain and launch endless attacks at him. His ability to become untouchable can only last for 5 minutes. But Kazuma is not the only one present. There is Yuji and Maki. Also, Angel, who is in the sky, is eyeing him covetously. Thinking of this, he decided not to continue wasting time. Sukuna-sama, you are not in your prime right now. There is no need to fight these people. Let's retreat first. Urim, whose mind was full of Sukuna, could tell at a glance what Sukuna was thinking at the moment. But Sukuna-sama is extremely proud, so these words must be spoken by her. Sukuna nodded and said, that makes sense. After getting his consent, Urim stepped forward and summoned a small golden bug with a unique appearance. Then she raised her chin, like a proud swan, and scanned everyone with a look that said they were rubbish. Her gaze finally stopped at Kazuma, and she said, you seem to want points very much. Let me see. Not bad. You, who are ranked second, actually have 500 points. That's really impressive. It's a pity that I have twice as many points as you. After beating Kazuma, Urim felt a little better. She wanted to use this to suppress Kazuma and impress Sukuna. Although these points were accumulated by a large number of players who had signed contracts with Kenjaku, the points are in her possession, and that's what matters. As soon as Urim's shocking words came out, Yuji and others quickly fact-checked. As expected, Urim's points were as high as 1,000. And this had happened all of a sudden. This proves that something must have happened before she had arrived here. Mushroom Head, what do you want to do? Facing Yuji's questioning, Urim first knelt on one knee and asked Sukuna for instructions. After getting Sukuna's consent, she smiled sinisterly and said, what do I want to do? Give you a surprise, of course. Urim held up the little golden bug, her eyes extremely crazy. She typed in a command. Suddenly, an emotionless announcement echoed in everyone's ears. Player Urim has consumed 1,000 points and added a new rule. 1. The culling game will end in 10 minutes. If player Kazuma fails to collect 1,000 points before the culling game ends, his body's cursed techniques will be taken away. As soon as these words came out, everyone was stunned. What? How can such a despicable rule be made? This is clearly a blatant targeting. For a moment, everyone turned their eyes to Kazuma. He was still standing there with a calm expression, as if he had not heard the announcement. Sukuna formed seals with his hands and summoned the gigantic Nu. Urim, who was sitting above, did not forget to taunt. This is what happens when you go against Sukuna-sama. You only have 10 minutes left. Don't give up and wait for death easily. Struggle as hard as you can. This is her and Kenjaku's final killing move. At the cost of consuming 1,000 points, she ended the culling game early and used the rules to target Kazuma. In just 10 minutes, it is near impossible to collect 500 points. It is her honor to help Sukuna-sama get rid of such a troublesome person. Seeing Nu carry Sukuna and Urim away, Kazuma sighed. As expected of Urim, I, Uchiha Kazuma, would like to call you the strongest simp. Who in Jujutsu Kaisen is more of a simp than Raime? No wonder he became Sukuna's servant thousands of years ago. However, it is indeed difficult to get 500 points within 10 minutes. Even killing all the players in the area might not be enough. After all, most players don't have many points with them and killing them also doesn't yield much points. 203, it's raining points. However, Urim's actions were also a good thing for him. At least he is now ranked first in points. Judging from the time, Yago should be here soon. Suddenly, his pocket vibrated and a small golden bug flapped its wings and flew into his sight. Ding! Maki has transferred 100 points to you. Kazuma raised his brows slightly and turned to look. Maki clenched her fists and looked worried. She said, sorry, I don't have many points. Hurry. Everyone, give your points to Kazuma. Yuji was so anxious that he was spinning in circles. His points had long been cheated away by that bad woman named Yoroza. Hana slowly floated down from the sky and said apologetically, sorry, I've been hiding in the hotel and don't have any points at all. She felt very ashamed. Kazuma had just saved her life not long ago. If Kazuma wasn't here, she would have foolishly thrown herself into Sukuna's arms. At that time, she would probably die miserably. But now, she can't even help him. As if she had thought of something, she said weakly, but you can rest assured. Angel who is in my body can ensure that you will not be seriously injured or die. A mouth appeared on her face. It's a pity that such a powerful curse technique will be wasted. Damn you, Urim. Maki, with an indifferent expression, could no longer control her emotions and punched the wall behind her. I'm going to kill someone right now. Kazuma is her benefactor. Without Kazuma, she wouldn't be where she is today. There are still 10 minutes left. As long as they can collect 400 points, there is still hope. Therefore, no matter if they are ordinary people, cursed users or cursed spirits, she will not let them go. Kazuma stopped Maki who was leaving with a weapon in hand and said, don't panic, I have the advantage this time. After hearing these words, several people were stunned. Maki forced herself to calm down and asked, do you have any other cards? Kazuma nodded and said, someone will come to give me points soon. He could sense that Yago and the others were very close to him. Yuji hurriedly said, stop joking, you don't have much time left. He believed that since the culling game was about to end, everyone would move towards the edge of the barrier and leave this damn place. Why would someone turn around and come back to give points to Kazuma? Yuta and the others are in another colony, so they can't make it in such a short time. However, the next second, 4 black spots suddenly appeared in the sky above this colony. Then as they got closer and closer, everyone's pupils shrank. Aren't these the 4 disaster curses? Why would they show up at a time like this? Get out of the way. Yago waved his pipe and shouted loudly. Boom! With a loud bang, the earth shook continuously, and dust filled the sky. Kazuma waved his hand to disperse the dust in front of him. He said, "Are you hungry? Do you miss the Tsukuyomi set meal? Why did you appear in this way?" Miss the Tsukuyomi set meal. Upon hearing this, the faces of the 4 disaster curses froze, and cold sweat ran down their backs. Mahito immediately gave Yago a big slap and said, "It's all your fault. You just had to make an appearance like this." Then he smiled at Kazuma and said, "According to what you said, all the old guys in the upper echelons have been invited in. There are actually quite a few powerful sorcerers hiding in the upper echelons. We are exhausted." Yago touched his head and added, "Don't worry, we have beaten them all, just focus on harvesting them." "Well, good job." Kazuma nodded. However, this series of information stunned Yuji and others. The top brass was wiped out by the 4 disaster curses, and the instigator behind this is Kazuma. But it's good this way, they have been annoyed with those old guys for a long time. Hana standing by was shocked in a different way. She didn't know who these people were, nor did she care. But why were these 4 special grade cursed spirits listening to Kazuma so respectfully? It turns out that an outrageous thing like giving away points is actually true. Angel secretly told Hana, "Hana, I can't feel any life from these 4 cursed spirits." Hana's eyes widened. What? As someone who has been with Angel for many years, she knows very well that no matter whether it is a human or a cursed spirit, Angel can see life. This is also why after using Jacob's ladder on Sukuna, she could tell at a glance that he was not dead yet. The 4 disaster curses that were currently lifeless were standing before them in full vigor. Hana asked, "Angel, can you see something?" Angel said, "I can't see clearly, but the state of life and death of the 4 disaster curses is probably related to Kazuma. Perhaps, this mysterious man can help us kill Sukuna. If possible, we can build a good relationship with him." Maki didn't care about the life and death of the higher-ups, but asked anxiously, "So where are those old guys?" Yago glanced at Kazuma in fear and said awkwardly, "Although we can come and go freely without being restricted, those people cannot. So we can't control where they land. They should be scattered all over this colony now. Time is running out, everyone split up." Hearing this, Maki immediately picked up her katana and wanted to turn around and leave. Kazuma grabbed Maki again, and said like he was coaxing a child, "I have many clones, don't be afraid." Maki suddenly understood, and then her face turned slightly red. She was so anxious that she had almost forgotten that Kazuma could clone himself. The next second, Kazuma formed seals with both hands. Multiple shadow clone technique. Bang, bang, bang. Suddenly, hundreds of clones that looked exactly like Kazuma emerged. Oh, so many Kazuma. Yuji couldn't help but exclaim, and curiously stretched out his finger to point at Kazuma's clones that surrounded him. "Kazuma, which one is your real body?" Angel was once again shocked by the scene before her. It was not like she had never seen a cloning technique before, but this was the first time she had seen so many clones being created simultaneously in such a short period of time, even though she had lived for 1,000 years. Amidst the dense crowd, an order rang out, "Find the top brass, and leave no one behind." Yes. The next second, a huge army of clones rushed in all directions. Soon, the venue was empty again. Kazuma said, "There are still 5 minutes left, there is no need to panic." Great. Yuji and others couldn't help but give a thumbs up. Anyone who were in this desperate situation would probably just wait for death, right? But Kazuma resolved it perfectly. With thousands of clones conducting a very fast search, they will probably soon gather all the points. From Yago's words, they could infer that there were many powerful sorcerers in the upper echelons who were crippled and thrown into the culling game. With so many powerful sorcerers, the points won't be an issue. In this way, the desperate situation was resolved. About 3 minutes later, through the little golden bug, they could see that Kazuma's points were constantly increasing. Soon it reached 1,000 points, and it was still rising. Kazuma laughed and said, "The top brass are suffering because of their own mistakes, but waste can still be used. Turning them into points can be considered a contribution to the world of Jujutsu. Okay, the crisis is over, let's go rescue." Kazuma deliberately dragged out the last syllable of the sentence and looked at Hana, who was looking expectant. "Let's go save Megami." Hana couldn't help but shout, "We have to rescue him, but, after that, you have to help with this." Kazuma played with the prison realm in his hand and looked at Hana with a smile. "No problem, as long as Megami can be rescued, I will agree to anything you ask." Angel shook her head helplessly and said, "Hana, my previous condition was to kill the disgraced one." Hana said, "Yes, sorry, I was too excited." "Forget it, just think of it as building a good relationship with Kazuma." At this moment, Yuram's voice fell into everyone's ears again. "Ha ha ha, I forgot to tell you one thing. If nothing unexpected has happened, your master Tenjan has been assimilated by Kenjaku. What awaits you will be endless despair. I look forward to our next meeting. As soon as these words came out, everyone except Kazuma opened their eyes wide in disbelief. Master Tengen has actually been assimilated. Then wouldn't Yuki and Choso who were protecting Tengen be in danger? 204. Sukuna's unusual bath. For a moment, Yuji and Maki felt nervous. Is what Urim said true or false? The one protecting Tengen is the special grade sorcerer Yuki. How can Kenjaku succeed? At this time, Yago sneered, Tengen has been assimilated. He is just an idiot who is being kept in the dark. Kazuma laughed and looked at Yago, asking, is Kenjaku dead? Yago thought for a while, and finally said truthfully, although I didn't see the body, Yuki's black hole move destroyed him in the tombs of Star Corridor. I think there is no reason for Kenjaku to have survived. Yuji was a little confused and asked, wait, you mean Tengen has not been assimilated? Yago said, not only did he fail to get his way, but we also beat him up. Then, under the pressure from Kazuma, Yago impatiently told Yuji and the others a brief account of what had happened. Yuji chuckled and said, so, what Urim said just now was just a lie. Yago nodded, then looked at Kazuma deeply. He is becoming increasingly unpredictable. How did he predict that Kenjaku would go to the tombs of the Star Corridor? It seemed like all this was within his expectations. Suddenly, a loud roar resounded throughout the Tokyo colony, as if the door of the mechanism was being opened. Along with the shaking and vibration, the black curtain wrapped around the outside completely dissipated. This also means that the culling game is now over. Seeing this, Yuji and Maki breathed a sigh of relief. The nerves that had been tense for a long time finally got a brief relaxation. At the same time, most of the people who had participated in the culling game breathed a sigh of relief. But a few battle fanatics were dissatisfied. For example, Kashimo, who was wandering alone in the Sendai colony. Just then, ding! Congratulations to the host for completing the mission, you will be rewarded with Kota Amatsukami. Hearing the long-awaited sound, Kazuma looked delighted. The most powerful genjutsu, Kota Amatsukami, is finally in hand. In a sense, this is a genjutsu that is even more powerful than Tsukuyomi, forcefully changing the will of others. As long as the timing is right, even making Sukuna kneel down and become a pacifist is not a problem. But the only drawback is that the cooldown is too long, so it should be used with caution. Suddenly, Kazuma's eyes lit up. In addition to Edo Tensei, he also possesses another forbidden technique with a huge backlash, Rinne Tensei. This move can revive the dead. It's not an exaggeration to say that it's like snatching people from the belly of the god of death. But the backlash of this forbidden technique is too great, and he definitely cannot perform it. But if he uses Kota Amatsukami to control Sukuna or Kenjaku and have them perform Rinne Tensei, is it feasible? For example, resurrecting the astral plasma vessel of the past, Amanai Riko? Thinking of this, Kazuma looked at Toji who was unconscious on the ground. At this moment, the injuries on his body had been mostly healed by Angel. Kazuma said, hey, wake up, your son has been taken away. Toji didn't respond. Kazuma thought for a moment, then leaned close to his ear, smiled, and whispered, let me tell you a secret, your son's last name is Gojo. As soon as these words came out, Toji suddenly opened his blood-red eyes, and his whole body rose straight up from the ground. His eyes turned cold, and he clenched the bloody long sword in his hand. He stared at the prison realm in Kazuma's hand. At this moment, he wanted to tear the prison realm apart with his bare hands to settle the score with Gojo. Yuji's mouth twitched, and he said helplessly, it's a lie, Kazuma lied to you. But he had to admit that this way of waking someone up is very effective. Hana came over anxiously, her eyes determined. She said, let's go and save Megami. As long as Megami is safe, I will immediately unseal Gojo for you. Yuji sighed, but where did Sukuna go? For a moment, everyone fell silent. How can they save Megami if they don't find Sukuna? Zenin clan. Kazuma suddenly spoke. Knowing the plot, he naturally knew that Sukuna should have arrived at the Zenin clan which had just been wiped out by Maki not long ago. Zenin clan. Suddenly everyone's eyes turned to Kazuma. Why would Sukuna go to the Zenin clan for no reason? Hana asked doubtfully, are you sure? Kazuma pretended to be confused and said, is there any need to think about this? Sukuna has occupied Megami's body. If he wants to improve his compatibility in a short period of time and perfectly master the 10 Shadows technique, he will naturally go to the Zenin clan. As soon as he said that, everyone suddenly realized. That makes sense. Yuji nodded frantically. At the same time, in the Zenin clan, Sukuna's bathing ceremony had begun. The scarlet pool of blood exuded a creepy atmosphere, and the surrounding area was filled with an extremely strong smell of blood. Urim was continuously pumping blood into the blood pool. All of this blood belonged to cursed spirits. In theory, when a cursed spirit is exorcised, it will dissipate and generally will not leave any blood. However, Urim, a vicious person who would do anything for Sukuna, had come up with an extremely cruel method. She first killed a large number of cursed spirits and then used a special method to revive them. She froze the head of the cursed spirit, then crushed and ground them, squeezing out every drop of blood. Dipping in blood would allow Sukuna to completely take over Megami's body, causing Megami's will to completely sink into the abyss. Suddenly, a ripple appeared in the originally calm pool of blood. Half of Sukuna's head slowly emerged from the water. Seeing this, Yuram showed joy on her face and quickly squatted down. "Sukuna-sama, are you awake?" A bloody light flashed, and Sukuna slowly opened his devilish eyes. Suddenly, boom, the entire blood pool suddenly swelled up, forming pillars of blood. Sukuna, with his hair down and naked, spread his arms out without any hesitation, enjoying the fresh air. After taking a bath, he was refreshed and felt like he had been reborn. This is the strength that he, who has eaten 16 fingers, should have. He had just occupied Megami's body and had no time to adapt. In addition, Angel's Jacob's ladder had weakened him, and he was unable to exert his full strength. Feeling the terrifying aura emanating from Sukuna, Yuram's eyes burned. She changed from kneeling on one knee to prostrating herself in worship. She said excitedly in a trembling voice, "Congratulations, Sukuna-sama, you have completed the fusion. You are now much stronger than before. If you meet that damn Kazuma again, he will be the one to die." Sukuna grinned. Other people's flattery might make him feel annoyed, but Yuram's flattery was very logical. At present, he has taken absolute control of this body, and there's also Mahayaraga, and without Megami playing tricks on him, his slashes were now much more powerful. Kazuma would definitely not be able to dodge them. 205, Ishiguri's death. Sukuna opened his arms. Yuram understood immediately and quickly put a robe on him. Sukuna could have restored his original appearance, but he chose to look like Megami. Firstly, although Megami's body was completely taken over by himself, this tenacious little brat had still retained a trace of his will. Sukuna wanted to use this body and Megami's original cursed technique to kill his sister. This would cause Megami to completely collapse. From now on, there is no Megami, only Sukuna. Secondly, although he was reluctant to admit it, Megami's face might give him an advantage in the upcoming battle. For example, it might somewhat restrict Gojo, who is about to reappear, or that damn Kazuma. Soon after, with Yuram's help, Sukuna walked out of the blood pool and came to Sendai. The first thing he had to do was find Megami's sister. Yuram told him that at this moment, Tsumaiki had been possessed by the ancient sorcerer Yoroza. Along the way, Sukuna's terrifying aura instantly enveloped the entirety of Sendai. Takako, who was hiding in the dark, opened her eyes wide and covered her mouth in fear. What a terrifying aura. Is this the legendary king of curses? Even after 1,000 years, this aura was still frightening. The murderous intent that surged into the sky frightened the other sorcerers and cursed spirits so much that they all fled for their lives. The former captain of the Sun Moon Star team was so frightened by Sukuna's aura that she dared not even breathe, let alone show up to challenge him. However, Ishiguri, who also felt the power, stood in front of Sukuna without knowing his own limitations. Although the culling game had ended, the battles would not stop. Although he had just suffered a loss at Kazuma and Yuta's hands and had almost died, he still couldn't suppress his desire to challenge the strong. The moment the two pairs of eyes met, Ishiguri instantly looked away, cold sweat already oozing out of his head. This feeling of being stared at by Sukuna made him tremble all over. So strong. Sukuna's power had exceeded his expectations. Even Yuta, whom he had fought before, had never given him such a feeling. This made him think of the helper that Yuta had called Kazuma. Perhaps he is the only one who can look that devil in the eye calmly. While thinking, Sukuna had already arrived in front of Ishiguri and spoke indifferently, "Go away, or not." Now he just wanted to find Tsumaiki as soon as possible before Gojo would break free. He had no time to play house with these bastards. However, Ishiguri, proud of himself, suppressed his fear and gritted his teeth. "Fight. Let me feel the true power of the King of Curses." Before he could finish his words, an invisible slash as fast as lightning swept across. The extremely sharp slash cut through Ishiguri's body. The entire incision was cut diagonally, extending from his shoulder to his thigh. The belated blood spurted out, reflecting Ishiguri's face, full of fear. He retreated at high speed, his eyes fixed on Sukuna, who stood there motionless. What a quick strike. He had absolutely no time to react. Just one encounter made him realize the huge gap in strength. Is this the King of Curses who had dominated the world of Jujutsu thousands of years ago? Seeing this, Takako, who was hiding in the dark, gave up the idea of a sneak attack. The strength displayed by Sukuna had surpassed the category of a special-grade sorcerer. Sukuna laughed out loud and looked at Ishiguri opposite him with interest. "So you're not the kind of scum that can be killed instantly with one strike. I wanted to cut you into 3 pieces, but you are still in one piece." At the same time, Sukuna felt relieved. It seemed that after 1,000 years, his slashes hadn't become weaker. Only Kazuma could dodge his attack with his speed. However, now, even Kazuma would find it absolutely impossible to dodge his slashes. Ishiguri's eyes widened. He knew that in a battle with a being of Sukuna's level, life and death were often just a matter of a second. Without any hesitation, he accelerated and approached Sukuna at high speed. At the same time, the cannon above his head was secretly charging. He wanted to reduce the distance and fire a blast to give Sukuna a big surprise. Even a powerhouse of his level would be seriously injured if he took a direct hit. Granite blast. A terrifying beam of light instantly gathered above Ishiguri's head, ready to fire. However, the next second, a black afterimage passed by. Sukuna had already circled behind him, and Ishiguri's eyes widened in disbelief. A low, hoarse voice fell into his ears. "You are too slow. Cursed energy discharge." The invisible slash broke through the air. The moment the two crossed paths, Ishiguri's head was already split into 3 pieces. With a plop, his body fell. The sorcerer who had dominated the Jujutsu world years ago died at the hands of Sukuna in just a few seconds. If Yago were present, he would sigh and say, "Not everyone is qualified to participate in the fight between these pinnacle-level beings." Ah! Takako, who was hiding in the dark, cried out in shock and quickly tore open the sky, fleeing in panic. Sukuna, who had already noticed her actions, ignored her. "These special grade ones are quite easy to kill," Sukuna said involuntarily. This made him think that the only people in this world who could rival him were Gojo and Kazuma. And soon, he would rely on his powerful strength to crush and kill these two opponents. Without further delay, Sukuna quickly found Yorozu. The moment Yorozu, who had occupied Tsumaiki's body, saw Sukuna, she could no longer hide the crazy love in her eyes. "Really? Are you finally willing to come see me?" Thousands of years ago, from the moment she had seen this devil, she had decided that he was her other half. But at this moment, the corners of Sukuna's mouth rose unconsciously. Because he could feel that when he saw Yorozu for the first time, the last bit of stubborn will in Megami's body had a violent fluctuation. This was exactly the result he wanted. Even after 1,000 years, Yorozu still deeply loved this demon who killed without blinking an eye. Her abnormal love made her excited to issue a declaration of war, a love letter. "Let's fight, Sukuna. Either you kill me, or I kill you. This is the outcome I long for. But what will you promise me if I win?" Facing Yorozu's expectant eyes, Sukuna raised his chin and blurted out without hesitation, "Everything." There was no need for him to think about this question. No matter who had said this, he would agree without hesitation, because he was sure that he would never lose. Everything. Yorozu was extremely excited. Sukuna's answer made her have a lot of thoughts. Does everything include marriage? This is really embarrassing. 60 advanced chapters on patreon.com/alex1000. 206. Sukuna vs. Yorozu. Looking at the infatuated Yorozu, a hint of impatience flashed in Sukuna's eyes. This ancient sorcerer named Yorozu is an old acquaintance of his. But so what? Did he, the king of curses, have to play love games with her? Whatever you say, I'll do it. Yorozu's eyes lit up. This means that she has a chance to marry Sukuna. Although she knew that the chances of defeating Sukuna were extremely slim, she was still extremely excited. Some strange images had already begun to appear in her mind. In normal times, Sukuna wouldn't even bother to look at Yorozu. But now, he kept his eyes on the other party from the very beginning. The reason is simple, just to constantly stimulate Megami. Thinking of this, Sukuna formed seals with both hands. Divine dogs. 2 huge dogs appeared beside Sukuna. Under Sukuna's influence, the originally cute dogs turned into hellhounds with black flames burning all over their bodies. Tear her apart. As Sukuna finished speaking, the 2 terrifying beasts roared wildly and rushed towards Yorozu. "Haha, you 2 wild dogs want to hinder my dream." Yorozu moved, dodging the attack. She waved her hands, like a dancer waving a ribbon, and used liquid metal. The crisscrossing net made of liquid metal instantly shot towards the divine dogs that were running towards her. Boom! The next second, the liquid metal and the Shikidamai collided violently. After the terrifying explosion, the 2 divine dogs disappeared, leaving only a dark liquid metal circle that tightly surrounded Sukuna. At this moment, a sharp roar sounded in the sky. Yorozu looked up and found a huge owl-shaped creature hovering in the sky. Looking at these strange creatures, she asked Sukuna in confusion, "What are these strange-looking animals? Could they be the Shikidamai of that little Megami? Their attack power has been drastically multiplied in your hands." Yorozu's expression suddenly changed, and she asked unhappily, "Where is your cursed technique? I want you to deploy your domain malevolent shrine." However, Sukuna's contemptuous words reached her eardrums. "I don't need to use my domain to deal with people like you." "What?" Sukuna's arrogant words petrified Yorozu instantly. She stared at Sukuna who was standing opposite her with her eyes wide open. How dare he look down on her like this? Looking at Yorozu's increasingly ferocious expression due to anger, Sukuna smiled sinisterly. "That's what I want." He wants to use Megami's body and only 10 Shadows technique to kill his sister Tsumaiki. Only in this way can Megami's consciousness be completely plunged into the abyss, beyond redemption. Feeling the violent fluctuations of emotions in his body, Sukuna grinned. The bigger the reaction, the closer he will be to his final goal. Ah! How can this be possible? Yorozu could no longer bear Sukuna's contempt. Her angry face was filled with rage towards her lover. "Do you really think you can defeat me without using your domain?" After she finished speaking, her body suddenly changed, and liquid metal kept clinging to her body like armor. Her cursed technique is similar to that of my construction. She can materialize substances that she recognizes. Looking at Yorozu who looked like a queen bee in front of him, Sukuna's expression became a little more serious. He felt the oppressive feeling that only special grade sorcerers possessed. Facing the violent Yorozu, Sukuna knew that apart from his own cursed technique, only that Shikidamai could kill her. Sukuna made the unique hand seal to summon Mahoraga. A wheel appeared out of thin air above Sukuna's head, emitting a strange aura. Sukuna did not directly summon Mahoraga to help him fight, but used this crazy woman in front of him to get familiar with adaptation. As time passed, the horrific battle finally ended. With the terrifying adaptability, Yorozu's attacks quickly lost their effect on Sukuna. After Sukuna performed a series of combos, Yorozu finally collapsed in the deep pit. She was seriously injured, blood was flowing from the corner of her mouth, and her eyes were full of resentment. Sukuna looked down at her and said calmly, "Your love is nothing more than this." However, despite being ridiculed like this, Yorozu still did not give up on her goal. That abnormally strong love drove her to stand up again and prepare for the last fight. She ignored the blood on her face, her eyes full of crazy love. "Only I understand your loneliness at the top. Only I can understand what love that spans 1,000 years is." Facing Yorozu's crazy roar, Sukuna was stunned at first, and then suddenly burst into laughter. Because he could feel the will of Megami in his body shouting madly. This little kid was about to see something that would make him completely collapse. "You know nothing." Suddenly, a voice echoed in the air. A vortex appeared above the two without anyone noticing. Sukuna, alerted, suddenly looked up. This vortex was very familiar to him as he had suffered many times because of this trick. Seeing this, Yuram, who was waiting in the distance, pressed her hands on the ground, ready to use her cursed technique at any time. Once Kazuma touches the ground, she can freeze him into an ice sculpture. However, the person that came into her sight was not Kazuma, but Angel, who made her even more afraid. The moment he saw that golden hair, Sukuna tensed up. The wheel on top of his head was ready to turn at any time. He is no longer the same person he was before. The cursed technique that once frightened him can no longer kill him easily. Last time, he had withstood Angel's cursed technique for some time. Although he had just subdued Mahoraga at that time, he had still adapted to Jacob's ladder a little. In other words, Jacob's ladder can no longer easily kill him. "Sukuna, give Megami back to me." Hana flapped her wings and flew towards Sukuna. The holy light emanating from her hands was dazzling. Sukuna could tell at a glance that this was not the Jacob's ladder but just a simple cursed technique. Moreover, Sukuna has been on guard against a certain someone. That's Kazuma. The voice just now definitely belonged to him. This damn guy, why does he always ruin his plans? 207, Kazuma, good boy, Sukuna. Angel is getting closer and closer to him, but that damn Kazuma still hasn't shown up yet. A hint of impatience appeared on Sukuna's face and a slash rushed towards Hana's head. However, the vortex reappeared, and Hana disappeared into it. Suddenly, a playful voice sounded from behind. "Tsukuyomi. Sukuna-sama, close your eyes." Yuram exclaimed from a distance. Sukuna closed his eyes reluctantly. He, the king of curses, had never felt so aggrieved before. However, the genjutsu did not appear. Instead, Kazuma's fist struck Sukuna. Bang! The punch empowered with chakra distorted Sukuna's face, and he flew backward. Sukuna stopped with his hands on the ground and stared at Kazuma fiercely. "You lied to me." In just a moment, he realized that Kazuma had no intention of performing a genjutsu. The king of curses who had dominated for 1,000 years was actually fooled by a little brat. Kazuma laughed and said, "You are quite obedient. You just followed my instructions." Without waiting for Sukuna's answer, Yorozu, who had just spoken boldly and was ready to fight to the death, became furious. "What did you just say? I don't understand a thing. How can someone like you understand true love?" Kazuma looked at the crazy Yorozu as if she were a fool. In his eyes, Yorozu was just a clown who was killed by Sukuna casually 1,000 years ago. Now she has come back to life, but she still has not learned her lesson. If he remembers correctly, in the plot, Sukuna's heart was calm until her death. From the beginning to the end, she was just a tool used by Sukuna to make Megami collapse. When it comes to simps, Yuram ranks first, and Yorozu ranks second. Megami's sister is really unlucky. Such a crazy woman has taken over her body. Fortunately, Sukuna is an emotionless demon. If he had agreed to marry Yorozu, wouldn't it be heartbreaking for Megami? Megami has a sister complex, and he is bound to collapse on the spot if that happens. Suddenly, the ground beneath Kazuma's feet shook. Click. The ground froze instantly, and an extremely sharp ice spike rose from the ground. However, Kazuma was not pierced, the ice spikes went straight through his body. It's this weird ability to become virtual again. Sukuna thought to himself, so troublesome. Kazuma waved his hand, and a vortex appeared again, but this time, it appeared behind Yorozu. A golden holy light shot out from the vortex. Yorozu's eyes rolled back, and she lost consciousness. Angel's purification has a very good effect on evil sorcerers who have occupied other people's bodies. Seeing this, Sukuna snorted in disdain. He knew that his plan had failed. "Yuram, let's retreat." Sukuna did not hesitate at all. Although he was unwilling to admit it, it would be difficult for him to kill Kazuma with just 16 fingers strength. The most important thing is that Angel is still watching him closely. No one knows when she will be able to use Jacob's ladder again. And Gojo is expected to be unsealed soon, so he needs the remaining 4 fingers. By then, it will be the end of these annoying pests. "Megami!" Hana shouted as she watched Sukuna leave on top of Nu. Looking at Sukuna going away, Kazuma did not chase after him but said loudly, "Megami, your sister will not die. Just have a good sleep and relax." Sukuna, flying in the sky, roared, emitting a terrifying aura. Seeing this, Yuram next to him immediately knelt on one knee and lowered her head. The reason why Sukuna was angry was that he could clearly feel that the will of Megami in his body had suddenly stabilized. He had put in all kinds of effort and tried every way to stimulate him, but Kazuma's words stabilized his emotions. "Just wait, I will cut you into pieces one day." The crying Hana suddenly raised her head, with endless murderous intent flashing in her eyes. "Kazuma, let's go and unseal Gojo. Now, let's immediately release Gojo and kill Sukuna." 3 days later, Saitama Prefecture. Kazuma held the front gate with his left hand and the back gate with his right hand, looking around at the scene. He hadn't expected Jujutsu High to actually have such a spacious training ground. He didn't even know about it. Shoko leaned in Mei Mei's arms and blew out a smoke ring with great enjoyment. The culling game has finally ended, and everyone's tense nerves have relaxed. And now Gojo is about to reappear. By then, they will have one more trump card to use against Sukuna. When they thought to this point, many people looked at Kazuma with gratitude. If it weren't for him, the conspiracy launched by Kenjaku would have dealt a fatal blow to Jujutsu High. At this time, Miwa, who had a sense of ritual, suddenly said, "Wait, shouldn't we prepare some kind of welcoming ceremony?" Yuji laughed and agreed, "That's right. Why didn't I think of that? Gojo-sensei must be very lonely in there. We have to make him feel the warm atmosphere." For a moment, everyone happily started discussing how to arrange the welcome ceremony. Kazuma was speechless as he watched the lively atmosphere. In fact, he even wanted to recommend not to release Gojo because after Gojo is unsealed. Hana standing by didn't quite understand their focus. She believed that the most important thing now was to pay attention to Gojo's mental state. "Well, let me give you some general knowledge. There is no concept of time in the prison realm. He will not starve to death, nor will he age. So, you have to be mentally prepared." Hearing this, everyone was stunned. Someone understood Angel's concerns. "You mean, even though it's only been 19 days since the Shibuya incident, for Gojo who is in the prison realm, these 19 days may be just a moment, or 100 years, or even 1,000 years." Upon hearing this, everyone except Kazuma suddenly froze. This is bad. If it is the latter, then they will be in big trouble. No one can guarantee that in this long period of time, mental disorder will not occur. Even the strongest in the world, Gojo probably. What should we do? Yuji held his head with both hands and exclaimed, "What if Gojo-sensei goes insane? Then the entire Jujutsu High might cease to exist." For a moment, everyone present had sweat form on their foreheads. They began to unconsciously imagine Gojo going crazy in their minds. A mentally deranged Gojo is indeed an extremely dangerous existence. They don't want to add another Sukuna to the world of Jujutsu. Nobara even laughed out loud, but then realized that it was a little inappropriate. Then, she immediately covered her mouth in frustration. Shoko took a deep breath, looked at Kazuma with soft eyes, and smiled. "Actually, there's no need to worry. If Gojo is mentally disturbed, Kazuma can use genjutsu on him immediately." Mei Mei joked, "Fighting fire with fire." Shoko said coquettishly, "Yes, I have it under control." In the end, everyone adopted Shoko's opinion. After all, among those here, only Kazuma can compete with Gojo. Hakari and Yuki, these two fighting maniacs, even had some expectations. 208, has Gojo gone insane? Prison realm, this small cube affects the future trajectory of the entire world of Jujutsu. Everyone felt a little emotional. Although Gojo was unfortunately sealed, fortunately, there is still Kazuma. Otherwise, the Shibuya incident, the culling game, these unprecedented disasters. Who knows what consequences they would bring to the world. Kazuma did not reject everyone's opinions. Because he knew that although Gojo was living a miserable life in there, he would not go crazy. Soon after, Kazuma went to the center of the venue. All the students hid behind the sand pile, fearing that Gojo would turn out to have become crazy. They all stared at the cube in Kazuma's hand as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Inumaki even held an extra-large loudspeaker to prevent any accidents. Hana floated in the air, flapping her wings. She raised one hand high, and a small trumpet appeared out of thin air in her hand. She shouted loudly to Kazuma below, "Are you ready? I'm starting." Kazuma raised the prison realm high, signaling Hana to start quickly. Inumaki held the trumpet tightly and said nervously, "Salmon." After receiving the signal, Hana's eyes flashed with determination, and she activated Jacob's ladder that had just recovered from the cooldown. Jacob's ladder. Boom! A huge halo appeared in the sky, and a strong beam of light shone directly on the cube in Kazuma's hand, submerging Kazuma himself. Under the baptism of the beam of light, Kazuma did not feel uncomfortable at all. Instead, he felt a little comfortable. The dazzling light illuminated the earth, making it impossible for everyone to open their eyes. Yuji and Nobara couldn't help but cover their eyes. Rika suddenly appeared and stood in front of Yuta. Shoko and Mei Mei were well prepared, wearing sunglasses and facing the holy light. Soon after, as the beam of light slowly dissipated, everyone excitedly ran towards the center. Yuji even called out to Gojo excitedly, Some people were ready to subdue Gojo, who might have gone crazy. However, when they reached the bottom of the mine, they found that apart from Kazuma, who was intact, there was no sign of Gojo. Even the prison realm had completely disappeared. For a moment, everyone stayed where they were. What is going on right now? Both the prison realm and Gojo are completely gone. Yuji seemed to have thought of something terrible and asked, Hana, what is going on? Where is Gojo-sensei? You didn't purify him and the prison realm to non-existence, right? Facing Yuji's questioning, Hana defended herself. There's nothing wrong with the cursed technique. Gojo must have become a demon like Sukuna. Otherwise, how could he have disappeared? Yes, that's it. You must have been deceived by Gojo's appearance before. I am doing this to help the people get rid of this evil. You won't blame me, right? At the same time, she was shouting madly to Angel in her heart. What is going on? Come out and give an explanation. However, everyone obviously didn't buy her explanation. They stared at Hana with a look that said, I don't believe you. Seeing this, Hana became anxious and quickly pointed to Kazuma beside her. She said, if you don't believe me, just look at Kazuma. He is definitely a kind and upright person. The fact that Jacob's ladder is ineffective against him is perfect proof. Mei frowned slightly and asked with concern, Kazuma, are you feeling unwell? Kazuma shook his head and smiled, no, I feel pretty good, I even want to have a few more shots. As he spoke, he also turned his gaze to Hana. The latter became speechless. What does this guy think of her most powerful technique, Jacob's ladder? For a while, everyone was speechless. Kazuma is indeed fine, but is he a kind and upright person? The 4 trembling disaster curses hiding in the distance were the first to disagree. Yuji muttered, sure enough, women are all the same. She actually made a mistake. Shoko didn't find it strange and said, I think that with Gojo's personality, he has the potential to become a great demon. As soon as she finished speaking, a dissatisfied voice sounded. You evaluate me like that? My young heart has been deeply traumatized. Everyone was shocked. They all looked behind Kazuma, and saw a black vortex appearing out of nowhere. Gojo put one hand in his pocket and walked out with a smile on his face. Seeing this, everyone suddenly realized. It turns out that Gojo had made a plan with Kazuma to play a prank on them. Only Kazuma's spatial ability could deceive their eyes in such a short time. Long time no see. It's great that everyone is here. Gojo chuckled and waved hello to the stunned crowd. It was as if the isolation within the prison realm had no effect on him. He was still the same cheerful Gojo as before, but the smile on his lips concealed a subtle sadness. Fortunately, none of the things he was most worried about had happened. He had heard that Kazuma could pull people into his personal dimension. Just now, he had seen it in person and found that it was indeed extremely mysterious. In that mighty space, he couldn't even sense the slightest bit of cursed energy. He had a feeling that if he were to fight Kazuma inside, he might not even stand a chance against him. Gojo-sensei, you haven't turned into a madman. Yuji, who was extremely excited, rushed forward and knocked Gojo to the ground. Everyone else also surrounded Gojo and asked him about his experience in the prison realm. In response to this, Gojo just said stubbornly that it was more comfortable than a vacation. After some warm greetings, Gojo finally became serious and looked at Kazuma anxiously. He asked, Yaga is okay, right? He had not seen Yaga. Kazuma replied, no, he was beaten up by Gakugenji and is recovering in the infirmary. Hearing this, Gojo breathed a sigh of relief and said, it's great that he is okay. Then he pulled down the blindfold, revealing his pale blue 6 eyes that were full of murderous intent. Who is willing to go make a visit to the higher-ups with me? However, contrary to his expectations, the scene turned silent and no one responded. Gojo. What the hell? No one is willing. Just as Gojo was full of confusion, Yuji slowly raised his hands. Gojo-sensei, the higher-ups are gone. Huh. Gojo's eyes widened in surprise. Advanced chapters on patreon.com/alex1000. 209, Helpless Kenjaku. After a brief moment of confusion, Gojo looked at Kazuma and said with a smile, well, you didn't even wait for me to do this. He was thinking that the first thing he would do after getting out would be to kill all the higher-ups, so as to vent his anger on those old corrupt men. Tell me what happened. Afterwards, the enthusiastic Yuji explained the origin of the matter and also briefly told the story of the culling game. What a good use of waste. Gojo looked at Kazuma with admiration. He actually threw the higher-ups into the culling game and turned them into points. The era of sinister and corrupt officials has finally come to an end. Shoko said calmly, okay, let's talk about it when we get back. I seriously suspect that there may be something wrong with your mental health. Go to the infirmary for a checkup first. Everyone agreed with Shoko's words. Although Gojo doesn't seem to be in any serious condition, it's still better to check him out. Finally, the reluctant Gojo was forcibly carried to the infirmary by Yuji and Yuta. At this time, Yuki, who was walking in front, deliberately slowed down her pace. She winked at Kazuma and smiled softly. She said charmingly, how can I repay you, my savior? As she spoke, her hand intentionally or unintentionally pressed against Kazuma. Kazuma said with a smile, let's talk about it later. Looking at Kazuma's figure, Yuki paused for a moment, then smiled softly. Tell me later. Looks like you have something to say. At the same time, in a secluded house in the Zenin clan, the atmosphere in the quaint room was solemn. Yuram crawled on the ground and held 3 fingers on her hands. Sorry, Sukuna-sama. I collected 3 fingers, but I couldn't find the last one no matter how hard I tried. I am willing to accept any punishment. Looking at Yuram who was kneeling on the ground respectfully, Sukuna was not angry. Instead, he said calmly, it's okay. The last finger is probably with Gojo himself, so there's no need to waste time looking for it. Just a few minutes ago, he had sensed an extremely powerful aura that made him excited. There is no need to think about it, that aura must be from Gojo who has come out from the prison realm. Haha, what's strongest in the modern world? Isn't it because he is afraid of his strength that he carries the last finger with him? He doesn't dare to face himself in his prime. Hearing that Sukuna had no intention of punishing her, Yuram was not happy at all, but felt a little disappointed. Sukuna-sama, this time it's all Kazuma's fault, that damn troublemaker. He disrupted our plans. When she thought of this guy who had done this same thing again and again, she couldn't help but feel angry. But she can't beat him. Even Sukuna-sama seems to be unable to do anything to him in a short time. And with some unknown method, he managed to survive under the rules she had set. Even if she racked her brains, she couldn't figure out what method Kazuma had used. Now that Gojo has reappeared in the world, there is one more sorcerer who can threaten Sukuna-sama. If she can't gather the last crucial finger, there may be a lot of trouble. But it was just a nuisance. Even though there were only 19 fingers, she never thought that Sukuna would lose. Just when Sukuna and Yuram were worried about the last finger, a black portal appeared. Who? Yuram turned back suddenly, and sharp ice blades had already condensed on her fingertips. Hey, it's me. Kenjaku slowly walked out of the portal, squinting his eyes and smiling. He raised his hands high in a gesture of surrender. Yuram looked at Kenjaku with vigilance and said, Sukuna-sama, this man is as cunning as Kazuma. No need to be on guard. Sukuna, leaning back in his chair, glanced at Kenjaku indifferently. He had known this cunning old fox thousands of years ago. Maybe those idiots at Jujutsu High were extremely afraid of him, but in his eyes, Kenjaku posed no threat at all. In the face of absolute strength, any conspiracy or trick is useless. Sukuna asked, have you found the thing? Of course. Kenjaku quickly replied, the corpse that you left behind when you passed away has been prepared for you and you can take it anytime. Having said that, Kenjaku let out a long sigh in his heart. Now he was completely down and out, even that idiot with a missing brain like Yuram could bully him. But sometimes, one has to bow their head. What's more, he failed to assimilate Tengen, and Gojo has already broken free from the seal of the prison realm. With Gojo's feelings for Geto, he would probably target him and settle accounts with him soon. Therefore, at present, relying on Sukuna and seeking his protection is the best and only option. As long as he is still alive, everything can still be turned around. By then, no matter the King of Curses or the Six Eyes, they will not be able to escape his plan. Sukuna's eyes narrowed slightly, and he glanced at Kenjaku. Lead the way. Soon after, under Kenjaku's guidance, Sukuna came to a dilapidated abandoned temple. In the weed-covered backyard of the temple, there sat a shrunken corpse. Looking at the corpse in front of him, Sukuna couldn't help but feel a little emotional. Even after 1,000 years, his body had not decayed yet and was still emitting a black aura. Kenjaku took 2 steps back, bowed and smiled. Even without the last finger, this body is enough to make up for your last flaw. Yuram was extremely shocked. As expected of Sukuna-sama's body, even after 1,000 years, it still hasn't dissipated. This faint smell of cursed energy made her extremely fascinated. Sukuna grinned evilly and said, notify Gojo, I will be waiting for him in Shinjuku for the final battle, the time is up to him. There can only be one strongest in this world. 2:10, Christmas Eve. The atmosphere in the hall of Jujutsu High was extremely solemn. Yuji, Nobara, Panda, Yuta, and others had gathered together and were discussing something. Just a while ago, the challenge sent by Sukuna made Yuji and the others, who had just relaxed, tense up again. After learning that Kenjaku had joined Sukuna, Gojo accepted Sukuna's challenge without any hesitation and set the date for December 24th, which is today. He wanted to destroy Kenjaku and give Geto peace. Panda waved his fists and said angrily, if I were Gojo, I would not bother to fight Sukuna one-on-one. Wouldn't it be better to just call Kazuma and the others to fight together? After saying that, Panda cautiously glanced at Kashimo, who was leaning alone in the corner with his arms folded. Since this fighting maniac had learned that Gojo was going to fight Sukuna, both his eyes and body had been shaking like crazy. Even from a distance, one could sense the fiery fighting spirit emanating from him. Hakari glanced at Panda with contempt and said, why do you think Gojo is so powerful? How could he do that when he has the heart of a strong man? This is no longer a simple decisive battle, but a fight to the death for the title of the strongest. Panda sighed, then let's think of some words to cheer him up. Yuta said without hesitation, come on. Hakari said calmly, just don't die. Yuji, who was squatting on the ground, said, come on, don't die. These words feel redundant. Gojo-sensei is the strongest. There's no need to worry about him or cheer him up, right? As soon as these words were spoken, the tense atmosphere in the hall was instantly relieved. Yes, Gojo is recognized as the strongest. No one thought he would lose. Maybe Gojo isn't taking this decisive battle seriously at all, and he might even be shouting, "Of course I will win. You don't need to worry about me." A few caring students were discussing this as Gojo and his companions walked down the stairs. After a series of examinations, apart from some mild depression, there was nothing serious with him. At this moment, his mind was filled with Kenjaku, so his eyes were filled with murderous intent. Everyone turned their eyes to Gojo. The atmosphere was not as relaxed as they had expected. Gojo's seriousness made them stand there in a daze, feeling a little overwhelmed. Is it because Sukuna put too much pressure on him? Only Yuji didn't care about Gojo's condition at all. He waved his hands and shouted, "Gojo-sensei, your infinity is too much of a hindrance. I can't touch you even if I want to." Everyone's breathing stagnated, and they looked at Yuji in amazement. Why did this guy suddenly go crazy? Didn't he see that Gojo is in a bad mood? Gojo seemed to suddenly wake up from a dream. The corners of his mouth rose again, returning to his usual sly smile. He raised his hand and gave a thumbs up. He said with a grin, "Haha, come on, I'm very strong." Hearing this, everyone's eyes lit up. Yuji rushed over without hesitation and slapped Gojo on the shoulder. Everyone watched the scene in front of them happily. Gojo took off his robe, revealing the same clothes as Toji, black shirt and white pants, and walked confidently in the middle of the crowd, heading out of the hall. Yuki, Kazuma, and others also came to the hall. "Hurry up, you idiot with an eye patch. If you can't win, let Kazuma launch a sneak attack and kill that damn king of curses. Don't forget I'm here." Kashimo said coldly. "Tisk." Gojo sneered, "I am enough to deal with Sukuna. Just wait and see." Looking at Gojo's figure, Kazuma complained in his heart. Meanwhile, in Shinjuku, 3 terrifying figures stood on the roof of the skyscraper. Kenjaku said respectfully, "Don't worry, I will keep an eye on the other people from Jujutsu High during the final battle between you and Gojo and will not let them launch a sneak attack." Sukuna ignored Kenjaku. In his eyes, apart from Gojo, Kazuma is the only one who can threaten him, and Kenjaku will definitely not be able to stop Kazuma. So these words were just bullshit. Yuram, who was standing by, couldn't stand it anymore when she saw that Kenjaku had snatched her words away again. "You annoying old fox, get out of here now, and don't affect Sukuna-sama's condition." Facing Yuram's scolding, Kenjaku didn't care at all but laughed lightly and said, "What can I do? Gojo is thinking of every possible way to kill me right now. He already had his own ideas in his mind. This time period before the start of the war is the most dangerous time for him. In this time frame, he is most likely to be killed instantly by Gojo. The best option is to stay with Sukuna shamelessly. As long as the battle starts, he will have no more worries. He has sinister plans to resurface again. If Gojo loses this battle, the high-end combat forces led by Kazuma will definitely encircle and suppress Sukuna without hesitation. After all, Sukuna will probably be in a very weak state at that time. When these powerful people have no time to take care of him, he can implement his great plan without any scruples." Seeing that the atmosphere was not right, Kenjaku quickly changed the subject. "Haha, I didn't expect Gojo to be so romantic. He actually decided to schedule the fight on Christmas Eve. Does he want us grown men to go on a date together? Or does he want to use this day to remember the deceased Geto? That's ridiculous." Yuram angrily said, "Don't use your dirty thoughts to influence Sukuna-sama." Kenjaku raised his eyebrows slightly. He squinted his eyes and smiled, cursing in his heart. "You have the least say in this." Gojo and Ijishi walked on the devastated land. Looking at the ground beneath his feet, Gojo sighed, "Why do I feel like I haven't been here for a long time?" Ijishi chuckled and said, "What is it like to be in the prison realm?" When Gojo heard the words prison realm, he was stunned for a moment, then smiled with relief. "How should I put it? It's like being so busy at work, but never being able to stop, and it feels endless." "That's really bad." Ijishi murmured, "Thank you for your hard work." As an assistant supervisor, the mere thought of being overwhelmed with work made him terrified. Speaking of Shibuya, Gojo suddenly remembered something. The words that worried him the most finally came out. How are the people who were at Shibuya Station now? Do they have any sequelae from Infinite Void? For example, brain dead, turning into a vegetable. The 0.2-second domain expansion. Even he himself didn't know whether normal human brains would be able to handle that. Not at all. Ijishi said happily. They have now all returned to their normal lives after treatment. Hearing this, Gojo stretched and breathed a sigh of relief. Haha, from the perspective of protecting humanity, I have won. 2:11 The fight for the title of the strongest. While they were talking, the two had already reached the top of the tall building. What came to their view were the long-prepared Yutahim and Gakugenji. Together with Ijishi who had come with Gojo, the three were the best support. With the powerful assistance of these three people, Gojo's cursed energy output can increase by 20%. Boom! Cursed energy instantly enveloped Gojo, and Yutahim's technique Solo Forbidden Zone was officially activated. Yutahim seriously said, "Hey, remember to beat Sukuna up for me." "Don't worry." Gojo laughed and began to recite the amplification spell that belonged only to the Gojo clan. 9 points. Polarized light. Crow and Shomayo chant. The gap between within and without. Without skipping any steps, he slowly took off the blindfold. The pale blue six eyes seemed like an extension of the sky. He stretched out one hand in the gesture of shooting a marble, aiming at a point 1,000 meters away. This move will kick off this epic battle. The dazzling light reflected Gojo's determined gaze. A huge purple sphere appeared in front of him, with an extremely terrifying pressure sweeping around. Gojo's lips curled and he said, "Sukuna, I wonder if you can accept this great gift from me." Hollow technique, purple. As soon as the words fell, the purple energy that dimmed the entire world pressed towards the top of the building beyond the field of vision. 3 kilometers away, standing on the roof, Sukuna's expression gradually became serious. He had already felt the powerful cursed energy in the distance. It was like the sun shining on earth. It was as if a scorching sun had locked onto his position. He knew that this was Gojo's long-range attack. Sukuna's lips curled up slightly, and he praised, "Gojo, your reputation is well deserved." The pride in his heart made him open his arms, ready to withstand this attack. However, his eyes suddenly widened. The ball of light that was far away a second ago was now right in front of his face. The dazzling light illuminated the entire building. Sukuna had underestimated the power and speed of this 200% output hollow purple. Before the hand that had just been stretched out had time to gather cursed energy, a violent explosion had already sounded around it. Boom! The 200% output purple hit the rooftop where Sukuna was accurately. In an instant, the building was shattered, and all the steel and concrete turned into dregs. The entire building collapsed from top to bottom like a domino. The violent impact caused all the surrounding buildings to collapse, as if they were experiencing an earthquake. In just a short moment, the skyscraper disappeared flat on the ground. Kenjaku, who was hiding far away, felt a chill on his back. It seems that seeking refuge in Sukuna was the right choice. Yuram said proudly and calmly, "With such a small attack, it can't even scratch Sukuna-sama's skin." The aftermath of the explosion gradually subsided and the billowing smoke gradually dissipated. The sound of rustling footsteps reached their eardrums. The two strongest finally met on the streets of Shinjuku. Sukuna grinned evilly, with a thick black aura emanating from his body. His arm was already charred black from the injuries. But for him, this was harmless. Soon, the pre-war verbal battle officially began. Gojo looked at Sukuna with a mocking look and said, "Was that blow just now not enough to kill you?" As if thinking of something, Gojo raised a finger and added, "Let me make it clear first, in this battle, you are the challenger." Gojo's frivolous words made Sukuna unhappy. He said, "Challenger? You ignorant brat. Is it the success of the sneak attack that gave you this ridiculous self-confidence? In my eyes, you are nothing more than a grasshopper that can jump a little bit. You are still a piece of fish on the chopping board. The only difference is that you can jump a little higher than others. I don't take you seriously at all." During the conversation, Sukuna's damaged arm had been completely healed by reverse cursed technique. Sukuna's legs slightly bent and he assumed a fighting stance, gathering cursed energy in his hands, ready to strike. "Oh, really?" Gojo stretched his body and sneered, "Then why are you using Megami's face to fight me? Do you want me to show you mercy? Are you afraid of me?" If face is put aside, Gojo, who is also in a fighting stance, looks almost identical to Toji back then. The way he dressed had two meanings. Firstly, he hoped to stimulate Megami. Secondly, now he is assuming the role of Megami's father, so he won't instinctively show mercy while beating his son. This was the decision he had made after asking Toji, who had returned from the dead, before this. Although he was extremely puzzled as to why Kazuma could resurrect the dead, the most important thing for now is to deal with Sukuna first. The time for pre-war trash talk is over. In the blink of an eye, Sukuna's attack was already approaching Gojo. A knee strike containing cursed energy instantly stopped in front of Gojo's abdomen. Even Sukuna in his prime couldn't break through Gojo's absolute defense with taijutsu alone. At the same time, this decisive battle between the two strongest was being broadcast live nationwide by Mei. As for why, it is to earn investment money for the future construction of Jujutsu High. In the conference room of Jujutsu High, everyone stared at the more than 10 large screens in front of them. The reason why so many screens were set up is so that they can watch the battle between Gojo and Sukuna from all angles. Wow! The fight has started. The fight has started. Gojo-sensei, give Sukuna a good slap on the face. It would be best if his nose is crooked and his jaw is dislocated. Yuji danced and waved his fists, shouting excitedly. Toji standing by said angrily, "The one who is hit is Sukuna, but the one who is hurt is my son. I hope Gojo isn't too harsh. If he dares to disfigure my son, I'll stab him again." As soon as these words came out, everyone in the meeting room fell silent. Knowing the situation, it was hard for them to refute. After all, Toji had certainly done something that they could never even think of. It can be said that Toji had a role in Gojo becoming so overwhelmingly powerful. Kazuma reminded mercilessly, "Now is now, then was then. Someone like you probably can't even break Gojo's defense." Haha. Someone couldn't help laughing out loud. Of all the people here, only Kazuma, who had resurrected him, could subdue this ruthless tyrant. "Hey, you with the bald head, why are you so excited? Your face is almost pressed against the screen. It's not you who's fighting. Panda took the opportunity to scold Kashimo. Kashimo just glanced at Panda with a look that said he was rubbish, and continued to watch the fight with his face pressed against the screen. He must devote all his energy to observing Sukuna's techniques and combat habits. At this moment, Yuji suddenly exclaimed, Gojo-sensei's infinity seems to have been broken. 212, Infinite Void vs Malevolent Shrine. They had never dared to think about it before, but Sukuna actually did it. Doesn't that mean that something as unbelievable as defeating Gojo is possible? And it can be clearly seen that Sukuna must have done his homework before the battle. Yuta said, I watched the video of the Shibuya incident. This technique is a perfect solution to deal with Gojo-sensei. Isn't that right, Yago and Hanami? For a moment, everyone turned their eyes to Yago and Hanami. The former raised his head proudly, not afraid of their gazes at all. Do the country bumpkins in Jujutsu High not know about domain amplification? To put it simply, domain amplification is a refined and enhanced version of simple domain. It can neutralize the opponent's cursed technique. If it were Hanami and I, it might take a long time, but if it's Sukuna who's doing it, I'm afraid it will only take one chance. But your Gojo seems to be even more ruthless. He actually took the initiative to remove infinity. Look how scared Sukuna is. Yago's explanation caused everyone in Jujutsu High to fall into silence. Their expressions turned extremely serious. Hana said what everyone was unwilling to say, if that's the case, the situation is very unfavorable for Gojo. Sukuna has already tied with Gojo without using any cursed techniques. If he uses other means to pursue him, and Gojo doesn't find a way to deal with it in time. Kashimo crossed his arms and said indifferently, he will lose. Then it will be my turn. As he said this, he looked at Kazuma, indicating that this is what he had promised. Kazuma naturally knew that Kashimo had already lost control and felt speechless. Has this guy always been this confident? If nothing unexpected happens, once Kashimo goes to fight Sukuna, he will be killed instantly. His killer move, Mythical Beast Amber, that he has been holding back for 400 years is also useless. Although Kashimo's words were very straightforward and unpleasant to hear, no one refuted them. At this time, Yuji suddenly said, if that's the case, why doesn't he use his domain? He believed that Gojo's domain could be considered a bug. If the domain is used, Sukuna won't be able to play any tricks. At that time, the two of them will return to a fair starting point again. Yuji, your thought process is too simple. Yuki smiled and said, I'm afraid Gojo's domain cannot compete with Sukuna's domain. This is not about whose domain is stronger or weaker, but the nature of the domain itself. Combined with the Shibuya incident and Tenjin's confused explanation, it can be basically confirmed that Sukuna's domain is open type. In the Tombs of the Star Corridor, she had personally fought against Kenjaku and was nearly killed, so she had a lot to say. Kenjaku can destroy his opponent's domain from the outside by relying on his open type domain. If even Kenjaku can do this, then Sukuna will obviously be even more terrifying. Open domain. As soon as these words came out, everyone was stunned. Kashimo, Hakari, and others reacted instantly and realized what this meant. The scrap of the Jujutsu world standing in the corner, Miwa, was a little confused. What is an open domain? I've never heard of it before. For a moment, no one could give a specific answer. Yuki blinked and looked at Kazuma with a half-smile. She said, I'm afraid no one knows more about open domains than Kazuma. Kazuma knows. Everyone turned their eyes to him. Kazuma smiled and gave an analogy. You can think of an open domain as being able to hold liquid without a container, paint without a canvas, and forming flowers and fruits without roots. You mean, an open domain doesn't have the barrier that is present in a normal domain. How is this possible? It totally defies common sense. Sadness appeared on everyone's face. In this case, can Gojo really win in a domain battle? Miwa said in self-abandonment, alas. Even an unthinkable thing like the open domain exists, but I only know simple domain. Kazuma said, simple? New Shadow style is not simple at all. Whether it was Yuki using it in the Tombs of the Star Corridor to buy time, or Gojo's subsequent escape from a desperate situation, they were all inseparable from the simple domain. Miwa just thought that Kazuma was just trying to comfort her out of kindness. At this time, Momo, who was riding on a magic broom, asked curiously, after all this talk, what will happen if Gojo's domain collides with Sukuna's? Yuji's eyes suddenly widened. Through the screen, he felt something strange in his hands and shouted, it's coming. Domain expansion. The voices of the two strongest sounded almost at the same time. Infinite Void and Malevolent Shrine spread out instantly. When everyone was wondering what would happen, Gojo and Sukuna seemed to have heard their thoughts. They expanded their own domains in an extremely tacit manner. The moment a sorcerer unfolds his domain, it often symbolizes that the outcome of the battle is about to take place. Boom! The dark barrier of Infinite Void radiated a dazzling light. Malevolent Shrine savagely took root and grew inside the Infinite Void. It seemed as if the black aura from hell was madly confronting the guaranteed hit effect of the Infinite Void. The two strongest domains collided at this moment, and neither was willing to retreat. On top of the huge shrine, Sukuna made hand seals with an evil smile on his face. His domain was unfolded about 0.02 seconds later than Gojo's and was inside Gojo's domain. But his domain is an open type, so there's no need to worry too much. The longer this domain clash lasts, the bigger the loss for Gojo. In the Dark Storm, Gojo formed a seal with one hand, and his expression was no longer relaxed as before, but full of determination. He has so much to do. Get rid of the evil Sukuna, save Megumi, make up for the mistakes he had made in the Shibuya incident, and free Geto's body. His majestic figure appeared extremely resolute through the screen. In such a terrifying domain confrontation, if you relax even a little, you will fall into a critical moment from which there is no return. However, Gojo couldn't help but show excitement on his face. He had a great time fighting with Sukuna. This level of battle is exactly what he has been pursuing all his life. Boom! Gojo, who should have been cautious, suddenly increased his cursed energy output, causing a huge amount of cursed energy to rush towards Sukuna. Sukuna was not to be outdone, and a steady stream of black energy rushed over like a flood. No one had thought that the two would compete in such a brutal and violent way. After all, once something goes wrong, the domain will be shattered. The party whose domain is broken will fall into a vulnerable situation as they won't be able to use their cursed technique. At that time, the opponent's domain will not hesitate to launch endless crazy attacks. Such a brutal confrontation in the domain stunned the spectators. They are evenly matched. Yuji was stunned. Some people were surprised that Sukuna's domain could actually fight evenly against the almost invincible Infinite Void. Some people couldn't believe that Gojo's closed domain could actually compete with an open domain. In a sense, in this domain confrontation, Gojo is actually the better one. Advanced chapters on patreon.com/alex1000. 213. Simple domain isn't actually simple. The eyes of the four disaster curses standing behind Kazuma widened. This time, they had gained a lot of knowledge and their eyes had opened. Looking at Kazuma's indifferent smile, they still had a doubt. He had been keeping a calm smile since the moment Gojo and Sukuna had started fighting. He was very relaxed as if he was watching a movie. The two strongest are having a domain confrontation, but he isn't even feeling nervous. So what is the scope of his domain? From the beginning to the end, Yago and the others had never seen Kazuma open his domain. At this moment, Yuta suddenly stood up and exclaimed, "It's cracked." Everyone stopped thinking and stared at the big screen. Sukuna sat atop the shrine, looking like a demon god who had descended to earth, while Gojo continued to form seals with one hand, continuously outputting his cursed energy. This is a protracted war. Both sides are extremely clear about the consequences of having their domain breached. However, this clash of the strongest domains did not last long. The black barrier of the Infinite Void began to tremble constantly, and even tiny cracks appeared. Thanks to the advantage of being an open-type domain, Malevolent Shrine had spread to the outside of the Infinite Void. Although the interior of a domain is extremely strong, the exterior is very fragile. At this moment, the advantages of the open domain are fully demonstrated. Everyone's heart suddenly jumped up, and they even forgot to breathe. Yuji clenched his fists and stared at the screen. After the tiny cracks appeared in Gojo's domain, it began to shatter at a degree visible to the naked eye. Yuki shook her head. Gojo is already very impressive to be able to fight against an open domain for so long. The next second, snap, the black domain barrier shattered. Like broken eggshells, they flew everywhere. Without the covering of the black domain barrier, Malevolent Shrine stood firmly in the center. And it was still expanding recklessly. Sukuna stood high on the shrine, looking very proud. This is the gap between us. Gojo did not respond. He just stood there in a daze, not knowing what to do. This was the first time he encountered this type of situation. This sudden change made him quickly review the cause, and he soon come to a conclusion. It was because he had ignored the external erosion of the other party's domain, which allowed Sukuna to take advantage of the loophole. However, Sukuna did not plan to give Gojo a chance to catch his breath. Swish! An invisible slash swept past in an instant. A deep cut was left on Gojo's neck. The splattered blood reflected the astonishment in Gojo's eyes. This was clearly a guaranteed hit from Sukuna's domain. His infinity could no longer be activated as his domain had just shattered. Swish! Before he could come to his senses, bright red blood spurted out from his neck again. The wound that had not yet healed deepened again. Just when everyone was worried, white steam suddenly came out from Gojo's neck. The originally shocking wound was healed in the blink of an eye. Yuji seemed to see hope and said, "It's reverse curse technique." Gojo-sensei is able to perform the reverse curse technique to heal his body during CT burnout. In this case, can he use his reverse curse technique to survive until he recovers from CT burnout? Yuki, Yuta, and the others shook their heads. Reverse curse technique is just a delaying tactic. As long as he is still within Sukuna's domain, he will have to continue to endure crazy attacks from all directions. The atmosphere in the conference room was extremely solemn. Yuji felt that he was having difficulty breathing. He looked at Yuta and asked, "If Gojo-sensei destroys the shrine by force, can Sukuna's domain be shattered?" However, Yuta poured cold water on Yuji's head. "If I'm not mistaken, the shrine in the center of the domain should just be a concrete product of Sukuna's imagination. Whether it exists or not, it has little effect on the domain. If Gojo-sensei wants to escape the attacks from the domain, he must start with Sukuna himself. Yuji anxiously said, but now Gojo-sensei is in CT burnout. How can he do it? Don't worry, the situation will be reversed soon. Kazuma said calmly. Everyone turned their eyes to Kazuma. What? A reversal of the situation? But in this situation, how can the situation be reversed? Kazuma's combat power is the closest to Gojo here. Maybe he can see at a more profound level. Kazuma smiled and looked at Miwa. He said, remember, I said that the new shadow style, simple domain is not simple at all. As soon as these words came out, everyone's expression turned into one of shock. On the screen, Gojo said, new shadow style, simple domain. As soon as the words fell, a blue shield instantly appeared around Gojo, blocking Sukuna's attacks. Miwa covered her mouth in disbelief and said, it's really working. She didn't expect that this small and simple domain could have such a great effect. Sukuna's attack couldn't hurt Gojo for a while. She looked at Kazuma with gratitude. At this moment, Miwa understood that Kazuma wanted to tell her not to give up on herself. Even if you only know new shadow style, simple domain, you can still become a strong person. Others were also shocked at Kazuma's accurate prediction. Kazuma could keep up with Gojo and Sukuna in both strength and battle IQ. He was able to accurately predict the outcome of a situation that they had never anticipated. When everyone came to their senses, they were all amazed at Gojo. While the reverse curse technique was activated at full power, Gojo could actually perform a simple domain. But soon, they became confused. Kazuma said that the situation would be reversed soon, but can Gojo achieve that with just a simple domain? Choso said pessimistically, facing Sukuna's domain, this temporary and simple domain can only stall for time. If he cannot break free from the restrictions of the CT burnout, Gojo will still be unable to reverse the outcome. The best example is when Yuki fought against Kenjaku in the Tombs of Star Corridor. Hey! Yuji yelled. Faced with his brother's scolding, Choso had no choice but to shut his mouth tactfully. 2:14 A new mission. Things seem to be developing the same as in the original story. If this continues, Mahoraga will soon appear, and Gojo will probably still die under Sukuna's world-destroying slash. But it doesn't matter, now he is here. Possessing Flying Thunder God and Kamui, he can reach the battlefield in an instant using various tricks. The Black Flash Octagon cage he had obtained has never been used yet. But why hasn't the system released a mission yet? Kazuma shook his head. Let's wait a little longer. Maybe a mission will be triggered after a special node or dialogue. Looking at the weak Gojo squatting on one knee on the ground, Sukuna couldn't help but feel a little emotional. This was the first time in 1,000 years that he had admired someone so much. The battle with Gojo was simply the ultimate enjoyment, much better than that Kazuma who only knows how to play tricks. You are indeed very strong, but unfortunately, I am the mountain that you can never cross. Healing the brain is completely different from healing other body parts. You've reached your limit. There is only one result of forcibly opening the domain, and that is sudden death on the spot. Gojo's eyes were extremely solemn. Sukuna was right. He really couldn't open his domain anymore. But, Gojo looked at Sukuna who was making hand seals with his hands and smiled strangely. Mahoraga's unique will suddenly appeared above Sukuna's head, and he sinisterly said, it's all over. Next, I will cut you into countless pieces of equal size and show them to your students. Especially Kazuma who has repeatedly ruined my plans. In the meeting room, everyone's heart skipped a beat. The 4 disaster curses standing behind Kazuma were like bodyguards. Yago said calmly, it seems that the person Sukuna wants to kill the most is you. He even mentioned you by name when he is about to win. Aren't you going to beat him up? As one of the 4 disaster curses, Yago didn't care about Gojo's life or death. He just wanted to see who is stronger between Kazuma and Sukuna. Now, he clearly knew that these idiots from Jujutsu High have completely underestimated Kazuma's strength. Maybe Kazuma can beat Sukuna? If he dies, that's even better, because then he won't be under Kazuma's control anymore and can go wherever he wants. Facing everyone's expectant gaze, Kazuma chuckled and said, you all think Gojo is going to lose. Perhaps Sukuna's brain has also reached its limit. What? Everyone was delighted at first, and then looked puzzled. Sukuna has also reached his limit, but hasn't he only suffered from CT burnout twice? Wanting to find the answer, they all turned their eyes to the screen. Sukuna looked at Gojo who was half crouching on the ground with a mocking look. It's time to put this so-called showdown to a successful conclusion. You are just an ordinary mortal who happened to be born in an era without me. There is only one person who deserves the title of the strongest, and that's me, Ryaman Sukuna. Goodbye, second strongest. Domain expansion, malevolent shrine. The next second, the shrine that should have been formed behind Sukuna suddenly exploded. This scene left everyone stunned. It's actually true. Is it true that Sukuna has reached his limit as Kazuma said? At this moment, Sukuna seemed to be in a worse state than Gojo. But how? Could it be that Megami's brain is weaker than Gojo's? Yuta suddenly realized, it's infinite void. Although Sukuna was only frozen in place by infinite void for a few seconds, he still suffered severe brain trauma. The damage caused by infinite void plus Sukuna's own 2 CT burnouts are enough to prevent him from using his domain. So, that's it. After a while, Gojo teleported in front of Sukuna. How could he miss such a great opportunity? The clenched fist of his right hand was filled with all his cursed energy. The crackling sound of thunder and lightning was extremely harsh. Black flash. A punch suddenly thrust out, accompanied by black lightning. This punch pierced Sukuna's heart, and black lightning filled both their bodies. Coupled with the 2.5 power bonus of black flash, Gojo's already incredible attack became even more powerful. At this time, Sukuna, who was pierced through the heart by a black flash, had already lost consciousness. His four eyes rolled back, and he had completely fallen into a state of suspended animation. Blood gushed out from the corner of his mouth, and Sukuna lowered his head helplessly without any struggle. The undefeated king of curses was about to fall to the ground. Clang! The wheel above his head fell uncontrollably at Gojo's feet. The wheel that could adapt to everything actually made a crisp sound again. Fate is so unfair. The wheel was able to complete its rotation at the last moment. This crisp sound represented the last bit of adaptation needed. Gojo's pupils shrank rapidly. He had already sensed that familiar terrifying killing intent. The change in the situation was beyond everyone's expectations. Sukuna, who should have been dead, survived by chance again. The people from Jujutsu High watching the battle felt like they were on a roller coaster. Before they could experience the hope of dawn, despair enveloped them instantly. Sukuna actually came back to life in this way, and put Gojo in a desperate situation again? Obviously, Sukuna had been knocked unconscious by Black Flash. The other side. The moment Gojo was stunned, Mahoraga suddenly attacked and stabbed Gojo. The splattered blood reflected the panic in Gojo's eyes and the ferocious and terrifying smile of the strongest Shikigami. Gojo flew backwards at an extremely fast speed. For the first time, he felt unwilling. He has lost that golden opportunity. At this moment, he also felt the injustice of fate. If he had known this, he should have used Black Flash to blow Sukuna's head off. But at the last moment, he couldn't bear it and chose to attack the heart. Kazuma was about to speak when a prompt suddenly sounded in his mind. Ding! A new mission has been triggered. Advanced chapters on patreon.com/alex1000. 215 This is my, Uchiha Kazuma's territory. Mission Option 1 Awakening of the Old Generation of Sorcerers. Convince everyone to listen to Kashimo's advice and ignore Megami. Reward, 600 billion explosive tags. Mission Option 2 Is it lonely at the top? I am the strongest. Let everyone see who is the real strongest. Reward, Naruto's Talk no Jutsu. Mission Option 3 I heard that Sukuna is the Black Flash resistant king. Let Sukuna taste the power of the Black Flash octagon cage. Reward, Amenoda Shikara. Holy shit. 600 billion explosive tags. What does the system want me to do? To destroy all of Shinjuku? Not to mention Gojo and Sukuna, even he will find it difficult to survive. It's very powerful, but it shouldn't be used in the world of Jujutsu. Moreover, in the original plot, Megami had given up because of his sister's death. At that time, what Kashimo said would indeed be the correct choice. But since he is involved now, there is naturally nothing to worry about. As for the second reward, seriously, why would he need Talk no Jutsu? To convince Sukuna to join Jujutsu High. But in a sense, Naruto's Talk no Jutsu is the strongest ninjutsu. Not only did he convince Nagato to risk his life to save Konoha, but even Obito was moved. But Sukuna's evilness is far beyond the reach of Obito and the others. So it's better to choose the third option and use the Black Flash octagon cage to beat up Sukuna. By the way, the title of Black Flash Resistant King refers to the title that Sukuna was awarded after resisting Yuji's Black Flash 8 times in a row and still being able to jump around. Sukuna has a thick skin and even continuous Black Flashes can't do anything to him. But, what if Black Flash and 8 inner gates are used in conjunction? How will Sukuna, the king of curses, respond? The most important thing is that the reward is Amenoda Shikara. This is an incredible ability. Simply put, it is equivalent to a high-end version of Flying Thunder God. For Flying Thunder God, a mark needs to be left, but Amenoda Shikara can be used to switch positions with the target anytime and anywhere without the need for preparation. In just a few seconds, Kazuma already had the answer in his mind. Now that he has made up his mind, he just needs to find the right time to enter the battlefield. If things continue like this, Gojo will not be able to escape the fate of being cut in half. The most annoying thing is that Gojo suddenly became a clown before his death. He said he didn't let Sukuna have a good time. It is absolutely impossible for Gojo to say such a thing with his personality. In Kazuma's opinion, even if Gojo loses, he should still say stubbornly, I am the strongest. You Sukuna are just the one favored by luck, and so on. Thinking of this, Kazuma looked at the screen. Sorry, this is not the world painted by Gij, but my, Uchiha Kazuma's territory. At this moment, Kazuma was a little excited, but the students were extremely nervous. Yuji looked at Gojo who was stabbed by Mahoraga and comforted himself softly, it's okay, the winner has not been decided yet. After many twists and turns, Gojo was finally about to defeat the King of Curses. An unprecedented and glorious record will be engraved in Shinjuku. Hey, Kazuma, what are you doing? Yuji turned around and looked at Kazuma who was stretching behind him in confusion. Is he warming up? But Gojo has already won. There's no need for Kazuma to help in killing Sukuna, right? Mei and the others turned their eyes to Kazuma, who was behaving strangely. In response, Kazuma chuckled and looked at the screen. He said, "Nothing, I just want to sanction that lone king." T/N Kazuma is basically joking about Sukuna having made many binding vows. Lone king. Everyone was confused and followed Kazuma's line of sight to look at the screen. At this moment, Gojo's white hair was flying and his face was filled with a smile of confidence of victory. The seriously injured Sukuna smiled obscurely, and his devilish eyes swept over Mei's crow and stared at everyone in the viewing room, as if provoking them. Kazuma's lips slightly curved, and his eyes became slightly focused. A scarlet and gorgeous blood-red pattern rotated rapidly in his eyes, emitting a blood-red demonic light. A second later, Kazuma closed his eyes with satisfaction. Yuji couldn't help but take a few steps back and said in a trembling voice, "Wait, Sukuna is actually laughing, could it be?" A bad premonition came to his mind. Could it be that Sukuna is going to use some weird tricks? Lone. Kashimo whispered to himself. Although he couldn't understand Kazuma's meaning, his sixth sense allowed him to feel the potential crisis of death even through the screen. It was an extremely complex aura that could not be avoided no matter what. Gojo may not have won yet. Suddenly, he turned around and shouted unwillingly, "Didn't we agree that I would go fight Sukuna?" Looking at Kazuma standing there, who was motionless and had a dull expression, Kashimo's face flushed with anger. Isn't this the same clone technique that made him run around in circles in the culling game? And it's the lowest level one. Sizzle. Without any hesitation, his figure flashed. Kashimo's hand had already pierced Kazuma's body. Everyone quickly looked at this sudden scene, their eyes widened in disbelief. A sharp gust of wind blew past, it was Mei's giant axe. However, the next second, everyone's body froze in place. Kazuma, whose heart was pierced, did not shed a single drop of blood. Instead, he laughed and looked at Kashimo, whose eyes were wide open with anger. He said calmly, "The one you want to challenge is not Sukuna, but the strongest. So I think you should leave Mythical Beast Amber to the right person." After saying that, Kazuma turned into a wooden stake and fell to the ground with a bang, accompanied by white smoke rising. Yuji exclaimed, "This." Mei put away the giant axe and breathed a sigh of relief, "It's a substitution technique." But she still glanced at Kashimo coldly. Yuta curiously asked, "Wait, what about Kazuma?" Everyone turned their eyes to Kashimo again. He and Kazuma were standing the closest to each other, and from Kashimo's sudden crazy reaction, it could be seen that he should know something. Especially the words Kazuma's clone had said before it had disappeared, asking Kashimo to leave Mythical Beast Amber to the right person. What does this mean exactly? Facing the gazes of the crowd, Kashimo simply lowered his head and staggered backwards. His deep laughter gradually turned wilder. "Ha ha ha. Leave it to the strongest? Why not just say leave it to you, Kazuma?" In his opinion, although Kazuma had played around with him in the culling game, and he didn't even touch the corner of his clothes, that was because he had not used his strongest killer move. Judging from that battle, he had thought that Kazuma had fully demonstrated his abilities. Facing Kashimo's sudden crazy laugh, everyone looked at the screen with serious eyes. They were not fools, they naturally understood that Kazuma was about to join the battle. Kazuma is a low-key person, it is obvious that he is not trying to steal the limelight from Gojo. Then the only explanation is that Gojo might not be able to handle Sukuna's hidden ultimate move. 2:16 The end of Gojo vs Sukuna. The four disaster curses that had been standing respectfully behind Kazuma began to stir. Especially Yago, the Mount Fuji above his head was so excited that it spewed out sparks. Hanami gently kicked Yago and whispered, "Kazuma is not dead yet. You better hold on." Mahito and Dagon in the back couldn't hide their excitement. They are curses born from the fear of humans. How can they live under the rule of humans for long? As long as Kazuma is here, they will always be controlled and won't even have freedom. Now, Kazuma is finally going to fight against Sukuna. If he is ultimately defeated and dies at the hands of Sukuna, then they will finally be free. Then, they can do whatever they want. And if Kazuma really kills Sukuna, then they will just have to be his bodyguards from now on because resistance is useless. The more they resist, the more the chances of Kazuma using. However, they believe that Kazuma's chances of winning are slim. As disaster curses, they sensed the hidden murderous intent in Sukuna's body more clearly than Kashimo. This is also the reason why even though Kazuma had suddenly left, they were not puzzled. Because there is absolutely no way Gojo can dodge that killer move. Even Gojo can't dodge it, but Kazuma can. Rika, look at them. Yuta first summoned Rika, then glanced at Yago and the others. You'd better behave yourself. There are still plenty of people here who can deal with you even though Kazuma is not here. Yago took a deep breath, his expression remained unchanged, but he cursed in his heart. Once Gojo and Kazuma die, you will all go to annihilate Sukuna. How will you have time to take care of us then? Cherish your last beautiful moments. Although they certainly cannot defeat Yuta and the others with their current strength, their upper limit is far higher than them. If Gojo and Kazuma die, the world will fall into complete panic. At that time, the first person to see a sudden increase in strength will be Mahito. The negative emotions of fear are endless and can never be completely swallowed up. On the Shinjuku battlefield, Sukuna looked away like a frightened kitten. From the beginning of the battle, he had sensed the crows observing in the sky. Instead of caring about this, he was somewhat happy about it. It would be great if he could use this medium to let everyone in Jujutsu High see with their own eyes how Gojo will be killed by him. Just now, he wanted to announce his victory and Gojo's death in advance by staring at the crow. But then the crow's dark pupils emitted an enchanting red glow. Sukuna then realized that Kazuma was trying to use genjutsu to influence him through crows. Fortunately, he reacted quickly enough and looked away in time. Haha, annoying little brat, does he think I will fall for his trick a second time? Sukuna looked at Gojo, who was standing opposite him with a confident look on his face. Do you think you have won? After stepping half a foot into the gate of hell, he had finally understood it. He realized a slashing move that was beyond everyone's cognition. Now, activate the binding vow. That's right. To use the most powerful killing move, he needs to make a binding vow first. Originally, he only needed to form a hand seal to perform it, but he had been hit by Gojo's purple, leaving only one arm. Therefore, in order to launch his strongest move, a binding vow needs to be made. Ah. Sukuna looked up at the sky and sighed in his heart. What a huge price. If you can handle this move, I will take the initiative to leave Megami's body. However, Gojo on the opposite side still maintained a playful smile, hooked his finger provocatively, and did not finish his words. Then Sukuna's eyes narrowed slightly. Why did he feel that something was wrong with Gojo? But he couldn't quite put his finger around it. But at this moment, the binding vow has been made, and he can't care so much. I hope you can still laugh later. Sukuna's eyes flashed with ferocity, and he said hoarsely and viciously. Dragon scales, counterattack, twin meteors, world-cutting slash. Swish. No one could catch its trajectory, not even Sukuna himself could see it clearly. Plop. Gojo's body that was cut in half was lying flat on the ground. Blood was constantly flowing from the corners of its mouth. However, this shocking and unacceptable scene did not arouse any emotion among the people at Jujutsu High. Hey, what happened? What's wrong with Sukuna? Why is he talking to himself? Something seemed to flash by just now. Did anyone notice it? Yuji scratched his head in confusion, his eyes full of doubt. It's really strange. With Kazuma's teleportation ability, he should have reached the battlefield long ago, but why hasn't he appeared yet? Moreover, Gojo, who was originally standing opposite Sukuna on the battlefield, had also disappeared mysteriously. The most outrageous thing is that Sukuna seemed to be mentally disturbed, making hand seals towards the air and talking to himself. Can anyone explain this to me? Yuji, puzzled, looked back at everyone, trying to get an answer. However, the others also shook their heads, staring at the crazy Sukuna on the screen in confusion. Sukuna looked so smug as if he had won. Just when everyone was confused, Sukuna spoke. Sukuna walked closer and looked down at Gojo. He clapped and praised him generously. That's great, Gojo. I think I will never forget you in my life. The great battle I have been seeking all my life has finally come true in this era, through you. In the past 1,000 years, you were the only one who could force me to this extent. You can die with absolute pride. 217 World Cutting Slash. Remember, the technique that killed you is called World Cutting Slash. This slash is not just aimed at your body, but targets space and even the world itself. In the viewing room, space twisted, a vortex appeared, and Gojo walked out with a smile on his face. He said, Hey, why is Sukuna talking to himself in the air? Did he get stunned by my hollow purple? As the person involved, he naturally knew that all this was Kazuma's doing. The students who were staring at the screen suddenly turned around. Gojo-sensei. The first one to react was Yuji. He immediately took a step forward and punched Gojo in the chest. Yuta asked in confusion, Gojo-sensei, what is going on? Why are you here all of a sudden? Where is Kazuma? And what does Sukuna mean by the world-cutting slash? Facing all the stares, Gojo heaved a sigh of relief. Then he said with lingering fear, speaking of Kazuma, I really have to thank him. Not long ago, he was about to take advantage of Sukuna's serious injury, pursue the victory, and kill Sukuna in one fell swoop. Then, Kazuma suddenly appeared and pulled him into the Kamui dimension. At first, he was a little bit unconvinced. But when he saw Sukuna use that instantaneous slash, his heart could not calm down for a long time. That slash was so fast that even his 6 eyes couldn't catch its trajectory. Therefore, there is a high probability that he would not be able to dodge that slash. But afterward, something Kazuma said left him with a lot of question marks in his mind. What does he mean by don't have any psychological burden? This is what Sukuna got by cheating. Then, Gojo recounted what had happened. What? You mean to say that Sukuna is now under Kazuma's genjutsu? Everyone who knew what had happened took a deep breath. No wonder Sukuna suddenly showed a victorious smile and talked to the air for a long time. In other words, from Sukuna's perspective, he is looking down at Gojo's corpse. He thought he had killed Gojo and won the decisive battle. Everyone looked at Gojo, who was in good health, and then glanced at Sukuna, who was talking to himself and declaring his victory on the screen. Yuji suddenly raised his hands and said, Kazuma was watching the battle with us at that time. How did he get Sukuna to fall for it? It can't be through the screen, right? Mei seemed to recall something and smiled slightly. Nothing is impossible. If I were to be glared at by his eyes from a distance through the crows under my control, I would most likely be affected. So I guess Kazuma's genjutsu is still effective across the electronic screen. And Sukuna, at that moment, deliberately smiled sinisterly at the screen, which gave Kazuma the opportunity. After listening to this, Yuji and others swallowed their saliva and fell into deep thought. Across the screen. Has Kazuma's genjutsu reached this level? It's simply impossible to guard against. Kashimo leaned against the wall with his arms folded across his chest. His expression was still cold, but his brows were tightly furrowed. A bewitching genjutsu. Just by looking through the screen, he can make others fall into a genjutsu. Even Sukuna is no exception. Such an ability was beyond his understanding. 400 years ago, he had traveled around the world and challenged countless people, but he had never encountered such a technique. In the Culling game, Kazuma didn't seem to have used this technique against him. In other words, it didn't seem like Kazuma had to put in much effort to defeat him. It seems that his understanding of Kazuma is far from enough. At this moment, Yuji pointed to the screen excitedly and said, "Kazuma has appeared." Everyone focused their attention on the screen. Gojo also put away his frivolous attitude and watched with a serious look. Kazuma's true strength. He seemed to have never understood it. On the Shinjuku battlefield, a vortex appeared and a figure slowly walked out of it. Looking at Sukuna, who was still immersed in the world of genjutsu, Kazuma smiled faintly. He said, "Look carefully at what is in front of you." After saying this, Sukuna put away his triumphant smile as he looked down at the ground. As his pupils contracted violently, he suddenly turned his head to look at Kazuma, and then looked at the empty ground. What about Gojo, whom he had cut in half? At this moment, Sukuna's heart was like a raging sea. After being shocked for a long time, he finally muttered, "What on earth is going on?" Before he could finish his words, a yellow flash passed by at high speed, and a whisper came to his ear. "You are too delusional." Bang! With a dull thud, Sukuna was punched and sent flying. Kazuma did not chase after him but turned his head slightly. Whoosh! 3 ice spikes whizzed past his ears. The temperature of the entire Shinjuku battlefield suddenly dropped, and Kazuma looked up. A huge iceberg appeared in the sky. Yuram stared at Kazuma with cold eyes. It is this hateful guy who has ruined Sukuna-sama's plans again and again. Previously, Sukuna was having a decisive battle with Gojo, and she didn't dare to disturb him. But now, no matter what, she cannot just sit around. Facing Yuram's condescending and contemptuous look, Kazuma laughed. "Don't worry, you can fight someone else one-on-one until I beat your Sukuna-sama into a lump." Yuram was about to yell when she noticed something unusual happening above her head. Looking sideways, a passionate man who looked a bit like a gangster had appeared in front of her. Yuram said coldly, "Who are you?" "Kinji Hakari, you can also call me a reckless gambler." "Sorry, I won't let you disturb Kazuma's fight with Sukuna. You're looking for death." Yuram was extremely angry at the arrogant man's words. Without any hesitation, ice formation was maximized. Hakari sensed the potential threat and immediately used his domain. A desperate fight unfolded in the sky above Shinjuku. Although Hakari's domain enveloped Yuram, it was unable to stop the icebergs from falling. 218. Sukuna's true form. Sukuna, who was standing below, slowly raised his right hand and lightly pointed towards the air. In an instant, the rushing iceberg began to melt rapidly. The melted water formed a torrential rain, which poured down, submerging Sukuna in the dense rain. Kazuma looked at the domain in the sky and couldn't help laughing. Unexpectedly, these two people ended up fighting. As long as Sukuna does not die, the protracted battle between Yuram and Hakari will probably not end. 2 minutes later, the iceberg completely melted, and the heavy rain slowly stopped. Sukuna's figure gradually came into view. Sukuna, who originally had broken arms and legs, not only recovered all his injuries, but also grew 2 more arms. Megami's face was gone, replaced by a hideous face full of evil and violence, as if a demon had descended. A steady stream of dark cursed energy emanated from Sukuna's body. This was the true form of Sukuna from 1,000 years ago. A deep voice with murderous intent rang out, "Very good, you have managed to completely piss me off. You are the first person to see my true form after 1,000 years, and you will also be the last one. Be prepared to be chopped into countless pieces." There were 2 reasons why Sukuna had done this. First, he could quickly heal from the injuries inflicted in the previous battle with Gojo. Second, in this form, he could allow Megami to resist Kazuma's genjutsu. In his opinion, as long as he could deal with Kazuma's genjutsu, he could easily kill him. And now, he could look Kazuma in the face without restraint. Even if Kazuma used genjutsu crazily, the only one who would be tortured and possibly driven insane was Megami. Inside the viewing room, two-faced, four-handed. This should be Sukuna's final form. Yuta had some concerns. It was unknown what kind of killer moves Sukuna had hidden in this form. Could Kazuma handle it? The unprecedented feeling of oppression made it difficult for everyone to breathe, even through the screen. They could vaguely feel that Sukuna in this state was probably even more difficult to deal with. Kazuma might face a battle no less fierce than the one Gojo had faced before. Yuji exclaimed, "Is this his true form? What an evil aura." Gojo propped his chin up and stared at the screen with interest. I didn't expect Sukuna to have so many hidden cards, but he doesn't seem to be any different in this state. Kashimo stared at the screen intently, feeling very excited at the moment. An overwhelmingly powerful person, feeling lonely at the top. That was what he felt from Sukuna. He was mesmerized by Sukuna's ultimate form. How he wished he could go fight Sukuna right now. Sukuna's aura is clearly even stronger now. Kazuma, you'd better not let me down. Sukuna's eyes flashed with a fierce red light. Two of his hands were ready to make hand seals, and the other hand held a cursed tool. Another hand was pointing at Kazuma on the opposite side. The terrifying mouth growing out of his belly kept chanting. This appearance might look like a monster in the eyes of ordinary people, but in this world of Jujutsu, he had an incomparable innate advantage. The extra arms allowed him to perform hand seals while still attacking freely. Now, he had reached perfection. Sukuna put the weapon in his hand into his mouth and looked at the brat who had ruined his plans many times with contempt. From now on, I won't give you any chance to play tricks. Sukuna suddenly crushed the ground beneath his feet, and in a flash, he appeared in front of Kazuma. The four arms launched attacks indiscriminately, smashing down like a crazy rainstorm at such a fast speed that only after images could be seen. Boom, boom, boom. However, all of this was meaningless in the face of Kamui. All the attacks passed through Kazuma's body. But Sukuna had already anticipated this and, instead of stopping, increased the frequency of his attacks. Sukuna grinned and said, "You can only maintain this invincible state for 5 minutes, right?" With his current strength, it was not difficult to maintain such a high frequency of attacks. 5 minutes later, Kazuma's strange ability's duration would end. At that time, Sukuna would immediately open his domain and cut him into pieces. You don't have to wait 5 minutes. Kazuma suddenly found the right opportunity and grabbed Sukuna's forearms. How dare you? Bang! An uppercut hit Sukuna's chin, causing his head to tilt back. After coming to his senses, Sukuna clearly knew that since Kazuma had taken the initiative to attack, he had automatically exited that weird state. In other words, now was the best time to kill Kazuma. Swish! An invisible slash swept across. The entire building behind him was cut in half, and Kazuma was also cut in half. As expected, there was a bang. The unique special effects of the substitution technique appeared, the white smoke dissipated, and 2 wooden stakes fell to the ground. TSK. These are the same crooked tricks again. Sukuna said with great disdain. Crooked? What a coincidence, I know quite a lot of them. A dagger flew through the air and came behind Sukuna, accompanied by the low hum of the Rasengan. Boom! A small typhoon passed behind Sukuna. A familiar and strong push-type force hit from behind, and Sukuna couldn't stop flying forward. Kazuma did not pursue but continued to form hand seals. Sukuna, who was flying in the air, suddenly felt warning bells ringing in his heart. When he looked up suddenly, it was too late. Rasengan. Kazuma suddenly appeared in front of him and pressed the Rasengan in his hand against Sukuna's abdomen. This attack cleanly hit Sukuna's abdomen, knocking him downwards. Inside the viewing room. Wow! The clone technique can actually be used like this. Obviously, Yuji was shocked by Kazuma's superb technique. The others also looked puzzled. Why was it that when they watched Kazuma fight Sukuna, they didn't feel tense? Could it be that Kazuma's technique was just that powerful when it came to life-saving combat abilities? Was that why they weren't as worried? Shoko pushed Mei Mei's shoulder and said with a smile, "Mei Mei, you seem to be very confident about Kazuma." Mei Mei smiled mysteriously and said, "It's not confidence, but absolute trust." Gojo used 6 eyes to carefully observe Kazuma's every move. He had never carefully observed Kazuma before, but now was the perfect opportunity. From what he just saw, he felt that the mechanism of Kazuma's technique seemed a little different. It felt more practical. Kashimo analyzed, even though he has the initiative now, this attack is no different from a tickle to Sukuna. At this moment, a voice sounded from the screen. Amaterasu. 219, Sukuna is gone just like that. The black flames burned without warning. Under the strong sense of crisis, Sukuna decisively gave up the attack and moved at high speed to escape from Kazuma's sight. Even so, one of his arms caught up on a small flame. The black flame spread rapidly, and soon engulfed the entire arm. Swish! Without any hesitation, Sukuna used his slash. However, this time the target of the attack was not Kazuma, but his own burning arm. After cutting off his arm, Sukuna heaved a sigh of relief. The feeling of death had disappeared. His 4 eyes locked onto Kazuma in horror. What are all these unpredictable spells? There are no hand seals, no traces of cursed energy before the technique takes effect. He could still capture the trajectory of Gojo's cursed energy, but Kazuma's actions were without any signs. Thanks to his instincts that had been honed for years, he had chosen to dodge at the first moment, thus avoiding fatal damage. If that fire had ignited on his head, the consequences would be disastrous. After some observation, Sukuna came to a conclusion. Eyes. Kazuma's strange techniques were all activated through those scarlet eyes. This saved him the time of forming hand seals, making it impossible to defend against the attack. Next, he must focus on Kazuma's eyes. With his rich combat experience, Sukuna's brain worked at high speed, and he quickly found a solution. Thinking of this, Sukuna smiled evilly and said, "Brat, you have a lot of tricks, but they are far from enough. Come on, use all your strength to please me. As he spoke, Sukuna's lost arm had recovered, and the fighting spirit in his eyes burned. You want to dance? Why didn't you say so earlier? Kazuma gently stroked his left eye and switched the eternal Mangekyo to Rinnegan. To fight against Sukuna in his prime, the defensive Kamui is essential. The left eye's space distortion attack has a short delay, and Sukuna will definitely focus on dodging, so the hit rate is not high. In this case, why not use the power of the Rinnegan to make Sukuna dance on the spot? Kazuma clapped his hands and grinned. Wood release, wood dragon technique. Roar. A giant dragon made entirely of wood emerged from the ground. After looking around in the sky, it opened its mouth and pounced towards Sukuna. Haha, this trick again. Facing the swooping wooden dragon, Sukuna's expression was extremely contemptuous. In the battle at Shibuya, he was able to handle it with his 15-finger strength. Now that he has his full strength, it will be even easier. Boom. The wooden dragon was extremely fast. It rushed over in the blink of an eye and bit Sukuna. Its huge body was so powerful that it crushed the already dilapidated buildings around it. Sukuna used his forearms to grasp the wooden dragon's mouth, but his eyes were always fixed on Kazuma. It's just a trifle. Dismantle. As Sukuna finished speaking, countless slashes flew out from his palms. In an instant, the wooden dragon was cut into thin and brittle wooden strips that scattered all over the sky. Bang! Sukuna suddenly fell, creating a dent in the ground. Just as he was about to say a sarcastic remark, he found Kazuma pointing at the top of his head. Sukuna frowned slightly and said, "You think I will be fooled?" Before he could finish his words, a huge shadow enveloped him and the surrounding ground. Looking up, he saw a huge meteorite composed of rocks, houses, cars and other materials forcibly fused together. Kazuma said, "I'll give you a Michelin star meal. Enjoy." Boom. A huge meteorite was falling rapidly. Sukuna's pupils contracted violently, and he ran away without saying a word. With his current speed, he has a chance to escape the attack range before the meteorite lands. Kazuma's move seemed powerful, but it posed no threat to him at all. Do you want to get away? Sukuna was running at full speed when he suddenly heard Kazuma's voice coming from behind. Bansho Tenin. Kazuma stretched out his right palm calmly, pointed it at Sukuna's back, and sucked it in suddenly. The irresistible force of gravity, like an invisible iron hand, pulled Sukuna back. Just at this moment, the meteorite fell. Boom! The ground shook violently, and the whole of Shinjuku was shaken. Dust rose up in a 10-mile radius, sweeping all around like a tidal wave. The huge meteorite smashed a deep crater in the ground, and also swallowed Kazuma and Sukuna. Soon after, the space on the surface of the meteorite fluctuated. Kazuma walked out, unharmed. At the last moment, he had activated Kamui. How about Sukuna? Hopefully, he hasn't been crushed into a meat pie. There was total silence in the viewing room. Everyone was shocked by the scene before their eyes. Yuji swallowed and said, "This meteorite seems to be bigger than the one from the Shibuya incident." The others also nodded dumbly. Things are getting weird. It was clearly a battle of Jujutsu, so how come a meteorite appeared out of nowhere? The most terrifying thing is that Sukuna, who stood toe-to-toe with Gojo, was suppressed by Kazuma so soon. Could it be that Sukuna in the two-faced and four-armed state is not as strong as before? Kashimo, leaning against the wall with his arms folded across his chest, was maintaining this posture without moving. But those wide-open purple pupils betrayed the shock in his heart at the moment. Kazuma, how many moves does he have? It's okay if it's just a wooden dragon, but now even a meteorite. If Kazuma had used this move in the Culling game, could he have escaped? Kashimo clenched his fists and gritted his teeth, feeling his heart slightly shake. Sukuna, please don't die like this. At some point, the object of his concern changed from Kazuma to Sukuna. At the table, Gojo, who was sitting aimlessly, suddenly had his eyes light up. During the Shibuya incident, he was locked up in a small dark room, so this was the first time he was seeing Kazuma's Chibaku Tensei. But what surprised him most was not Chibaku Tensei, but Kazuma's perfect combination of techniques. First, he used the wooden dragon to attract Sukuna's attention, and then quickly condensed a meteorite. The most important thing is Kazuma's last-minute move, Bansho Tenin. The techniques were perfectly connected, as if all this was within his expectations. Moreover, he could feel that this form of Sukuna was not as weak as before. But Kazuma seemed to be having a much more easier time than him. Seeing that the meteorite had not made any movement for a long time, Yuji could no longer bear it and asked, "Gojo-sensei, Sukuna is gone just like that?" Just as he finished asking the question, Gojo suddenly sat up straight, his deep six eyes staring at the screen solemnly. 220, Kazuma doesn't have a domain? Everyone followed Gojo's line of sight, and then their pupils suddenly contracted. They saw the meteorite explode with a bang. The densely packed slashes rushed towards Kazuma like an overwhelming tidal wave. Everything along the way was cut into tiny pieces, without any obstruction at all. Kazuma's eyebrows slightly raised. Isn't this the move that killed Kashimo instantly? There is no place to hide, the slashes seemed to sweep away everything. It was because of this move that Kashimo couldn't even last 5 minutes. In addition, he had boasted too much before, which led to Kashimo's downfall, making him a clown. But now Kazuma was experiencing it himself, and he was deeply touched. If one tries to pass through the gap, they will end up dead. Faced with such indiscriminate attacks, Kashimo really couldn't be blamed, because there was no place to hide. But these are not problems for him. Sukuna's intention in using this move was clear. Wasn't it just to break his perfect defense, Kamui? But unfortunately for him, Kamui cannot be countered like this. Kazuma's lips raised, his choice was to avoid the limelight for the time being. After raising his middle finger to show respect to Sukuna, who was smiling evilly in the distance. Whoosh! A vortex appeared, and Kazuma disappeared into darkness. The slashes then swept across, but to no avail. Sukuna's face was distorted, and black energy was emanating from his body. Who would have thought that Kazuma would just disappear? At this moment, he even felt that Kazuma's weird ability was more difficult to deal with than Gojo's infinity. To kill Kazuma, he had to expand his domain and envelop him in it. Then, he could use an overwhelming and indiscriminate attack to kill Kazuma. Now, it was easy for him to continuously use high-intensity slashes for 5 minutes. Thinking of this, he formed seals with his hands, looked towards the empty space ahead, and said coldly, "How long are you going to hide? Sukuna, is there something wrong with your eyes?" Kazuma's voice came from behind. Sukuna knew that this was his magical ability, so he was not too surprised. He just turned around and said, "You know, I don't talk nonsense to a dying person." Domain expansion, malevolent shrine. In an instant, a terrifying cursed energy spread out, covering Kazuma. A shrine rose from the ground and stood in the center of the area. Without any hesitation, Sukuna directly controlled all the slashes in the area and surrounded Kazuma. Looking at Kazuma, who was being drowned by countless slashes after activating his Kamui, Sukuna couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Do you remember this familiar scene? At that time, I only had the strength of 3 fingers. Kazuma pretended to think about it and jokingly said, "Are you talking about that time at Eshu Juvenile Center?" "Of course I remember. That was the first time I beat you up. Now that I think about it, I miss those days a little." Upon hearing this, the frequency of slashing in the area went up to a new level. If previously, Kazuma could be seen through the gaps between the slashes, now he was completely covered by them. The murderous intent in Sukuna's eyes was about to overflow. He spoke viciously, word for word, "You are about to die, yet you still have the mind to be stubborn. If I'm not mistaken, you don't have a domain, right? The countdown starts now, you have 5 minutes left to live." At the same time, in the viewing room, Sukuna's words made everyone nervous. Sukuna's intention in opening his domain was obvious, to kill Kazuma. The showdown between top-grade powerhouses is often a confrontation between domains. Whoever has a stronger domain will have the initiative. Yuji seemed to have thought of something and asked, "Have any of you seen Kazuma's domain?" Everyone, including Gojo, shook their heads decisively. Some of these people had never seen Kazuma's technique before, let alone his domain. After a moment of silence, Gojo said, "Generally, after reaching special grade, sorcerers have their own domain. Although it is not a certainty, I think that with Kazuma's current strength, he definitely has a domain. It's just that the opponents he met before were not qualified for him to use it." As he spoke, Gojo turned his gaze towards the disaster curses behind him and gave a sly smile. In this regard, Yago and the others dared to be angry but not speak out. Damn it, how dare they openly insult the 4 disaster curses? Yago was not convinced and said, "I admit that Kazuma is very strong, but what if he really has no domain?" Yuji retorted, "You are talking nonsense. If even Kazuma can't have a domain, then few people in the world of Jujutsu can have a domain." The others also nodded in approval. Kazuma's control over his cursed technique was already terrifyingly high. It was impossible that he didn't even have a domain. If this were true, then among them, except for Gojo, weren't they all unworthy of having a domain? Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Yago seemed to have thought of something and continued, "Haha, don't rush to refute. You should know the strangeness of Kazuma's cursed techniques. Many of them are very unique. Perhaps this prevents him from having a domain. Think about it, let alone a domain, he has never even used a simple domain, right?" If this were true, then the battle situation was likely to be reversed. Now that Sukuna had opened his domain, Kazuma could only passively bear the inevitable effects of the domain. It would be best if he could die in Sukuna's domain so that they could be free. Yago's words made everyone in Jujutsu High choke for a moment. Thinking back carefully, Kazuma's techniques were indeed too abnormal. There were too many types, and the attributes were complicated. What was inexplicable was that cursed techniques were usually engraved on the human brain. How was it possible for one person's brain to carry so many different cursed techniques at the same time? Wouldn't that really be crazy? Yuji said worriedly, "Gojo-sensei, just in case, go help Kazuma." However, just as Yuji finished speaking, a voice that shocked everyone came from the screen. Domain expansion, Black Flash Octagon Cage. 221, a boxing match. In Sukuna's domain, Kazuma laughed and said, "Who said I don't have a domain?" After saying this, he put his hands together and formed a strange hand seal. Domain expansion, Black Flash Octagon Cage. In an instant, within Sukuna's domain, a closed iron octagon cage was spread out, covering Kazuma and Sukuna. The octagon cage was sealed with iron nets, the ground was stained with dark red blood, and a faint smell of blood could be noticed. Suddenly, a sound echoed from the big screen above, and cheers from the audience could be heard from the empty space. Under the colorful lights, the surrounding area was filled with audience seats, but there was no one there. Bang! On the dark stage, the spotlights were focused on Kazuma and Sukuna. Without a domain barrier, you actually have an open domain. Sukuna looked around the arena with a serious look. What puzzled him most was that Kazuma's domain was within his domain. The moment the domain was unfolded, all the guaranteed hits within his domain disappeared. No, it didn't disappear. Instead, it was blocked outside the iron net by his domain. Everyone in the viewing room was stunned. Octagon cage. Is this Kazuma's domain? Yuji stared at the screen. Gojo smiled crookedly and said, I told you, how could Kazuma not have a domain? I wonder which one is stronger, his domain or Sukuna's malevolent shrine. Mei looked at Yago and said coldly, who said Kazuma didn't have a domain just now? As soon as these words were spoken, everyone turned their eyes to Yago. At this moment, Yago just wanted to find a crack in the ground to crawl into. If you have a domain, you should have used it earlier. Why wait until now? Yago now seriously doubted whether Kazuma had done it on purpose. He had just finished speaking when Kazuma opened his domain. And it's not just an ordinary domain, but an open domain. Although its range is not large, it can be seen from the fact that it can isolate Sukuna's sure-hit attack outside the iron net. Kazuma's domain is not weaker than Sukuna's. Shoko touched her white chin and said, can any of you tell what Kazuma's domain's effect is? According to the name, the two of them fight. That shouldn't be possible, right? At this moment, a cold voice echoed throughout the entire area. Rules: 1. Duelists can only use techniques related to taijutsu. 2. Only by using Black Flash can you cause damage to the opponent. As soon as this voice came out, everyone fell silent. Shoko covered her red lips with her beautiful eyes wide open in shock. She really got it right. If you can only use taijutsu, what's the difference between that and boxing? The most outrageous thing is the second rule. You have to land a Black Flash to cause damage to the opponent. Isn't this domain too unreliable? Black Flash is not that easy to land. Even Gojo can't guarantee that every punch is a Black Flash. This is all about chance. This. Yuji scratched the back of his head, looked at Gojo, and asked, Gojo-sensei, how many Black Flashes can you use in succession? Gojo thought for a moment and replied, if I'm in good condition, landing it 10 times in a row shouldn't be a problem. If I go any higher, I can't guarantee continuous Black Flashes. There was no other way. Black Flash is too demanding. Even for masters like him and Sukuna, there is no way they could guarantee that every punch would be a Black Flash. Suddenly, Gojo's eyes lit up, as if he had thought of something. He looked at Yago and asked, Mr. Curse, do you remember that time? How many Black Flashes did Kazuma hit you in the face? I want an exact number. Otherwise. Yago involuntarily took 2 steps back, sweat breaking out on his forehead. What a joke, it was he who was beaten. As a person watching the show, do you have the nerve to ask yourself? Are all Jujutsu High graduates so shameless? Although he cursed in his heart, Yago still made up a number at random. I forgot the exact number, and I won't be able to remember it even if you kill me. But what is certain is that Kazuma fired at least 20 Black Flashes at my face. T/N, wasn't it 100? Moreover, he could even vaguely feel that if he had not been knocked into the ground from the air at that time, Kazuma would have continued with more Black Flashes. In other words, 20 consecutive Black Flashes is probably far from his limit. Hiss. Everyone gasped. 20 consecutive Black Flashes. How did Kazuma do it? They could now imagine how Yago had felt at that time. Thinking of this, everyone stopped pursuing the matter and instead cast pitying glances at Yago. 1 Black Flash hits the body and it hurts like hell, let alone 20. Mahito suddenly realized, I see. No wonder you came back with a bruised face. You didn't tell me what happened when I asked you. It turns out you were beaten by Black Flash. Yago frowned and said, Mahito, you are still so annoying. Wait. Yuji seemed to have thought of something important and asked, Gojo-sensei, how is Kazuma's taijutsu? This is a crucial point. It is even more important than the probability of hitting a Black Flash. Sukuna's taijutsu is top-notch. Kazuma seemed to have only used curse techniques to defeat his opponents, without any need for taijutsu. If taijutsu is his weakness, then wouldn't this domain harm Kazuma instead? He is better than me. Maki, who was leaning in the corner, suddenly spoke. What? Hearing this, everyone was a little surprised. They were a little confused, but they didn't dare to ask. The heartless Gojo asked with a silly smile, excuse me, which period of yourself are you referring to? He already knew about Maki's transformation, but her transformation was too sudden. It would be more appropriate to call it an awakening rather than a transformation. If Maki meant before the massacre of the Zenin clan, it was normal for Kazuma's taijutsu to be stronger than hers. But if it was after Maki awakened, then Kazuma would be considered an all-round warrior. The atmosphere suddenly became a little quiet. Yuji, Yuta, and others laughed and tried to ease the embarrassment. Shoko and the others glared at Gojo. How can you ask that? But Maki didn't seem to care at all and said decisively, in the past, and now, he is still better than me. Others may not know, but she knows it very well. Ever since she had awakened her heavenly restriction, she could increasingly feel the horror of the 8 inner gates. If Kazuma can open the 8th gate, he might even be able to kill Sukuna with just taijutsu. 222 Record Breaker Kazuma. Stronger than the current Maki. Hearing this, everyone was shocked. Within Kazuma's domain, Sukuna naturally also heard the rules. At first, he was surprised, but now he only showed disdain. Sukuna said, "Haha, this is ridiculous. Even your domain likes to do some fancy things." He was not at all nervous when it came to physical combat. On top of that, in his current state, he had 4 arms. In fact, what excited Sukuna the most was that neither party could use any techniques except taijutsu within the area. Doesn't that mean Kazuma's most troublesome kamui cannot be used? This will be a great opportunity for him. Kazuma's domain will become his own grave. Sukuna looked across the ring at Kazuma and sneered, "I'll kill you in your own domain." At that time, don't be unwilling to accept the loss. Not fair. In the viewing room, Yuji clenched his fists and said, "We should cut off Sukuna's other 2 hands." The others also looked solemn. They had actually overlooked this. In his true form, Sukuna had 4 arms. Doesn't that mean that in a physical fight, Sukuna's chances of landing a black flash will greatly increase? Gojo's eyes narrowed slightly as he thought in his heart. In the previous battle with Sukuna, Sukuna had not used black flash. But it doesn't mean that Sukuna couldn't use black flash. On the contrary, he, who had lived for thousands of years, might not be less skilled than him in the use of black flash. Plus the extra arms. The outcome of this battle had turned from a confrontation between domains into a life-and-death battle between black flashes. Whoever could cast black flash faster and more efficiently would win. The impatient Sukuna had already launched an attack. He quickly leaped in front of Kazuma, and his 4 arms simultaneously struck at different parts of Kazuma's body. The rules of the domain were clearly stated. Only by hitting a black flash could the opponent be harmed. Then he attacked from 4 different angles so Kazuma couldn't defend himself. Facing Sukuna's tactics, Kazuma sighed in his heart. The King of Curses was indeed cunning, and it was indeed difficult to defend against this. But unfortunately, this domain was tailor-made for him. His eyes and 100% black flash were not cursed techniques but his passive skills. Bang! A punch suddenly blasted out, colliding with Sukuna's 3rd arm. Black lightning exploded in the center of the ring. The Sharingan's keen observation ability allowed Kazuma to easily catch the black flash from Sukuna's fist. After a dull sound, the 2 exchanged punches. The other 3 fists of Sukuna that did not emit black flashes automatically stopped centimeters in front of Kazuma. Both of them fired black flash. Yuji stood up excitedly. Gojo's eyes slightly narrowed. Sure enough, Sukuna's use of black flash was no less than his own. Kazuma's perception was also extremely sharp, and he immediately noticed the black flash thrown by Sukuna. But what he was worried about now was, what if Sukuna got lucky and 2 or more of the 4 fists attacking from different angles produced black flashes? This possibility was not impossible. At that time, Kazuma would be defenseless. However, Kazuma's actions soon dispelled Gojo Satoru's worries, because he didn't intend to defend at all. In the arena where the domain was materialized, the dull sound of fists colliding continued. Sukuna, who was originally sure of victory, became more and more frightened as the fight went on. In the first 10 punches, both sides landed black flashes. But after 10 punches, Sukuna could no longer guarantee that he could continue to send out black flashes. But Kazuma was always able to land a black flash with every punch. Even a random kick was a black flash. Impossible. He must just be lucky. Even he, who had lived for 1,000 years, couldn't always land a black flash, so how could Kazuma, a kid, do it? However, a few minutes later, Sukuna had been beaten back step by step. A punch covered in black lightning landed on Sukuna's liver, knocking him away. At this moment, Sukuna's body was covered with scars. His eyes were full of disbelief. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. How many black flashes had Kazuma used in succession? At this moment, Sukuna realized that Kazuma was not just relying on luck to land those black flashes. In the viewing room, everyone's mouths opened wider and wider. Yuji's eyes widened, and he silently counted the number of times Kazuma had used black flash. 28, 29, 30. Are you kidding? From the beginning till now, Kazuma had already fired 30 black flashes in a row. There was no interruption in between. It seemed like he was just throwing a random punch, but the black lightning never stopped. Gojo's lips twitched wildly, and he said, he really is a monster, using black flash as a normal attack. At first, he was a little worried that Kazuma would suffer a loss in front of Sukuna, who had 4 arms. But who knew that Kazuma would be so outrageous? Shoko also changed from being nervous at the beginning to being relaxed. She even dozed off on Mei Mei's shoulder, feeling a little tired. Although she was not the one participating in the battle, a day of high-intensity combat made the dark circles under her eyes even darker. What a monster, his punches are all black and flashy. Is he even human? Mei Mei opened her red lips and smiled. It seems that the record for the highest consecutive black flashes has been broken. I'm afraid no one will ever be able to break Kazuma's consecutive black flash record. Everyone nodded in approval. Now their concern had changed from whether Kazuma could defeat Sukuna to how many black flashes Kazuma could use in succession. Gulp. Kashimo, the strongest 400 years ago, who was leaning against the wall, no longer had arrogance in his eyes. Should he be thankful that he was not in the same era as Kazuma? If Kazuma had lived 400 years ago, he probably wouldn't have been given the title of the strongest. Mahito whispered, Yago, is there any chance of a reversal? If this continues, we will have no hope of escaping Kazuma's control. Yago blinked, remained silent for a long time, and exhaled a puff of smoke. I was thinking, if Kazuma was born a few years earlier, the title of the strongest of the modern era may not have belonged to Gojo. So are we still going to turn against them? Mahito asked in a low voice. Yago said, what the hell are you thinking? Can't you see that Sukuna is almost beaten to death? Shoko sniffed and said dissatisfiedly, the viewing room is a closed space. Smoking is not allowed. Yago glanced at Shoko and didn't refute, but silently looked at the screen, thinking to himself. King of Curses, work harder. Advanced chapters on patreon.com/alex1000. 223, Sukuna with 4 black flashes. In the octagon cage, Sukuna seemed to have heard Yago's inner voice and suppressed the shock in his heart. 4 arms with clenched fists blasted out at the same time. Sizzle. 2 black flashes suddenly appeared. The King of Curses, who was at a disadvantage, unexpectedly exploded with amazing potential at this moment. All 4 fists emitted black flashes. Moreover, they attacked from 4 different directions, blocking Kazuma's escape route. Let's see how you defend. Sukuna couldn't help but grin as if he had seen victory. He still couldn't understand why every one of Kazuma's punches was a black flash. In line with the rules of the domain, he was once at a disadvantage. But as his fist falls, everything will be over. He can make many mistakes, but Kazuma can only make one mistake. This scene also made everyone in the viewing room hold their breath. 4 fists simultaneously emitted black flashes. What are the odds? What kind of shitty luck is this, Sukuna? They stared at the screen closely, and couldn't help but worry about Kazuma. T/N, Sukuna's punch is slow as a snail lol. The cunning Sukuna used the advantage of having many arms to block all the evasive routes. Kazuma might just have to take it head on. There is no way to avoid it. Gojo's eyes turned solemn. If he was in Kazuma's place, he would choose to save his vital points at the last moment. Faced with this situation, what choice will Kazuma make? However, the next second, Maki, who was leaning against the wall with an indifferent look, suddenly discovered something and was shocked. She flashed in front of the screen and almost put her face on it. Although she also knew how to do it, this was the first time she had seen Kazuma use this technique. At this moment, Maki's face was flushed, and her body was slightly shaking because of excessive excitement. Everyone looked at Maki, who was acting abnormally, somewhat puzzled. Is it because of worry about Kazuma? But no matter how you look at her, she seems excited now. Maki said in a trembling voice, it's coming. Yuji tensed up and was totally on different wavelengths. Yes, Sukuna's attack is about to touch Kazuma. The next second, a familiar voice sounded. Gate of limit, open. Boom. A terrifying wave of air burst out from Kazuma, deflecting all of Sukuna's punches that were about to hit him. Kazuma's hair fluttered, and his aura surged. When he saw black lightning coming out of all of Sukuna's 4 fists, he was indeed a little surprised. Although he could easily perform Black Flash whenever he wanted, it did not mean that he didn't know the difficulty of using a Black Flash. Now he even suspected that Sukuna had made another binding vow. Being forced into a desperate situation, maybe Sukuna skipped breakfast tomorrow in exchange for being able to land a Black Flash. But there is nothing to be worried about. He didn't even plan to hide. The moment a gate is opened, a strong airflow will burst out. It is possible to knock people away or cause internal injuries. He seized the opportunity, opened the gate at that moment, and shook off all of Sukuna's fists. This operation completely stunned everyone in Jujutsu High. They had never expected that Kazuma could resolve the crisis in this way. Panda, who had long coveted the 8 inner gates, had his eyes sparkle. That's right, that's it. The taijutsu that Maki used in the Zenin clan. This is also the secret to quickly transforming into Kung Fu Panda. After everything is over, he must find a way to learn this. The expressions of the others also changed. Maki had long lost her indifference, and did not care about her loss of composure at the moment. She was breathing rapidly, and her eyes were filled with desire. Toji also seemed to have seen a treasure. He, who had developed his taijutsu to the extreme, could see at a glance how powerful Kazuma's taijutsu was. If he could learn it, his strength would definitely double. Kashimo was also extremely shocked. Even 400 years ago, he had never seen such a move. However, the most confused person was Sukuna, who had experienced it personally. Sukuna staggered back due to the shock. He stared in disbelief at Kazuma, whose momentum had doubled. What's going on? Isn't it said that any techniques other than physical techniques are not allowed in this area? Could it be that Kazuma's amplification technique is a physical technique? Is that even possible? How is it? Are you satisfied with my crooked ways? Mocking words sounded from behind. Sukuna's pupils contracted and his expression changed drastically. When, bang, black flash, plus the 5th gate of the 8 inner gates, the buffs are fully stacked. A solid punch. Sukuna's 4 eyes widened, his body arched into a ball, and he flew out as fast as a cannonball. His body hit the sealed iron net heavily. It's almost time to end this. Gate of view, open. Boom. The green flames that had almost condensed into substance were attached to Kazuma's body, and a powerful momentum swept across the entire area. Feeling the boiling blood in his body and his surging strength, Kazuma's mouth curled up. Almost instantly, Sukuna, who had just stood up, had his vision occupied by a fist. Bang! Another punch. This time, even though Sukuna raised his arm to block, he was still knocked away. At this moment, Sukuna was panting heavily, staring at Kazuma intently. He actually felt a little terrified. Impossible. His aura is still rising exponentially. How can this be considered a crooked way? This is clearly cheating. Looking at Sukuna, who was full of shock, Kazuma did not choose to chase him this time. Instead, he looked at the crow flying in the sky and said with a smile, "Want to see it?" Inside the viewing room, Maki seemed to be electrocuted and nodded frantically like a chick pecking at rice. After gate of view, Yuji couldn't help but ask, "Maki-senpai, how many gates are there?" The others also nodded and looked at Maki with curiosity. Even through the screen, they could still feel the powerful aura emanating from Kazuma. The power of this technique can also be seen from Sukuna's horrified expression. Maki said calmly, "There are 8 gates in total, and now we are at the 6th gate." As soon as these words came out, "What? Only the 6th gate? Just opening the 6th gate is enough to beat Sukuna like this." And they can see that every time Kazuma opens a gate, his momentum increases by several times. If the remaining 2 gates are opened, Kazuma, how strong can he get? Gate of shock, open. Boom. Like a volcanic eruption, a terrifying gust of air spread out. The green flames that were originally burning all over his body had completely solidified into substance, and even had a faint hint of red. The veins on Kazuma's arms and forehead were already bulging. He clenched his fists and felt the explosive power in his body. Then he grinned and looked at Sukuna opposite him. 224, Gate of Death. Sukuna's eyes turned extremely solemn. There is no doubt that Kazuma's aura had surged once again. What exactly is this technique that he has mastered? Even he, the king of curses, had never seen it before. Boom. Kazuma punched out, and the green-red flames were mixed with black lightning. Sukuna's expression changed drastically. He knew that he couldn't withstand this move head-on, so he moved quickly and tried his best to dodge. However, Kazuma's speed at this moment had surpassed Sukuna's. Although Sukuna tried his best to dodge, one of his arms was still blown off. A black aura rose and blood splattered. Looking at the lost arm, Sukuna was furious. "Little brat, you are looking for death." At this moment, Sukuna adjusted his cursed energy to the extreme. A black energy, which was almost thick enough to be tangible, spread out. A crazy rain of fists came crashing down recklessly. He had never felt so aggrieved before and no longer cared about anything else. However, this is inside the black flash octagon cage. No matter how hard you try, it will be in vain if you can't land a black flash. Sukuna was just making his last struggle now. After sending Sukuna flying with a punch, Kazuma suddenly had an idea. He had never opened the 8th gate. In the past, he didn't dare to use it because the backlash was too great. But with his current physical strength, can he open it now? In the distance, Sukuna spat out a mouthful of blood. He was seriously injured and had no time to get up before his eyes suddenly widened. He seemed to sense something. The air was filled with the breath of death. The little brat in front of him, whom he had always looked down upon, was now like a deadly demon. At the same time, in the viewing room, Maki, who felt something strange, took 2 steps back uncontrollably. Is it finally coming? But can he really open the 8th gate? No, it's not so much whether he can open the 8th gate, but whether he really dares to open the 8th gate. With her current physique, she can open the 7th gate. But she never dared to open the 8th gate. She remembered what Kazuma had told her when he had taught her this technique. Unless necessary, you must not forcefully open the last few gates. Otherwise, you might even die. Thinking of this, Maki's eyes began to show worry. She clearly knew that Kazuma could kill Sukuna right now at the 7th gate. But how can he resist the stunning beauty of the 8th gate? Does he have to be so ferocious? Gojo and the others also noticed the worry in Maki's eyes and couldn't help asking, "Maki, the conditions for opening this 8th gate are very harsh." Speaking of which, Maki-senpai, the 7th gate is called the Gate of Shock, so what is the name of the 8th gate? Maki took a deep breath and a smile appeared on his face. She understood. Besides the fact that he wants to witness and feel the power of the 8th gate, Kazuma has 2 other purposes. One is to give enough respect to Sukuna. This is the tacit understanding between the strong. The second is to display it for herself to see. Thinking of this, Maki looked at the bright screen and said softly, "The 8th gate, Gate of Death." Death, Gate of Death. Did he hear that correctly? Gojo said in a deep voice, "This name sounds a bit too crazy, doesn't it? Could it be the kind that can only be opened once in a lifetime, and will cause sudden death after opening it?" Maki nodded, then shook her head. She said, if it's Kazuma, the backlash might not be so severe. Indeed. Shoko agreed, his physique is very terrifying. As one of the participants who was responsible for helping Kazuma fuse Hashirama cells, she knew Kazuma's physique very well. That abnormal recovery ability is even comparable to Hakari's idle death gamble. Maki recalled, first there was Night Guy. With all 8 gates opened, he kicked the gods. They had never thought that one day they would hear such a Chiyanibia line from the aloof Maki. Maki didn't feel embarrassed at all, but murmured to herself, this is what Kazuma told me privately back then. I guess the Night Guy mentioned in this passage should be the creator of the 8 inner gates. And Kazuma should have taken over his legacy. Everyone nodded after they realized what was happening. They thought this Night Guy must be a very powerful sorcerer. At least his accomplishments in taijutsu are very impressive. And he must be a very low-key person, otherwise there would be some record of him in the history of the Jujutsu world. Within the domain, Kazuma's aura had reached its peak. The entire domain began to shake. I must not let him continue to grow stronger. The sense of crisis of death surged into Sukuna's heart. This feeling of fear was even stronger than when he was facing Gojo. Kazuma's ultimate killer move had already brought such a terrifying sense of oppression before it was even launched. At this moment, Sukuna truly realized Kazuma's strength. He should have taken him seriously earlier. He was confused by his strange ability before. All of his attention was focused on Kazuma's Kamui. But Kazuma actually possessed such abnormal domain and taijutsu. But no matter what, he is the king of curses, he is the strongest. While thinking, Sukuna's fist was already approaching Kazuma's chest. Black lightning entangled his fist. This was his full-strength attack. If it hit, it would penetrate Kazuma's heart and kill him instantly. There is only one strongest in this world, and that is me, the king of curses. Yeah. Kazuma suddenly opened his eyes, and after some breathing exercises, he adjusted his physical condition to the most perfect state. In addition, his chakra quickly gathered towards the acupuncture points of the Gate of Death. In this way, he can not only break through his limits and open the last gate, but also effectively protect himself. The beating of the heart sounded like a death knell to Sukuna's ears. Thump, thump, thump. The entire area was filled with the sound of heavy and rapid heartbeats, strong and powerful. Even those who were watching the battle could hear it clearly. Kazuma's eyes flashed with madness, and he said excitedly, Gate of Death, open. In an instant, the original green chakra instantly turned into a red flame, and even his hair was dyed blood red. A violent and uncontrollable aura swept over like a strong wind. Blood-colored steam continued to rise from his head, symbolizing extremely strong vitality. This is the Death Gate. 225. This is youth. Bang! A punch suddenly blasted out, accompanied by a sonic boom. Sukuna was punched into the air, shock flashing in his eyes. He didn't even see clearly when Kazuma had thrown the punch. Then, Kazuma's leg muscles tensed, and he instantly arrived near Sukuna's head. Bang, bang, bang. For a while, sonic booms continuously sounded. Kazuma kept flashing and hitting Sukuna continuously. With another punch, Sukuna slammed down hard on the ring floor. However, Sukuna, with blood flowing from the corner of his mouth, was not afraid at all, but laughed wildly. Ahem. I thought it was something else, but it turns out to be a technique to overdraw vitality. How long can you last in this state? He concluded that Kazuma would not be able to maintain this state forever. It won't be long before his internal organs reach their limit. At that time, before he does anything, Kazuma himself will probably explode and die due to the huge backlash. Want to kill him through the mechanism within the domain? What a wild idea. He is the king of curses. How could he be killed so easily? In the viewing room, everyone had a solemn expression on their faces. Maki calmly analyzed, Sukuna is right, even Kazuma can't maintain this state forever. But Sukuna is being too hopeful. Kazuma can cancel this state at any time. Gojo seemed to have seen something through 6 eyes and smiled with emotion. I didn't expect Kazuma to have such a terrifying trump card. Even I don't dare to say I can win against him in this state. However, I feel that this so-called Gate of Death is more than just that. More than that. Everyone's mouth twitched. Isn't it enough to beat Sukuna like this? Could it be that there is some other move Kazuma hasn't used yet? Just when everyone was confused, Kazuma suddenly squatted down strangely. Seeing this scene, Sukuna, who was laughing crazily, suddenly froze. A strong sense of death surged into his heart. Kazuma grinned and said, You are right, I can't sustain this state for too long. But, from now on, I only need one move. Hearing this, Sukuna became shocked. His intuition told him that Kazuma was not lying to scare him. Could it be that he has a more powerful move that can kill him in one strike? Boom! A fiery red aura rushed to the sky, and the arena that had materialized within the domain actually began to crack. A huge, bloody, illusory red dragon wrapped around Kazuma. With a roar, it swooped down, as if it could destroy everything. Sukuna's pupils shrank violently, and he tried to run away, but found that his feet were like lead, unable to move. Even the air around him was locked. This attack is unavoidable. So fast. Even space is distorted. In a split second, the red dragon arrived in front of him. Kazuma flew in the air and delivered a flying kick. Bang! Sukuna's eyes widened in horror, and he vomited blood. Then, the red dragon pierced through Sukuna's heart. Crack! The sound of his sternum breaking reached his eardrum. Sukuna could no longer see clearly at this moment, and could only hear the violent roar in his ears. There was absolutely no room for resistance. After the aftermath dissipated, the venue was in tatters, and the solid octagon cage was removed by Kazuma because it could not withstand the powerful force. There was total silence in the viewing room. Huff! Maki's clenched fists finally loosened. It's over. There is no doubt that Sukuna has no chance of surviving such a horrific blow. But she guessed that Kazuma had spared Sukuna's life because it involved Megami. Yuji stared at the screen with dull eyes, unable to calm down for a long time. Did you see that? The kick Kazuma just made even distorted the surrounding space. Gojo shook his head and laughed. Is this the pinnacle of taijutsu? No, this can't be classified as taijutsu at all, right? What kind of taijutsu can even distort space? Kashimo's heart was churning. Sukuna. Sukuna lost. In other words, Gojo and Sukuna fought to the death for the title of the strongest, but in the end, Kazuma was the actual strongest? That kick just now was beyond his understanding. In other words, he should challenge Kazuma now. But is there still a need for a challenge? If he had not seen the Gate of Death, he might have arrived at the battlefield. But now, in comparison, his ultimate move Mythical Beast Amber that he had saved for 400 years is probably not as good as Kazuma's random punch in that state. On the battlefield, Sukuna lied on the ground, dying. In addition to being covered in blood, half of his upper body was missing. His pupils were dilated, and his eyes were staring blankly into the sky. This kick is called youth. Kazuma looked down at Sukuna. He had already exited the Gate of Death at this moment. After all, the backlash is too great, and keeping it open for one more second would be harsh on his own body. The reason why he hadn't kicked Sukuna's head was naturally because he had taken Megami into consideration. Although most of the upper body is gone, with Shoko here, it should be possible to save him. Youth, hee. Sukuna's weak voice sounded, and he seemed to be extremely disgusted with that word. Having been the strongest in history, he had fought and killed countless people, leaving countless souls at his mercy. He had long forgotten what his youth was like. In other words, Sukuna doesn't need these things. The sight in front of him gradually changed. When he opened his eyes again, he had arrived at a pure white space. All the pain in his body had disappeared, and he could no longer sense the existence of any cursed energy. Kazuma looked around the space curiously. Is this that space? T/N, he is referring to how most of the characters in JJK arrive at a white space when dying. Overall it's pretty good, but it's all white. You'll go crazy if you stay here for too long. Sukuna said, haha, I've always been the one to give others this experience before their death, but I didn't expect it to be the other way around this time. Hearing this, Kazuma waved his hand and smiled casually. Don't blame yourself too much. After all, I was cheating, so it's normal to lose. Cheating. Hearing this, Sukuna smiled. He naturally didn't believe it and just thought Kazuma was joking. 1,000 years ago, I killed almost all the sorcerers and became truly invincible. The loneliness I felt afterward made me willing to cut off my soul and cross the shackles of time to come to the present world. I just hoped that a strong person who interested me would be born in the world 1,000 years from now. At first, most of my goals were focused on Gojo. I thought that only he could make me fight him with all my strength. But now, Sukuna looked at Kazuma deeply and said, everyone, including me, has greatly underestimated your strength. Advanced chapters on patreon.com/alex1000. 226 Slime Kuna. Sukuna asked, was that your full strength? Tell me, it's very important to me. Kazuma replied, no, I still have a lot of abilities that I haven't used yet. He was not exaggerating in order to strike back at Sukuna. He really had many other means at his disposal. For example, Kota Amatsukami. As long as he wanted, he could have used it when Sukuna wasn't paying attention. Forcefully change Sukuna's will, and even making him become a pacifist right away. There is also Kamui, offensive, and the ability that he will soon acquire, Amenota Shikara. If the timing of these two spatial abilities is accurate, it is entirely possible to kill Sukuna. Sukuna was not disappointed, but smiled and said, really? It seems that I didn't let you have enough fun. As if sensing something, Sukuna suddenly stared at Kazuma and said with a wicked smile, but remember this, even if you have won, in front of me, your techniques will always be crooked and evil. I am the king of curses. I will come to the human world again many years from now. It is uncertain who will win or lose by then. After saying this, Sukuna automatically separated from Megami's body, and thick black smoke rose from Megami. Kazuma's eyebrows slightly raised. He hadn't expected Sukuna to disintegrate so easily and leave Megami's body. Originally, he thought that given Sukuna's personality, he wouldn't leave Megami's body. At that time, he could have used Kota Amatsukami to brainwave, teach him the ways. But now, it would be a redundant operation. It seems that Kota Amatsukami will have to be left to Kenjaku. If Kenjaku wants to blame someone, he can blame Sukuna. Soon, Kazuma's vision returned to reality. Megami also regained control of his body, but it seemed that because of tanking Gojo's infinite void, he was in a coma. The funniest thing is that the arrogant king of curses turned into a thing similar to slime. Several hurried footsteps came. Great. Kazuma, I didn't expect you to be so strong. You are really good at hiding it. Gojo flashed to Kazuma's side, put his arm around his shoulder and laughed softly. Will you spar with me someday? As if afraid that Kazuma would refuse, Gojo added, although you beat Sukuna, you still have to defeat me to be the strongest. Yuji joked, Gojo-sensei, your desire to compete with Kazuma is written all over your face. Is it that obvious? In response, everyone couldn't help but smile and shook their heads. Not only did they not object, but they even had some expectations. Instead of Kazuma versus Sukuna, they want to see Kazuma versus Gojo more. Moreover, they are in the same group and can provide exciting battles for them to watch and learn from without any danger. Best of both worlds. Kazuma said with a smile, if you lose, I will be the strongest in the current world. Unexpectedly, Gojo didn't care at all and said, it's just a title, I don't care. But the prerequisite is that you have to use all your strength and defeat me. To some extent, Gojo is actually no less of a fighting maniac than Kashimo. But the kindness and responsibility in his heart did not allow him to fight with anyone at will. And he has already seen how powerful Kazuma is. When truly strong people fight, it is very difficult to control them. Gojo suddenly said seriously, it will take more than time or disease to kill me. So, that is the agreement, and we will both give it our all at that time. Everyone. They suddenly didn't want to see the battle between Gojo and Kazuma. After all, if anything happens to either side, it will be a huge loss for Jujutsu High. Kazuma smiled at Shoko, then pointed to the unconscious Megami on the ground. Can he be saved? When these words came out, everyone slapped their foreheads. They had forgotten about Megami for a moment. Shoko waved to several assistant supervisors behind her to carry Megami onto the rescue stretcher. She said, don't worry, his heart is not damaged, so it's not a big problem. But what about the spirit? She deliberately emphasized the last word and looked at Gojo. Gojo immediately passed the blame, hehe, it's all because Sukuna was too cunning. He actually let Megami defend him against my infinite void. Nobara looked around and asked, the one lying on the ground just now was Megami, where is Sukuna? Everyone also reacted. Right, where's Sukuna? Even if he is dead, there has to be a body, right? Hearing this, Kazuma pointed to the strangely shaped object on the ground. What? Everyone looked at Sukuna's soul on the ground in shock. You are telling me this is the strongest from 1,000 years ago, Sukuna? Was your kick too outrageous? Did your kick turn Sukuna into this? No, tell me, what did you do to Sukuna? In a good mood, Nobara suddenly said jokingly. Shoko and the others stared at Sukuna with curiosity. Gojo even picked up a branch and poked Sukuna. Kazuma explained, it has nothing to do with my kick. Sukuna's body is already dead. This should be his soul form. Soul form? Is there such a thing in this world? Then, everyone nodded in agreement. After all, Sukuna is the king of curses who has lived for 1,000 years, so it is normal for him to have one more form than ordinary people. However, he should not pose a threat now. Choso, who had been silent the whole time, whispered, Sukuna looks a bit like my brothers who were abandoned by Kenjaku. Gojo said, you mean, Sukuna is related to the death paintings? Choso shook his head and said, he has nothing to do with the death paintings, but I feel that he has some connection with Yuji. Yuji, I guess you feel it too, right? Yuji stared at Sukuna intently. Although he hated Sukuna the most, and wanted to kill him 100 times. But now, seeing Sukuna like this, he can no longer hate him. But it was not because he felt sorry for Sukuna, but because he indeed sensed an aura related to himself. Although it is very faint, it is real. Otherwise, he would have stepped forward and crushed Sukuna to the ground. After a careful observation, Yuji quickly stepped forward, and squatted down. He looked down at the source of all this evil, and said calmly, it seems like you can't do evil anymore. What are you going to do, Sukuna? However, Sukuna did not respond, but simply glanced at Yuji with his only remaining eye. Yuji, who received no response, suddenly squatted down and held Sukuna's soul in his hands. 227. Search for Kenjaku. In a way, you are me, Sukuna. We are all born with a curse. We have no choice. What kind of monster we become depends entirely on luck. I am lucky. I have a grandfather, a teacher, and reliable partners. That's why I didn't become a demon like you who kills people without blinking an eye. Yuji's words came so suddenly that everyone was stunned. Kazuma was moved. Could this be the protagonist's line at the crucial moment? Yuji continued, the crimes you have committed are simply unforgivable. Don't show up as a curse in your next life. The soul lying in the palm of his hand could no longer express joy, anger, sorrow, or happiness, and Sukuna gradually began to dissipate. Faint and extremely disdainful words came out of his mouth. What an ignorant kid. Don't look down on me, Yuji, and all of you Jujutsu High people. I am a curse. I don't need you to tell me what to do. Several years later, I will continue to be born as a curse. Will you be able to stop me then? After saying this, Sukuna dissipated. All the grudges and entanglements turned into a wisp of smoke and dissipated with the wind. The arrogant king of curses, Sukuna's soul returned to hell. At the same time, on the other side of the battlefield, Hakari and Yuram were in the middle of a battle. The fierce and evenly matched battle had left both their clothes in tatters. There were countless injuries of varying sizes on their body. Suddenly, both of them stopped at the same time. Obviously, they had felt the abnormality outside. Yuram suddenly lost all her will to fight, and slowly looked up at the snowflakes falling on her palm. It's all over. Hakari knew that Sukuna was dead, but he did not laugh at her. Yeah, it seems to be over. Your master is dead, what are you going to do now? The two people who had fought desperately seemed to have become close friends who could talk about anything at this moment. Although the two had fought for a very short time, Hakari still had respect for this loyal and powerful woman/man in front of him. Hearing Hakari's words, Yuram remained indifferent, but a hint of sadness appeared in her eyes. Plans? I have no plans at all. But you all should remember that Sukuna-sama was defeated because he wanted to be defeated. Instead of you actually defeating him. In the final analysis, it's just luck. You should be thankful that you were born 1,000 years later. You managed to save your life. As she spoke, a unique trace of frost appeared on Yuram's face. However, Hakari did not care about Yuram's final stubbornness and ridicule. Instead, he laughed. Just good luck. That's a really great answer. For me, good luck is the best compliment in the world. More and more frost covered Yuram's face, and the smile on her lips was full of relief. Haha, I almost forgot that you are a gambler. Since Sukuna-sama has disappeared, it is naturally impossible for her to survive. Yuram turned into snowflakes all over the sky. The servant who had followed Sukuna for 1,000 years did not hesitate at all. She expressed her absolute loyalty with her life. Hakari slowly looked up at the flying snowflakes in the sky and laughed. You said I was a gambler. You, Yuram, are no exception. You staked your life entirely on Sukuna's victory or defeat. He only gambles money most of the time, but Yuram gambled her life. By the way, I'd better tell you one more thing. That cunning old fox Kenjaku is hiding in Shibuya. Don't you Jujutsu High people like to get rid of harm for the people? Get rid of him. The snowflakes dissipated into the sky and earth, leaving only Yuram's voice echoing. At the Shibuya incident site, a group of sorcerers were conducting a search. After the last battle in Shibuya, this place had been reduced to ruins. All the houses and buildings were demolished, especially the big pits in the central city, which were completely deserted. Who could have imagined that before this was one of the most prosperous cities in the whole of Tokyo? Gojo's lips twitched and he said, Kazuma, I now know why the higher-ups wanted to issue an execution order against you. Hearing this, Kazuma's eyebrows slightly raised. At that time, in order to complete the mission, he launched a Shinra Tensei. Although he was happy with the result, the higher-ups had probably faced huge economic losses. Gojo asked urgently, Hakari, is what Yuram said true or false? In a way, she and Kenjaku were in a cooperative relationship, right? Now that Sukuna is dead, the last thing he has to do now is to free his deceased best friend Geto. Hakari said indifferently, I'm not sure, but I feel that she was not lying. Kazuma thought that Yuram was most likely telling the truth because she has always hated Kenjaku. Mei carried her battle axe and slowly opened her eyes that were covered by her hair. She said, after a search, Kenjaku wasn't found on the left side. By the way, let me remind you that I don't help for free. You have to pay me based on my time. The corners of Gojo's lips twitched, but he still smiled and said, don't worry, you won't lose a penny. Besides being a teacher at Jujutsu High, he is also the head of the Gojo clan. So in regards to money, he has no problem. At this time, Gojo looked at his cell phone and saw a message from Yuta. After reading it, Gojo's eyes slightly narrowed. Yuta couldn't find Kenjaku in the right half of the area either. Almost the entire Shibuya has already been searched. Could it be that after learning that his only protector, Sukuna, had died, Kenjaku is hiding in some corner? The others also agreed with this. After all the experts in the Jujutsu world have come out in full force, and without any protection, Kenjaku must be trembling in fear. Now, things have gotten quite troublesome. After all, the location provided by Yuram was very rough, and not detailed. Shibuya is so big that it would be hard to find Kenjaku if he wanted to hide. The most important thing is that Kenjaku might use ordinary people as hostages. So no matter what, they must find him as soon as possible. Who knows if Kenjaku will start another culling game? But where is Kenjaku hidden? After thinking for a moment, Kazuma said, actually, there is a place we haven't searched yet. Gojo asked, is there anywhere else we haven't searched yet? Kazuma replied, subway station. After hearing this, Gojo slapped his forehead. How could he forget about this? 228 Amenotashikara, Kenjaku's trap. After the last Shibuya incident, both the north and south entrances of the subway station had collapsed. In this case, it is possible that Kenjaku is hiding there. Soon after, Kazuma and his companions arrived at the subway station entrance that was blocked by huge rocks. Gojo decisively raised his hand. Ha! Boom! After a loud explosion, the boulder exploded and the entrance to the stairs appeared. Because this place was underground, it was not greatly affected by the Shinra Tensei. Gojo waved his hand and said, let's go directly to the 5th underground floor. Mei was puzzled and asked, why not let my crow go and check out first? Are you so sure that Kenjaku must be hiding there? Gojo said, intuition. He was sealed by Kenjaku using the prison realm in that place, so it is highly likely that Kenjaku is hiding there. After making the decision, Gojo walked in first. Kazuma followed at the back, closely behind. Just then, ding, congratulations on completing the mission. A Menotoshikara is available for collection. Do you want to collect it? Kazuma silently said in his heart, yes. After a few seconds, Kazuma blinked. Is that all? No, it is necessary to inspect the goods. His eyes slightly narrowed, and his Rinnegan emitted a purple light. Kazuma looked towards Mei Mei, who had already walked several dozen meters ahead. Mei Mei, holding the battle axe, seemed to sense something and turned around. She asked in confusion, what are you thinking about? Come on. Swish. Almost instantly, Kazuma's position had been swapped with Mei Mei's. Mei Mei returned to the subway station entrance, and Kazuma appeared at the place where Mei Mei was just now. Huh, why am I behind you? Looking at Kazuma, who had appeared in front of her, Mei Mei's beautiful eyes flashed with surprise. Swish. After another moment, the two people returned to their original positions. It's back again. Mei Mei looked at Kazuma, who had appeared behind her again, with a puzzled look on her face, totally puzzled. One thing is certain, this must be Kazuma's doing. Wait, swap positions. Isn't this Tadu's technique? How can you do that? Kazuma was about to explain, but Mei Mei overturned everything she had just said. No, Tadu's technique has long been no secret. He can indeed switch places with others, but he needs to complete the prerequisite of clapping. And she clearly saw everything Kazuma had done just now. Apart from standing there stupidly, there was no action. The only explanation is that he had silently activated that technique through his eyes. Kazuma's eyes are really weird. Swish. In another moment, Kazuma appeared beside Mei Mei. He reached out and patted Mei Mei's shoulder, and said with a smile, let's go and find Kenjaku. Mei Mei's delicate body shuddered. She looked left and right, but found that nothing had been swapped. Even Gojo, Hakari and others who were walking in front did not become victims. Wait, how did you get here? Kazuma naturally knew what she wanted to ask, and chuckled. The air can also be swapped. Hearing this, Mei Mei's breath stagnated. What? Even the air can be swapped. What kind of monstrous technique is this? She could already imagine the scene when Gojo and Kazuma would fight. Thinking of this, Mei Mei chuckled. She leaned over and whispered, you are worthy of being the man I want to support. Kazuma raised his eyebrows slightly. Support me? It seems pretty good. After all, Mei Mei should have saved a lot of money, right? It is not an exaggeration to describe her as a rich woman. Kazuma joked, first give me 50,000 to see if you are sincere. Go to hell. Mei Mei rolled her eyes at him and walked forward. Kazuma followed closely behind. Gojo was right. There was a high possibility that Kenjaku was hidden in that place. His Rinnegan could clearly see the remaining cursed energy in the air. The deeper he went, the thicker the concentration of cursed energy became. And it is obvious that this cursed energy is unique to Kenjaku. But it seems that Kenjaku has no intention of hiding. Instead, it was as if he had deliberately left traces of his cursed energy in the air. He must be planning some conspiracy. But it doesn't matter. Sukuna is dead, and even if Kenjaku uses all his tricks, it will be useless. It's a good opportunity to test the power that he had just acquired. Dozens of construction workers were tied up. At the same time, 10 cursed spirits were guarding the place. Wivyuwu, someone come save me, I don't want to die yet. I have old people and young children to take care of. Please let me go, Kenjaku-sama. Yes, we are just ordinary people. We will not affect you and will never disclose any of your information. Ever since the last Shibuya incident, this city has been on everyone's blacklist. Even most construction workers don't dare to come here. This is why, after so long, Shibuya is still in ruins. No one dares to come here for reconstruction, for fear that disaster will strike again. However, under the temptation of high remuneration, there are many workers who are willing to take risks in pursuit of wealth and fame. But just as they were about to start construction, they were caught by Kenjaku and taken hostage. Kenjaku smiled gently, completely lacking the temperament of a villain. He stretched out his hands and gently touched the face of a worker, causing the latter to tremble with fear. Kenjaku coldly said, "Don't worry, I stand for mercy and salvation. So how could I bear to kill you? It is my mission to subdue the devil and save all living beings. You are right, and we trust you immensely." "Yes, Kenjaku-sama, we are just ordinary people, and have nothing to do with demons." Several workers with good sense quickly agreed. Kenjaku chuckled and continued in a gentle voice, "This time I want to use you to attract a demon named Gojo. Before that, you'll have to bear with it for a while. You may not have heard of Gojo, but he was the initiator of the Shibuya incident. It can be said that without him, Shibuya would not have become so miserable." Kenjaku framed Gojo without any change in expression. Now that Sukuna is dead, Gojo will definitely look for him as soon as possible. Under 6 eyes, even if you hide to the ends of the earth, it will be of no use. It would be better to just set up a simple trap and wait for Gojo to come. 229. Kenjaku's bond. Kenjaku seemed to have sensed something, and looked back. He then smiled and said, he arrived faster than I thought. Standing opposite him were Gojo and his group. Looking at the dozen workers who were gagged and tied up behind Kenjaku, everyone's expression slightly changed. Sure enough, this 1,000-year-old fox, Kenjaku, will never surrender. Yuki was a little surprised and asked, "The black hole didn't swallow you?" Kenjaku chuckled and said, "It is my honor to be remembered like this by Yuki-san. But my grand plan has not yet been completed. How can I die so easily?" Then, Kenjaku turned his gaze to Gojo Satoru and asked, "How did you feel in the prison realm? Or, do you not have anything to say to me?" In his opinion, since he had occupied the body of his best friend and sealed him into the prison realm, Gojo should hate him to the extreme. But now, he seems too calm. Facing Kenjaku's provocation, Gojo smiled casually. He said, "It felt good. Inside the prison realm, I don't have to get up early, I don't have to go to work, I'm free, it's just like a vacation. The only downside is that it's a bit boring, but that's it. As for what I want to say to you, sorry, there is nothing much to say to a parasite like you who occupies another person's body. Ha ha ha." Facing the siege, Kenjaku was not panicked at all. He pointed at his head and said, "You are obviously in great pain, but you are pretending to be relaxed. In this respect, you are really similar to Geto." Yuji angrily shouted, "Stop talking nonsense. Now that Sukuna is dead, your biggest protector is gone. Release these innocent workers." "How can that be possible? I will die if I let them go." Having said this, Kenjaku turned around and glanced at the dozen or so shivering workers behind him, and smiled sinisterly. He said, "So, I had no choice but to form a community with these ants." Long before the decisive battle in Shinjuku, he had already prepared for the worst. Sukuna's death meant that Gojo and even the entire Jujutsu High would come to kill him as soon as possible. At that time, no matter how many curtains he sets up or how many strategies he devises, it will be of no avail. Therefore, he immediately captured these workers and bound their lives to them. Hearing Kenjaku's words, Gojo and the others' expressions changed drastically, and a bad premonition began to emerge in their hearts. "Community? What do you mean?" But Kenjaku smiled casually and said, "Why are you so excited? Of course, I mean it literally. I have made a deep bond with these people through a technique. If they die, I will die too. Conversely, if you kill me, these innocent workers will not be able to escape the same fate. I understand your hatred for me, but Gojo, do you really have the heart to implicate these dozens of hard-working workers? Just a reminder, all of their blood relatives will also be implicated." "What?" Yuji and others were shocked. "Damn Kenjaku, he's so sinister. He has tied his life to that of an ordinary person. He will do anything to achieve his goal. He is a complete lunatic." However, this also indirectly indicates that Kenjaku has run out of options and this is his last resort. But in this case, how should they choose? Should they sacrifice these people, and their families, and kill Kenjaku? Or should they save their lives and let Kenjaku escape so that he can continue to cause chaos in the future? But if they let Kenjaku go, he might continue to use this shameless method in the future. Seeing their hesitation, Kenjaku looked at the dozen or so terrified workers behind him and said with a smile, "If you don't want to die, beg for mercy from them." All of a sudden, the workers began to desperately plead with Gojo and others. They said things like, "I don't want to die, I have elderly parents and young children to take care of." Gojo's eyes slightly narrowed and he said calmly, "Do you think I will let you go if you do this?" He won't make the same mistake he had made in the Shibuya incident again. When it's time to act, he must be decisive. Otherwise, if Kenjaku is allowed to leave, who knows what trouble he will cause in the future. At that time, more people will be implicated. But he has another way, and if possible, he would like to try it. The plan had just come to his mind when Kenjaku guessed Gojo's idea. "You're not planning to use the 0.2-second domain expansion again, are you? I recommend you not to do this. I'm not like those guys like Yago. You can't kill me instantly even if it's a 0.2-second range. And I only need a thought to kill these people." Upon hearing this, Gojo was shocked. It seems that Kenjaku has taken all the variables into consideration. In this case, he has no choice but to use these people's lives to exchange for Kenjaku's. Just when everyone was at a loss, Kenjaku suddenly stopped smiling and said in a deep voice, "Isn't there someone missing? Kazuma." He had done a deep investigation into Kazuma's abilities, but there were still many unknowns. Although Sukuna had died, who would have thought that it was not Gojo but Kazuma to do so? Both Sukuna and his previous self had greatly underestimated his strength. Now he still hasn't shown up. Is he hiding in the dark, planning to give him a fatal blow? Wasn't Kazuma following behind just now? Even the people in Jujutsu High were somewhat puzzled. Mei smiled and said, "There's nothing to be prepared for." Although Sukuna was killed, Kazuma himself was also seriously injured and is in the hospital. Everyone at Jujutsu High. Kazuma was seriously injured? How could they not know? Wasn't he still alive and kicking just now? But soon, some smart sorcerers reacted. Kazuma must be hiding in the dark, looking for an opportunity. Kenjaku looked around cautiously. Kazuma was seriously injured? That's not impossible. After all, it is impossible to kill someone of Sukuna's level without paying a price. especially the last technique Kazuma had used. Even though he was watching from a distance, he could clearly see that the damage to the user's body was extremely serious. But despite this, he had no intention of slacking off in the slightest. After all, Kazuma can hide in space through his strange ability. Speak of the devil, here he comes. Whoosh! Space twisted and a vortex appeared. Before Kazuma could fully appear, Kenjaku immediately closed his eyes. I knew it. The reason why he closed his eyes at the first moment was because he was subconsciously afraid of falling into Kazuma's genjutsu. But when he thought about it carefully, he had the dozens of workers behind him as leverage, so he had nothing to worry about. No matter how outrageous Kazuma's genjutsu is, can he control him to cancel the bond with the workers? 230, Kazuma, let's kill them all. When he opened his eyes again, he found that all the hostages behind him had been rescued. The cursed spirits who were in charge of guarding the hostages had all died in the blink of an eye, and all their heads were separated. However, Kenjaku was not panicked at all. As long as his technique is still in effect, it will be of no use no matter how far away these hostages are. Suture guy, long time no see. Facing Kazuma's ridicule, Kenjaku sneered, we are all smart people. It doesn't matter where the hostages are or who holds them. As long as I want, I can drag them to their grave at any time. Tisk. Kenjaku's shamelessness made Nobara feel a little unhappy. She looked at Kazuma and whispered, are there no items related to Geto-senpai? I have my rusty nails ready. Nobara's voice was not loud, but it was heard by everyone. Kazuma's mouth twitched. Is she planning to use resonance, tetanus edition on Kenjaku's brain? If the cursed energy output is maximized, maybe she can really kill Kenjaku instantly. Unfortunately, I don't. Nobara looked at Gojo. Gojo also shook his head helplessly. It was his fault after all. It would have been great if he had taken Geto's body back with him. This way, there wouldn't be a series of troubles later. On the other side, Kenjaku glanced at Nobara and secretly complained in his heart. Rusty iron nails? Where did this crazy woman come from? However, he is not a fool like Sukuna who keeps evidence everywhere. He also knew something about Nobara's technique. Sukuna had recovered all his strength through his mummified corpse. But that last finger was hidden by Gojo. If he had taken out that finger while he and Sukuna were fighting, he could have let Nobara use resonance at the critical moment. At that time, there would be no need for Kazuma to come on stage. Therefore, from the very beginning, Sukuna's chances of winning were not great. Kenjaku said with a smile, so have you made up your mind? Gojo, you are not the kind of person who hesitates. Your best friend is watching you. I believe your choice will not disappoint him. By the way, I'd like to remind you that once I use the technique, Geto's body will explode. You don't want to see your former best friend die without even a complete body, right? Upon hearing this, Gojo's expression changed slightly. For a moment, he was actually a little overwhelmed. Gojo-sama, please save us. We don't want to die like this. Yes, just agree to him first, maybe there will be other ways. Wow, I don't want to die yet. I've never even held a woman's hand. The hostages behind him also wailed. The pleading voice was heard by everyone. Everyone in Jujutsu High looked unhappy, but Kenjaku's lips slightly curled. This is what he wants. In these 1,000 years, he has already thoroughly studied the weaknesses of human nature. In this way, the chances of Gojo agreeing to leave would be greatly increased. At this moment, a voice sounded. Why don't we just do it directly? It seems worthwhile to exchange the lives of more than 10 hostages for Kenjaku's. If we let him go, he will definitely continue to cause trouble in the future, which will be very annoying. The speaker was Kazuma. Now it was Kenjaku's turn to get nervous, and he raised his voice. You are a member of Jujutsu High after all. Don't forget your mission as a sorcerer. Every word and action you take determines the lives of dozens of people. Kazuma said, oh, so what? He hadn't expected that Kenjaku would actually resort to moral blackmailing. But these things don't work on him. You. Seeing that arguing with Kazuma was useless, Kenjaku aimed at Gojo. Gojo, is this the student you taught? I think he has the potential to be a curse user. Everyone in Jujutsu High went silent, and the hostages behind him looked ashen. If it were them, they would probably give the same answer as Kazuma. But they don't want to die. Gojo had a gloomy face and remained silent, as if he was making some kind of decision. A few seconds later, Gojo patted Kazuma on the shoulder and said expressionlessly, I leave it to you. Kazuma smiled and said, I would have done the same thing even if you didn't tell me. I'm going to kill him today. Gojo was stunned at first, then he smiled with relief. This is good, I don't have to destroy Geto's body indirectly. The other sorcerers also followed Gojo and retreated. They knew that Kazuma would be enough to handle the rest. They also fully agreed with Kazuma's approach. Mei exchanged a meaningful look with Kazuma. She felt that he still had a big trick up his sleeve. Seeing this, Kenjaku's face turned extremely ugly. The plan should have been flawless, but something unexpected happened. He had never expected Kazuma to ignore the hostages he had prepared. Whether it's the Shibuya incident or the culling game, this guy always manages to ruin his plans. Kazuma walked forward slowly, looked at Kenjaku and said sarcastically, I'll tell you a secret. I was the one who ruined your plan in Tombs of Star Corridor. I was the one who called Yago and the others there. How was it? They must have beaten you pretty badly, right? Hearing this, Kenjaku's face suddenly darkened, the cursed emoji in his body was about to explode, and he was filled with rage. It turned out to be him. He should have thought of it earlier. But how did he bring the 4 disaster curses back to life? Could he have the ability to predict the future? In that case, let me try and see how you beat Sukuna. Kenjaku's hand seal had been completed. Domain expansion, womb of profusion. A huge pillar suddenly rose from the ground. The pillar was covered with horrible, twisted human faces. Countless cries of pain were heard everywhere, as if they could directly affect the human mind. 231. Using Kota Amatsukami on Kenjaku. Kenjaku believed that as long as he opened up his own domain, no matter how strong Kazuma was, it would be absolutely impossible for him to kill him instantly. This way, he would have enough time to react and use his technique. Of course, his ultimate goal is to survive, so he won't use that technique until the last moment. Kazuma did not open his domain like Kenjaku, but used all kinds of ninjutsu to launch a crushing attack. Not long after, Kenjaku was seriously injured and half-knelt on the ground. Ahem. Sure enough, we are not on the same level at all. Knowing that he had no chance of winning, he slowly stood up, holding dozens of thin silk threads in his bloody hands. The silk thread was pulled so tight that it seemed like it would break if the slightest force was applied. The other end of the thread was pointed at the hostages. At this moment, they only felt a terrifying chill rushing straight to their heads. It was as if a pair of invisible hands were squeezing their hearts tightly, and a strong sense of death swept through their bodies. Everyone from Jujutsu High looked extremely unhappy. Obviously, Kenjaku was not lying, the lives of these hostages were tied to his. As long as Kenjaku has the slightly desire to do so, he and the hostages will die together. Kenjaku's hoarse voice sounded. Ultimatum, let me leave, otherwise these people's hearts will explode in the next second. And Geto's body will be blown to pieces in an instant. Gojo, you don't want to see the body of your former best friend, broken into pieces, right? Kenjaku had completely figured it out. The hostage threat is totally ineffective in front of Kazuma. This guy looks gentle, but his heart is just as cruel as his. Therefore, he could only continue to use Geto's body to stimulate Gojo. This way, there might still be a chance to escape. Look, you're in a hurry again. However, before Gojo could answer, Kazuma interrupted him. He glanced at the hostages behind him, closing their eyes and preparing to die, then smiled. He glanced at Kenjaku who was tightly grasping the silk thread. Kazuma said, I was just joking with you. Can I really bear to watch these hostages die? I'm very kind, okay. The sudden change of topic stunned everyone present, and they stared at Kazuma in confusion. What happened? Why did he suddenly change his mind? Gojo let out a barely perceptible sigh of relief, with mixed emotions as he didn't know whether to be happy or sad. Mei stared at Kazuma's back. She knew Kazuma too well. It was absolutely impossible for him to change his mind suddenly. So, he must have thought of something. Kenjaku was stunned for a moment, and his ferocious expression calmed down a little. But the silk thread in his hand was still tightly grasped. He was increasingly confused about what Kazuma was trying to do. Could it be that he was just pretending to be cruel before? No matter what his plan is, as long as he has 10 seconds, no matter who it is, they will not be able to find his trace. Thinking of this, Kenjaku's tone gradually became calm. In this case, you and the people from Jujutsu High should retreat 100 meters first. And let me go for 10 seconds, otherwise I will break the thread without hesitation. While speaking, because he was concerned about Kazuma's genjutsu, he kept his eyes on the ground and did not look directly at Kazuma. But it was precisely because of this short moment that Kazuma had the opportunity to get close. Swish! Kazuma arrived 1 meter in front of Kenjaku. This position was just right for him to look into Kenjaku's eyes. For a moment, their eyes met. You. Kenjaku realized that he had fallen into a trap. Although he didn't know how Kazuma had teleported here, he was completely enraged. Just as he was about to use force to tear the thread apart, he found that he couldn't move at all. Kota Amatsukami. A dazzling golden light shone, and a huge scarlet eyeball occupied his vision. Kenjaku looked terrified, his pupils widened and trembling with fear. This is not only physical domination, but also complete control of the mind. Looking at the motionless Kenjaku, Kazuma closed his eyes. His eyes regained the form of Rinnegan, and he breathed a sigh of relief. The complete control of body and mind made Kenjaku his puppet. As expected, it is the most powerful genjutsu. With just a glance, he forcibly controlled Kenjaku and issued an order to stop all actions. But there is a price to pay, which is the extremely long cooldown time. But it doesn't matter, because he will soon be able to complete the last mission and obtain the Rincharingen. This scene made Gojo and others in the distance dumbfounded. Kenjaku was motionless at this moment, the silk thread in his hand was still tightly held in his palm, but his eyes were filled with fear. Yuji asked with a puzzled look on his face, what happened? Nobara guessed, could it be that he was hit by Kazuma's Tsukuyomi and turned into a fool? Kazuma walked to Kenjaku's side, patted his shoulder, and said with a smile, you guessed half right. Seeing that Kenjaku didn't respond, Gojo couldn't help but ask, Kazuma, what on earth did you do? Or, how did you do it? Mei and Kazuma looked at each other, then looked at the hostages behind them who were also confused. She said, the crisis is over, you can leave now. Everyone. Yuji asked, wait, can we really leave now? It seems the root of the problem has not been solved yet. The hostages nodded in unison. Although Kenjaku seems to be under control now, what if he suddenly breaks free and breaks the thread, resulting in a life and death struggle with them? It would be useless for them to leave. Kazuma waved his hand and said, no, the problem has been solved. Kenjaku can never break free. Never, never. Everyone gasped. Is this true? They can believe that Kazuma can control Kenjaku temporarily, but isn't it too far-fetched to say that he can control him forever? However, the next second, Kazuma commanded, cancel the technique. As soon as he finished speaking, Kenjaku obeyed with an expressionless face. The silk thread in his hand slowly disappeared and turned into black smoke. The hostages suddenly felt relaxed, as if the invisible hand holding their hearts had disappeared. Hey, I feel like my breathing has gotten smoother. Me too. That feeling of dying at any moment seems to have disappeared, as if it had never existed. Why does my waist still hurt? Could it be a sequelae? That's because you have kidney deficiency. Seeing the hostages' reactions and Kenjaku's obedient behavior, everyone believed Kazuma's words. The problem seems to have been solved. They were totally at a loss as to what to do, but Kazuma managed to handle it. How did Kazuma do it? 232 Kenjaku's true body. Kazuma smiled and said, do you want to see Kenjaku's true form? Of course. Everyone nodded immediately. As for this cunning and hateful Kenjaku, they have long wanted to see what his true form looks like. Get out of Geto's body. As Kazuma's instructions were conveyed again, Kenjaku began to do as he was told, like a puppet controlled by someone. As the sutures on the forehead were untied, a white brain with 2 rows of teeth was exposed to everyone. Oh. Is this Kenjaku's true form? His body is actually a brain. Isn't this too bizarre? Yeah, the contrast of this super villain is too big, isn't it? Yuji and Nobara exclaimed. The others also stared at Kenjaku in surprise. No wonder he had to open a suture line on the forehead. It turned out it was to facilitate the entry and exit of the main body. What's the difference between this and controlling a mecha? Poor Geto. This is simply a blasphemy to the dead. Yuji suddenly thought of something and gritted his teeth and said, this damn brain had also occupied my mother's body. A terrifying murderous intent emanated from Yuji's body. Likewise, Choso, as the elder brother, wanted to chop Kenjaku into pieces. Because several of his brothers had died in the trap set by Kenjaku, including himself, he was deceived by Kenjaku and almost killed his brother Yuji, making a big mistake. Everyone looked at the motionless brain floating in the air with resentful eyes. Gojo, Yuji, Choso, etc. all seemed to have an irreconcilable feud with Kenjaku. Kazuma sighed. In Jujutsu Kaisen, the most hated one has to be Kenjaku. Both Sukuna and Mahito have to stand aside. After all, most of the disasters in the world of Jujutsu were planned by Kenjaku. For example, the Shibuya incident and the culling game. Looking back, how corrupt were those high-ranking members of the Jujutsu department? Instead of trying to eliminate Kenjaku, they issued an execution order against their own people. But fortunately, he managed to get rid of the harm for the people. After a long silence, Kazuma laughed and said, what should I do? Should I crush him with my foot, or cut the brain into slices and stew it in a hot pot? Slice and stew in hot pot. As expected of Kazuma, he could come up with such a cruel method. Nobara felt like vomiting and said, forget it. Although it does look edible, I can't help but want to vomit when I think of it as the real body of Kenjaku. Yuji said angrily, in any case, we must not let Kenjaku die so easily. At this time, Gojo spoke up, take him back to school first. I want to take care of Geto's body first. Everyone nodded in approval. For now, it is better to let Geto rest in peace. Secondly, they can also think carefully about how to torture Kenjaku. By the way, Kazuma. Gojo asked curiously, Kenjaku should only obey your orders, right? That's right. Kazuma nodded. Can you tell me what the name of the technique you just used is? Gojo seemed very concerned. Genjutsu Kota Amatsukami. Kota Amatsukami? And it's a new genjutsu, and it seems the effect is even more outrageous. Everyone looked at Kazuma as if he were a monster, and couldn't help but sigh at his abnormality. That genjutsu called Tsukuyomi was already strong enough. Now there is another one called Kota Amatsukami that seems even more unreasonable, especially girls like Nobara, Shoko, Yuki, Mei, etc., had an idea suddenly come to their minds. If Kazuma uses this on them, whatever Kazuma wants them to do, they have to do it obediently. It's too scary. Seeing the girls' flushed faces, Kazuma was speechless. He naturally understood what they were thinking. Gojo leaned over to Kazuma's ear and smiled. Kazuma, promise me one thing. When you spar with me, don't use this move. He could accept losing, but he definitely didn't want to be controlled like Kenjaku. That would be so embarrassing. Kazuma told the truth. Actually, this move has a cooldown of 10 years. Gojo immediately looked at him with disdain and said, do you think I will believe it? Although Kazuma's genjutsu was incredible, he had never heard of any technique that required a cooldown period of more than 10 years in all his years. After saying this, he strode away, seemingly in a good mood. Kazuma smiled bitterly and shook his head. No one believes him these days. Tokyo Jujutsu High, Infirmary. The Battle of Shinjuku is over. Megumi is out of danger for the time being, but remains in a coma. With Angel's help, the ancient sorcerer Yorozu who was occupying Tsumaiki's body was wiped out. But Kazuma did not forget the mission of winning over everyone into the Akatsuki. After a few days of hard work, Kazuma successfully invited many sorcerers, including the principal of Tokyo Jujutsu High, Yaga. Kazuma's strength has been fully recognized. Also, the top leaders have been eliminated. The Jujutsu world urgently needs an organization to stand over it. Therefore, the principals of the two schools, Yaga and Gakugenji, expressed their strong support. But the system's mission is to win over all the sorcerers at Jujutsu High. Now, there is only one left. That is, Gojo. These days, Gojo has been thinking about how to deal with Geto's funeral, so Kazuma was not in a hurry to find him. But he was not worried at all that Gojo would refuse to join the Akatsuki, because he has a bargaining chip that Gojo cannot refuse. Inside the meeting room, all the sorcerers from both schools were in place. Gojo pushed the door open, strode to his seat, and then crossed his legs. Yaga, with veins popping out on his forehead, said in a deep voice, "Gojo, you are 8 minutes late again." Gojo waved his hand nonchalantly and said with a smile, "It doesn't matter. Sukuna is dead anyway, so it has nothing to do with me." It seems that Kazuma has something important to announce this time. "How about it, Kazuma, are you ready to fight me for the title of the strongest?" Kazuma shook his head and said, "We can discuss that any time, but I have other things to talk to you about today." Then, Kazuma told everyone about the establishment of the Akatsuki. The sorcerers from both schools were a little nervous. Although they had agreed, whether Kazuma's plan to establish the Akatsuki can be successful depends on Gojo's attitude. If two people disagree and start fighting, it will be troublesome. Just a simple change of ideas can cause a fight. Although Gojo has a carefree personality, everyone knows that he is extremely proud in his heart. 233 Giving Gojo an offer he can't refuse. Will Gojo really accept Kazuma's invitation? The atmosphere in the conference room was somewhat quiet. "Invite me to join." Gojo lowered his head, lost in thought. Why did Kazuma suddenly want to start an organization? He used to think that Kazuma was a person who had no desires. After a long silence, Gojo spoke. "Now that the higher-ups no longer exist, we really need an organization to take charge of the world of Jujutsu. If you, Kazuma, are in charge, I don't have any objection. It's just that." Gojo seemed to be thinking about something, and whispered to Kazuma, "Hey, it's not enough to just invite me, can't you take care of the others as well? Especially Yaga. You know, although he is the strongest fighter in Jujutsu High, the principal is still Yaga after all. Wouldn't it be better to ask him first about this?" But looking at Yaga and the others, they didn't seem to have any surprised expressions on their faces. Kazuma smiled and said, "What if you are the only one missing?" "Huh?" Gojo's eyes widened and he asked, "I'm the only one missing?" He looked at everyone in disbelief, and finally stopped at the two principals, Yaga and Gakugenji. Ahem. Yaga and Gakugenji coughed symbolically, trying to ease the embarrassment. In fact, when Kazuma had approached them about this matter, they were also surprised at first. But without thinking too much, they agreed to Kazuma and expressed their support. They have had enough of the corrupt rule of the upper echelons. If Kazuma were to take over, he would definitely be able to govern the world of Jujutsu well. "You, all agreed?" Gojo turned his gaze towards Yuji and the others. Hee. Yuji and the others smiled awkwardly. Especially Nobara, even though she has always been a bit narcissistic, she couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Come to think of it, she was the first member of the Akatsuki after Kazuma himself, right? At that time, she was bewitched by a ghost. No, she was bewitched by his eyes. She had agreed to Kazuma in a daze. Maybe at that time, Kazuma had used some kind of genjutsu on herself. Thinking of this, Nobara winked at Kazuma frantically. She was trying to remind him not to forget his original promise. Kazuma smiled and nodded in response. He naturally knew that Nobara was reminding him not to forget to give her a position as a senior. Maki was also blushing. Actually, she was the second one to join the Akatsuki. At first, she was extremely disdainful, but there was nothing she could do. Kazuma had given her too much. It can be said that the 8 inner gates had transformed her completely. At first, she had thought that Kazuma was just acting on impulse and could only convince someone like her who had a strong need. Because she hadn't awakened her heavenly restriction at that time, her strength had hit a bottleneck. She wanted to prove herself and take revenge on the Zenin clan, so she had agreed to Kazuma. As for the others, she didn't think Kazuma would find it easy to win them over. But who would have thought that he would actually poach the entire Jujutsu High? Should Jujutsu High be renamed Akatsuki? And judging by Gojo's reaction, he probably won't be able to escape Kazuma's clutches as well. Sooner or later, he will join the Akatsuki. Kazuma doesn't seem like the type of person who is unprepared. If he dares to invite him in public, he must have an offer that Gojo can't refuse. On the other hand, Hakari, Yuta and the others proposed the condition that they hope to have more exchanges and discussions with Kazuma in the future. After all, having a strong man of the same level as Gojo as a guide is a huge temptation for them. How could they refuse? Panda wanted to be Kung Fu Panda. When Kazuma approached him, Panda agreed before he could even finish his words. After looking at the different subtle expressions of the crowd, Gojo's lips twitched. So he is the only one who has not yet agreed. Well, let me think about it. After all, you know, I don't like being constrained. After thinking for a while, Gojo answered seriously. Kazuma said, don't think about it, what if I can revive Geto? As soon as these words came out, everyone present was shocked. If someone else had said this, they wouldn't believe it and would just treat it as a joke. But Kazuma was the one saying it. The 4 disaster curses that had been brought back to life are the best proof. Could Kazuma be able to revive Geto in the same way? But it has been too long since Geto had died. Can he really do it? It took Gojo a long time to come back to his senses. He shook his head and said, forget it. If Geto will be in the same state as Yago and the others, it would be better not to revive him. Through 6 eyes, he could clearly see that the 4 disaster curses were not truly resurrected. They were in a special state between life and death. He didn't want his friend to live in this state after his death. Most importantly, he didn't want Geto to be controlled. Kazuma would definitely not order Geto around like he did to the 4 disaster curses. But he still felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. Additionally, Geto himself would definitely not be willing to do so. Gojo's answer calmed everyone down. They knew exactly what Gojo was thinking at this moment. However, the next second, Kazuma's answer shocked everyone again. I mean a real resurrection. It is naturally different from that of the 4 disaster curses. And after Geto is resurrected, he doesn't need to be controlled by me. By the way, the astral plasma vessel of that year, Amon Riko, can also be resurrected. What? Everyone opened their mouths in disbelief. A true resurrection? Can this really be done? Kazuma actually possesses a technique that can control life and death? Impossible. And he can also revive the astral plasma vessel from that year? Gojo's breathing stagnated, and he spoke hurriedly. Is what you said true? If that's the case, he can join the Akatsuki right now. However, he was still skeptical about the possibility of complete resurrection. It's not that he didn't believe Kazuma, but this kind of thing is just too outrageous. It was beyond his understanding. Moreover, even the astral plasma vessel can be resurrected? Speaking of Riko, it can be regarded as an irreparable regret in his life. Because of his negligence, he had failed to protect her. It's decided. No matter whether Kazuma's can resurrect them or not, he will go to Megami's father more often in the future to learn from him. Shoko was puzzled, her beautiful eyes full of doubts. If I remember correctly, the reason you were able to resurrect the 4 disaster curses was because you had a medium, right? For example, hair, bones, etc. Gojo hasn't cremated Geto's body yet, but it seems like Riko has already been cremated. 234 Rinne Tensei. Previously, Kazuma had found Shoko personally and handed over some things related to the 4 disaster curses. After some effort, she had successfully extracted the cells of the 4 disaster curses. Therefore, she believed that Kazuma's resurrection technique must be inseparable from a medium. Everyone fell silent again, and even Kazuma began to ponder. Yes, Shoko is right. How long has it been since Riko's body was cremated? There's not even any ashes left. Even if Kazuma is very powerful, it's impossible to do this, right? Gojo said, hey, don't look at me. I just did the most normal thing, okay? If he had known that a man named Kazuma who had mastered the art of resurrection would appear in the future, he would definitely not have done so. Instead, he would have placed Riko's body in an ice coffin and preserved it well. Kazuma seemed to have thought of a solution and said, actually, the problem is not that big. Everyone fell into deep thought again. You call this a small problem? The body has been cremated, can it still be saved? In fact, Kazuma was not bragging. It is indeed troublesome if the body is gone, but reincarnation is naturally aimed at the soul. All he needs to do is prepare a new body for Riko. This kind of thing is extremely simple for him. He could just use a wood clone for now. He will slowly look for a suitable body later. The most confused person here was the professional Dr. Shoko. Kazuma smiled and explained, my method does not require a physical medium, but targets the soul. You can understand it as snatching people directly from the belly of the Shinigami. After hearing this, Shoko and the others suddenly understood. This makes sense. Wait, isn't it too far-fetched to snatch someone from the belly of the Shinigami? If this is really possible, then what Kazuma has mastered can no longer be called just a technique, right? Gojo frowned and asked tentatively, such a technique might have some serious side effects, right? Kazuma smiled and said casually, of course there will be backlash, and the conditions are extremely harsh. The person who performs the technique probably won't survive. What? Everyone gasped. What's the difference between this and sacrificing one's own life? So you will die after you revive Geto and Riko. If that's the case, forget it. Gojo shook his head decisively and refused. Kazuma continued, I didn't say I would perform it myself. Kenjaku has done so many evil things that his death is not a pity. Isn't it the most appropriate thing for him to perform this technique? As for how to perform it, I have my own ways. Hearing this, everyone's eyes lit up. Yes, why didn't they think of it? Gojo did not ask any more questions, but turned and left decisively, saying only the following. I'll go get Kenjaku from the secret room. As Gojo left, Kazuma began to prepare. Rinne Tensei is a real forbidden technique. The caster needs to have the Rinnegan to use it. It is no exaggeration to say that Rinne Tensei is far more superior than Edo Tensei. The price for such a heaven-defying ninjutsu is naturally cruel, and it requires the life of the caster. Therefore, it is most appropriate to use Kota Amatsukami to control Kenjaku and let him use Rinne Tensei. Thinking of this, he opened the Long Mist Points Mall and spent a lot of points to buy a one-time consumable. After all, this technique might cause some damage to the Rinnegan, and he didn't want to risk his Rinnegan for this. Fortunately, there are disposable Rinnegans available for purchase in the system mall. Soon after, all the people from Jujutsu High gathered in a small forest. Gojo and the others formed a circle, while Kazuma and Kenjaku stood facing each other. Under Kazuma's control, Kenjaku had returned to Geto's body again. Everyone held their breath and looked at Kazuma nervously. For fear of disturbing Kazuma while he was performing the technique, everyone even restrained their breathing. Shoko's face was filled with worry, and she whispered, "Kazuma, is this really okay? Don't make things difficult for yourself." She was once a trio with Gojo and Geto. But now Kazuma seems to be even more valuable to Jujutsu High. If someone strong enough to deal with Sukuna died because of the backlash of performing a technique, would that be a pity? Gojo nodded seriously and said, "Shoko is right. Put your own safety first. Whether you succeed or not, I will join the Akatsuki." "Yes, yes, yes." Panda nodded frantically. He had not yet learned Kazuma's unique skills. If something unexpected happens because of this incident. Looking at the tense faces of the crowd, Kazuma smiled and said there was no need to worry. After all, he wouldn't be the one to use the technique. As he said this, he spread out his palms. A Rinnegan emitting purple light appeared in the palm of his hand. This is the Rinnegan, a necessary condition for performing that technique. Rinnegan. It sounds awesome. The eyes of the people behind him gradually widened. If they are not mistaken, isn't that the same eye as Kazuma's? Nobara and the others stared with their eyes wide open, saliva unconsciously streaming from the corners of their mouths. They wanted to ask right now, does Kazuma have any extra eyes? After all, they have seen the ability of this thing. They also want to be able to manipulate gravity at will like Kazuma, or create a meteorite or something like that. Gojo suppressed his shock and asked, "Kazuma, how do you plan to use Kenjaku?" This question is also a doubt in the minds of other people. Kazuma thought for a moment and said by analogy, "First, install this Rinnegan onto Kenjaku, just like inserting a USB drive." After hearing this, Gojo and the others became even more confused. Same as inserting a USB drive. Can eyes be used like this? They've never seen this before. Kazuma placed the Rinnegan in Kenjaku's hand. Maybe it was because Kenjaku's willpower was too strong, or there are other reasons. But the moment he came into contact with the Rinnegan, Kenjaku actually began to tremble, and in resistance, he shook the Rinnegan off to the ground. Kazuma frowned and said calmly, "Pick it up." 235, seeing the Shinigami. After picking up the Rinnegan, Kenjaku installed the eyes according to Kazuma's order. During this period, the expression on Kenjaku's face was extremely interesting, but he still couldn't put up a single bit of resistance. In these thousands of years, he has been the one who has occupied or controlled others. But he never thought that one day he would end up being controlled by others. A wood clone appeared beside Kazuma. Considering that it was prepared for Riko, Kazuma did not shape the facial features for this wood clone. Simply put, this is just a human embryo condensed from chakra. After Kenjaku uses Rinne Tensei to summon Riku's soul, this clone should take on Riko's appearance. As for why it is wearing student JK clothes, that was naturally due to Kazuma's rough impression of Riko. It was definitely not simply for the purpose of seeing Riko in JK uniform. After everything was ready, Kazuma took a deep breath and ordered, "Let's start." Kenjaku nodded dully and took 2 steps back under the tense gazes of everyone. Then, he quickly formed a hand seal that no one could understand, and said something shocking. "Rinne Tensei." Then, Kenjaku's eyes began to tremble wildly. 2 seconds passed, but there was no movement. Shoko was a little nervous and asked, did it fail?" Nobara frowned and asked, "Or is it that Kenjaku is struggling before death?" Everyone looked solemn. After all, Kenjaku's hands were shaking wildly, which made them worried. Gojo said in a deep voice, "Kazuma, don't force it." Kazuma did not respond to the concerns, but just smiled lightly. Kenjaku's Rinnegan suddenly emitted a dazzling purple light. Boom! The earth shook. The entire Jujutsu High began to tremble violently. A tall, hideous-looking Shinigami wearing a lavender robe rose from the ground. Then, the zipper on the belly of the Shinigami was automatically opened. 2 small balls of light flew out from the belly of Shinigami. One flew into Geto's body, and the other drilled into the embryo of the clone. After doing all this, the belly of the Shinigami automatically closed. It stared at Kenjaku with its empty dark eyes, and then looked at Kazuma, who was smiling. "What are you looking at? Go back to where you came from." Kazuma immediately controlled Kenjaku to cancel the gesture. Then, the Shinigami returned to the abyss. At this point, Rinne Tensei has been completed. Everyone came back to their senses stupidly. Shoko blinked and asked, "Was it successful?" Nobara rubbed her eyes in disbelief and asked, Just now, what was that thing? The moment that thing appeared, I didn't even dare to breathe. Yuji patted his chest in fear and asked, yeah, could that thing be the legendary Shinigami? In other words, Kazuma really just snatched someone from the belly of the Shinigami. If that's the case, can Kazuma fish out my soul after I die? Wouldn't it be possible to live forever? Everyone glanced at Yuji in silence. But in a sense, it seems to be possible. Gojo only cared about whether Geto had come back. He asked, so, who lives in this body now, Kenjaku or Geto? Suddenly, a puff of black smoke burst out from Geto's forehead. It seemed that they could hear the shrill screams. They knew it was Kenjaku. Soon after, click. That was the sound of the Rinnegan shattering. Kazuma was not surprised. After all, this was a one-time use Rinnegan. It is normal for it to be automatically destroyed after use, which is good news. Because doesn't this mean that the technique has been successfully performed? Kazuma can now clearly tell Gojo that Kenjaku is dead, and the person standing in front of everyone is Geto. At the same time, as the screams disappeared, Gojo and the others noticed the changes. Although this body had its eyes closed and did not speak, the original evil, gloomy atmosphere has dissipated, replaced by the gentleness that belongs only to Geto. Am I not dead? Hiss. My forehead hurts. Geto's eyes were not open yet, but he reached out to touch his forehead first. Gojo's eyes suddenly widened, his trembling pupils represented his excitement at the moment. His expression was exactly the same as that time when he was locked up in the prison realm at Shibuya. The only difference is that the person standing in front of him this time is Geto. The rest of the people were also extremely shocked as they looked at this former special grade sorcerer. Even though they were prepared, they still couldn't hide their shock when Geto was truly resurrected. Although the voice and the appearance are the same, this unique tone belongs only to the gentle Geto, and no one can imitate it. Gojo took a deep breath to calm himself down, then waved his hand. He said with a trembling voice, "Long time no see, Suguru." After hearing his best friend's words, Geto's eyes widened in confusion and he said in disbelief, "Satoru. Wait, and Shoko, Mei, why is everyone here? I'm not dreaming, am I?" Geto, who still didn't know the situation, looked at the familiar people in front of him with a confused face. He lowered his head and checked his body, trying to see what was going on. Why does he have sutures on his head? Why does his body feel a little strange, as if he hasn't used it for a long time? What is going on here? Wasn't he supposed to be dead? But there is no trace of wound on his body. That's right, Geto's memory still remains at the final moment when he was taken out by Gojo. Gojo chuckled and said, "It's okay, just think of it as a dream. But now I'm awake from the dream. I woke up from the dream." Geto muttered to himself, and suddenly a stream of memories flooded into his mind like a spring. He held his head with both hands, and there was some pain between his brows. Seeing this scene, everyone was very happy. Unexpectedly, the dead Geto really came back. However, now was the time for him and Gojo to reminisce about the past, and they did not intend to interrupt. Soon after, Geto had digested the extra memory in his mind. After his death, his body was possessed by Kenjaku, and then Kenjaku used his appearance to plot against Gojo in the Shibuya incident. Now, he has been brought back to life by Kazuma with a magical technique. During this period, he felt angry, self-blame, helpless, and now grateful. Thinking of this, Geto smiled and looked at Kazuma. He said, "I didn't expect that after my death, Jujutsu High would welcome a genius like you. On behalf of the entire Jujutsu High, thank you." Although Kenjaku is now dead, he shared Kenjaku's memories. In the past, it was this man who had brought him back to life who had foiled Kenjaku's schemes many times. At the critical moment, he turned the tide. Kazuma waved his hand and said, "If you want to thank me, join the Akatsuki." Geto nodded in agreement without even thinking about it. Although he still didn't know what Akatsuki is, he would not hesitate at all regarding this request made by his savior. The most important thing is, although he had just met Kazuma, he knew that Kazuma was definitely from Jujutsu High. At this moment, Shoko suddenly exclaimed, "Change. It has changed." 236, Geto and Riko. What Shoko was holding in her arms was the wood clone. Everyone looked over. Just now, 2 souls had flown out of the Shinigami's stomach. Since Geto woke up first, the remaining one was undoubtedly the former astral plasma vessel, Riko. At this moment, the faceless clone had gradually transformed into the appearance of Riko. Seeing this magical scene, everyone couldn't help but marvel at its wonder. Kazuma nodded silently in his heart. It can be seen that this embryo has begun to take shape. He was originally a little worried about whether this clone embryo would be compatible with Riko's soul. After all, although Riko was recognized as an astral plasma vessel by Tengen, she did not seem to have any cursed energy. But right now, it seems that the two are surprisingly compatible. In the crowd, Nobara whispered, "By the way, Yuki-senpai was also an astral plasma vessel, right? So what kind of personality does this astral plasma vessel have?" Yuki smiled and said nothing. She lived only for herself. What did astral plasma vessel and Tengen have to do with her? Moreover, she didn't know much about this astral plasma vessel. Kazuma knew that Riko was a girl who appeared lively on the surface but was actually extremely sensitive on the inside. An unfortunate person who had been burdened with the fate of being the astral plasma vessel since childhood. This is one of the most regrettable things in the world of Jujutsu Kaisen. Gojo joked, well, how should I put it? She's probably a wealthy, arrogant, and somewhat unreasonable young lady. Riko has also been resurrected. Geto was dumbfounded at this moment. He looked at Kazuma and asked. A pleasant voice reached everyone's ears. Who said that I am arrogant and unreasonable? Everyone turned around suddenly. Riko slowly opened her eyes, and then leaned on Shoko's shoulder in a daze. Hey, why are you two here too? The two people she was referring to were naturally Gojo and Geto. After a few seconds of silence. Riko covered her temples in fear and shook her head frantically. Don't kill me, I don't want to die. I don't want to be assimilated with Tengen. I just want to live with Misato. Like Geto, her memory still remains at the moment of death. That was when he was shot in the head by Toji and fell to the ground in her dying moments. A feeling of guilt filled the hearts of Gojo and Geto. Yes, she is just an ordinary girl after all. But because of their negligence back then, she suffered so much pain. Fortunately, everything is over. Gojo and Geto spoke at the same time. It's okay, Kazuma has saved you. Shoko continued to gently comfort Riko. That's right, Riko-san. From now on, you just need to live for yourself. As if she had thought of something, Shoko added with a smirk, after all, this body of yours was given to you by Kazuma. Even if you want to assimilate with Tengen, he won't agree. Kazuma nodded. Shoko was right. But Tengen probably doesn't have the courage to speak up. The body was given by Kazuma. As her emotions gradually stabilized, Riko looked at Kazuma with watery eyes. Is he the one who saved her? Then Riko looked down at her body again. She found that there was nothing unusual in her body except a gentle force. And, this JK suit seems very similar to what she wore when she was in school. Thinking of this, Riko blushed and looked at Kazuma. She said in a mosquito-like voice, thank you. Gojo and Geto looked at Riko with disbelief. It seemed as if they were wondering, how could this extremely arrogant young lady actually have such a shy moment? Shoko looked at Geto and Riko and said, you two have just been resurrected. You must be very weak, take a rest today. But just in case, remember to come to the infirmary for a checkup tomorrow. The others nodded in agreement with Shoko's words. Taking in so many magical things at once, even they felt dizzy. Not to mention, an ordinary person. So, it's better to take a break. Anyway, there is still a lot of time, so they have plenty of time to catch up. Gojo said, Shoko is right. I will take Geto to find Yaga first. Geto was stunned for a moment, then said with an apologetic look in his eyes, I was too stupid and ignorant back then. So it's indeed necessary for me to go and confess my guilt to him. Satoru, do you think he will beat me up? Gojo said, haha, don't worry. Even though he has a stern face, he actually has a softer heart than anyone else. Just admit your mistake later. Gojo put one hand in his pocket and put the other hand casually on Geto's shoulder as he walked towards the principal's office. This scene is the same as before. By the way, Kazuma, remember to reserve a good position for me in the Akatsuki. After all, I am the strongest, right? It's best to have a high position and less work. Gojo turned around and said with a smile. It's fine if he wants a high position, but he also wants less trouble. Kazuma, you must not spoil him. Shoko lit a cigarette, complained disdainfully, and left for the infirmary with Riko. Riko once again thanked Kazuma solemnly, and then left with Shoko and the others. Before leaving, it seemed like she was hesitant to speak. Forget it. Given her personality, if she doesn't tell me now, she will definitely come to me in the future. In this way, Geto has also successfully joined the Akatsuki. In this way, the requirements of the long-term mission should be fully met, right? Kazuma did not rush to leave, but stood there, silently waiting for the system's reward. 237, Kazuma vs. Gojo. Ding! Congratulations to the host for completing the long-term mission, winning over all the high-level sorcerers, and replacing the corrupt high-level officials. Ruard, Rincharingen. As the system's cold voice fell, Kazuma closed his two eyes uncontrollably. Then, he felt a sudden wriggling sensation. Not only was there no pain at all, he even felt a little itchy. Suddenly, an extremely dazzling light shot out from the center of his eyebrows, instantly turning the originally yellow sky into an extremely pale color. This magical scene made the people from Jujutsu High who had just left stand there in a daze, looking up at the sky with solemn expressions. Everyone felt an inexplicable sense of fear in their hearts, as if the owner of the white light could control them in an instant if he wanted to. Yuji supported the newly resurrected Geto, looked at Gojo and asked, looking at the direction, it should be Kazuma, right? Gojo-sensei, are you sure you still want to spar with Kazuma? Kazuma's strength seems to have no limit at all. No one knows how strong he is now. Gojo removed his solemn gaze, waved his hand, and said with a casual smile, it doesn't matter. After all, I am the strongest. Soon after, the white light covering the sky dissipated, and a vertical scarlet pupil appeared in the center of Kazuma's eyebrows. 9 tomos were distributed throughout the pupils. This is the Rincharingen. Kazuma felt the eye growing from the center of his eyebrows and muttered to himself. Having watched Naruto, he knew very well how overpowered these eyes were. In the entire Naruto world, only the ancestor of chakra, Kagaya, has this eye. It is truly the most powerful dojutsu, possessing numerous unique and powerful skills such as Amenemika. Most importantly, with Rin Sharingan, one can use infinite Tsukuyomi. It can be said that now, as long as Kazuma wants, he can immediately project his pupil power onto the moon, making the entire world sink into a beautiful dream world. But of course he wouldn't do that. Now, he has obtained the strongest eye and can walk freely in this world. In a very good mood, he decided to find Mei Mei and the other girls. Whoosh! A vortex appeared and Kazuma disappeared into the darkness. A few days later, in the forest where the sister exchange event was conducted, all the sorcerers from the two schools gathered together and sat in a row. All of them looked forward with anticipation. Yuji shouted loudly, "Go, Gojo-sensei, come on. Go, Kazuma, come on." Shoko smiled and said, "So, who do you think will win? Raise your hands if you think Gojo will win." At once, Geto, Yuta, Yuji and others raised their hands. Seeing this, Shoko's lips curled up in an intriguing arc, and she nodded with satisfaction. It seems that Gojo has a very high reputation. So, raise your hands if you think Kazuma will win. In an instant, Mei Mei, Nobara, Yuji and the others all raised their hands. Obviously, there is a certain someone who supports both Gojo and Kazuma. Yuji was a little embarrassed and laughed. It doesn't matter who wins. After all, they both are a member of Jujutsu High anyway. Hearing this, everyone nodded slightly. Yuji is right, first there was Gojo, then now there is Kazuma. With these two strong men in charge, Jujutsu High has won. There was no tense atmosphere at all, because everyone knew that both of them would stop when they would reach the limit. Tisk. Nobara raised her chin and said proudly, "Just wait and see, Kazuma will definitely win." That's right, Kazuma will definitely win. Riko, who had completely integrated into life at Jujutsu High, looked at Kazuma with burning eyes. Kazuma not only gave her a second life, but also gave her this body. He had also promised to take her to find Misato afterwards. Therefore, this also led to her current respect and gratitude towards Kazuma. At this time, Panda looked at Kashimo who was standing next to him with a cold face. He said with a mean smile, "Didn't someone say that they wanted to challenge the strongest? What? Are you going to let it sit now? You've been holding back on your ultimate move for 400 years and you're not going to show it." Panda, who was beaten up by Kashimo in the culling game naturally would not miss any opportunity to take advantage of him. Faced with Panda's ridicule, Kashimo's cold expression was out of control. That's right. Ever since he had seen how Kazuma had killed Sukuna, he had given up on the idea of challenging him. Although he is very arrogant, he is not a fool. The difference in strength between the two sides is too great, and the mythical beast Amber that he is so proud of may be a fatal killer move to others. But in front of Kazuma, it might not even be a threat. Just his ability to evade any harm is enough to make him unable to do anything. Therefore, there is no point in challenging Kazuma now. But this did not make him depressed. Instead, it made him even more excited. 400 years ago, he was invincible. 400 years later, a target appeared that he could pursue. This is a great thing for Kashimo. He believed that with his talent, he would definitely be able to catch up with Kazuma in the future, or even beat him. But then again, isn't this damn panda too arrogant? Relying on Kazuma's protection, he almost rode on his head and peed on his. Didn't he just beat him up in the beginning? Why is he holding such a grudge? Kashimo gnashed teeth, glanced at the people around him and said in a cold voice, "It should be okay for me to beat up Panda, right?" Yuta and Hakari looked at each other, then smiled and shook their heads without stopping him. They did not see any murderous intent in Kashimo's eyes. Moreover, Panda is the son of the principal Yaga, who is also Gojo's teacher. Therefore, Kashimo didn't dare to take any heavy-handed approach. Yuta then spoke up, politely saying, "I would like to spar with you later." Kashimo raised his eyebrows slightly, weighed the matter in his mind, and nodded calmly. He could feel that Yuta was very strong, but, in his opinion, no one in the entire Jujutsu High could be his opponent except Gojo and Kazuma. In the distance, Kazuma and Gojo stood facing each other. Gojo was still stretching his body as usual, with fighting spirit flashing in his eyes. Kazuma dozed off listlessly and looked at Mei Mei, who had a rosy complexion, in the crowd with a smile. "Let me make the first move." Gojo stopped stretching, took off the black blindfold, and said with a smile. Kazuma nodded and said, "Come on." As soon as he finished speaking, a huge purple ball condensed behind Gojo. Hollow purple. Gojo is going all out right away. 238, happy ending. This was the first time Gojo was fighting against Kazuma. The battle between the two was not as fierce as everyone had imagined, but it was still very exciting. Both sides were very upright and used just the right amount of power. During this period, Gojo used his special skills. Blue and red covered Kazuma. Facing Gojo's attack, Kazuma performed many dazzling ninjutsu and easily resolved it. Everyone was stunned and exclaimed that it was magical. Half an hour later, Gojo fell from the sky, and breathed a sigh of relief. He looked at Kazuma as if he were a monster. "No more fighting, it's boring." After saying that, he took Geto away. Everyone. Are they in such a hurry to leave? Nobara laughed and gossiped. You think, where can two grown men go? Don't let your imagination run wild. Mei tapped her head gently and smiled. If I'm not mistaken, they have already made an appointment to travel to Malaysia with Nanami. Yuji came back to his senses and said, so, who won this battle? Nobara curled her lips and said, do you even need to ask? Don't forget that Kazuma still has many techniques that he hasn't used. After hearing this, everyone thought about it for a while, and then nodded in agreement. Indeed, in this battle, Gojo had already used all the necessary moves. Kazuma obviously has a lot of hidden tricks up his sleeve, for example, those too hard to defend against genjutsus. Such a result is unexpected, but also very reasonable. Mei said, okay, let's all go. The cursed spirits have been scared away these past 2 days, so let's all relax and have a good time. If you need to go shopping, go shopping. If you need to sleep in, sleep in. It doesn't matter what you do. Everyone cheered and started discussing where to go for fun. The next day, early morning, Jujutsu High Boys' dormitory. Kazuma, who was sleeping on the bed, suddenly wanted to sneeze. In desperation, he had to pry open his eyelids with difficulty. Then his eyes widened in disbelief. What caught his eye was a pair of fair and tender buns, half of which were hidden under the clothes. Moving his gaze upwards, he discovered that Nobara was pinching her hair with her left hand and scratching her nose with a sly look. In her right hand, she held a nail containing cursed energy, ready to give Kazuma a crisp resonance wake-up service at any time. After noticing that Kazuma had opened his eyes, Nobara's body stiffened immediately. Her hand stopped moving, and her eyes changed from cunning to panic. Nobara immediately rolled off Kazuma's body and said with an awkward smile, haha, you're awake. Don't get me wrong, I just wanted to wake you up. As if afraid that Kazuma wouldn't believe her, she raised her hand and added, Mei and Shoko asked me to do this. Kazuma glanced at the nail hidden behind her back, and the corner of his mouth twitched. He asked, were you going to use resonance to gently wake up my sleeping mind? It was discovered. Nobara's face turned red and she was speechless for a moment. Tell me, what do you want from me so early in the morning? Kazuma asked as he put on his coat. Early in the morning? The sun is already shining, okay. Nobara complained wildly in her heart. Although she was complaining in her heart, she said with an aggrieved look on her face, didn't we agree on that when we got together at the pub yesterday? Everyone is waiting for you outside the door. Kazuma's hand holding the toothbrush froze. He suddenly realized something. Wait for me for 5 minutes. Hehe, just don't be lazy. Seeing Kazuma remembering, Nobara breathed a sigh of relief, humming a song as she pushed the door open. 10 minutes later, Kazuma opened the door. He saw that the door was already crowded with college students. He could also hear people whispering that his alcohol tolerance was poor and that this was his only weakness. Ah, here you are. Nobara came up immediately, put her hand on Kazuma's shoulder and said with a smile, come on, help me find Sister Kaori. You said this last night when you were drunk. You are the leader of the Akatsuki after all. Don't go back on your word. However, what Kazuma cared about was the word drunk. After some recollection, he finally remembered. It turned out that last night, after he had gotten drunk, these people had taken the opportunity to make some demands from him, and he had agreed to all of them. Just as he was about to speak, he was interrupted by a voice. No, Nobara-san. Shoko walked up quickly, and proudly waved the phone in her hand. She said with a smile, the rooms in the pub have been booked, so Kazuma should belong to me today. Long before, she had wanted to have a drink and talk with Kazuma alone, but she never had the chance. Now that she had finally gotten this opportunity, she naturally wouldn't let it slip away. But a delicate voice sounded. Riko mustered up her courage, and put her hands on her hips. She retorted, if I remember correctly, Kazuma promised me to go find Misato first. Nobara and Shoko were stunned at first, then they looked at Kazuma, as if asking him to make the decision. Is this really what they had discussed yesterday? This is too unreasonable, they are all scheduled on the same day. He had already agreed, so he can't refuse, right? But he is only one person. Maybe he can. The idea had just emerged in his mind when it was simultaneously extinguished by Nobara, Shoko, and Riko. Using a clone is out of the question, it must be you in person. Humph. That's right, don't try to fool around. At this time, Panda in the crowd couldn't help but speak. Aren't you being unreasonable? I was the first one. Everyone turned around and stared at Panda with unfriendly eyes. Although he felt very oppressive, Panda still withstood the pressure and showed no intention of backing down. He had finally managed to get Kazuma to promise to teach him the 8 inner gates last night when he was drunk. How could he possibly give up such a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? Kashimo, who had remained silent the entire time, also said calmly, you agreed to simply spar with me in Taijutsu. Kazuma asked, I agreed to you too. Everyone nodded. Mai took her sister Maki's hand and smiled meaningfully. She asked, Kazuma, how about going shopping with me and my sister? I think you must understand the value of sisters. Maki, who was standing next to her, blushed and pulled her sister's arm, signaling her to shut up. Seeing that the competition was getting more and more intense, Nobara simply said, "It's no use bickering, there's only one Kazuma. In that case, how about letting Mei-Mei-sensei arrange it? I think everyone has no objection, right?" Everyone looked at each other, then nodded helplessly. Hee. Mei-Mei crossed her arms and chuckled with dissatisfaction. After a long silence, she finally spoke. "How about this? Kazuma can accompany Nobara to look for her sister during the day. With Kazuma's current strength, he can turn the entire Tokyo upside down in one day. Finding someone is easy. Nobara, you should have no objection, right?" Mei-Mei looked at her with a sneer. Nobara felt a chill on her back. Although she was a little dissatisfied, she still nodded in agreement. Mei-Mei continued, "In the evening, he can go to the izakaya with Shoko." Hearing this, Shoko's eyes flashed with joy and she gave Mei-Mei a look of gratitude. Seeing Shoko's triumphant look, Mei-Mei sneered again, "It would be better if you two just drank." Kazuma coughed awkwardly, then quickly held Mei-Mei's hand to express his feelings. Shoko blinked and pretended to be innocent. Of course we will just drink, what else can we do?" Mei-Mei ignored Shoko and continued to make arrangements. Tomorrow during the day, Kazuma will go to help Riko find her babysitter Misato, and go shopping with Maki and Mai at night. The day after tomorrow, he'll beat up Panda and fight Kashimo. It's arranged. Do you have any comments? Riko muttered quietly, "Kuroe is not a babysitter, she is a relative." Panda's eyes lit up and he said, "No problem. I'll take the beating, as long as I can learn the 8 inner gates." Kashimo said, "Tisk, if only Taijutsu is used, it's unclear who will win." Seeing that everything was arranged, Mei-Mei let go of Kazuma's hand and said with a fake smile, "The schedule is quite full, are you satisfied, Chief?" Satisfied, of course satisfied." Then, he leaned close to Mei-Mei's ear and whispered in a voice that only the two of them could hear, "Then will you still support me?" Mei-Mei was stunned at first, then her eyebrows slightly raised and she opened her red lips. "Of course."
Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I have decided to create a collection of fanfiction novels in audiobook format. If you would like to access the collection, you can purchase it through one of the following platforms. Patreon or Ko-Fi, you will find both links in the description. After completing your payment, you will automatically receive a link to a private Telegram channel that has a great collection of fanfiction audiobooks in audio format. This is a one-time payment that grants lifetime access to the existing collection. Please note that the collection is continuously expanding. I regularly add new audiobooks over time, so the library keeps growing. If you would like to update a novel or add a new one, you must subscribe to my Patreon. Depending on the tier you select, you will be able to request a specific number of chapters weekly, which I will then produce in audiobook format.